Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Deku summoned warriors from the past, part 1. If you guys enjoy this what if and want to see part 2, comment down below and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content. And leave a like and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. So let's start the video. Not all men are created equal. I learned that the hard way when I was just a child. Izuku think to himself while a 5-year him is standing in front of a boy who was trembling. Opposite of him was Katsuki Bakugo and a few others. I won't let you hurt him, Kachin. What do you think you can do? You're just a worthless, quirkless weakling, Bakugo says while sparking up a few explosions from his hands. He and the others then start attacking me and mocking me all the while. Once they were done, I was laying on his back with bruises and burns on my body. I still want to be a hero despite what everyone else said, but I often wondered what that could mean. Izuku thinks, now looking about 9 or 10 years old. I was walking back home sadly after another round of bullying from Kachin and the others in our class, though sometimes I question what it means to be a hero. For most it is all about the use of their quirk and saving lives through using that. For others it's about fighting villains with their quirk again. But don't some heroes don't fight on a front line? There are plenty who fight by making strategies to defeat villains. Maybe I could be a hero like that. I've been analyzing heroes since I was little. Maybe I can turn what I've learned into being a strategy hero. I just know I have to prove what I can do in some way. In a different part of Japan, a short bald doctor was analyzing a strange glowing cube. Sir, the master is still barely responsive. I doubt he'll ever be able to be his best again, the black misty villain Kurogiri said with Tamura standing behind him. The doctor nods before saying, a quirk may not, but if what I suspect this cube is capable of, we might be able to. The doctor demonstrated by using the energy of the cube to restore a broken machine, as well as restoring a damaged plant. Well, what are you waiting for? Please, heal sensei, Tamura says desperately. The doctor looks to the boy, then the cube again. He sighs before agreeing. The doctor, Kurogiri, and Tamura went to a different room to meet the injured man inside. The top of the man's head was destroyed and was hooked up to multiple machines to help him breathe. This was all for one. Master, your injuries following your last fight with All Might are too great to heal with the science and quirks we have access to. But with this might be able to heal you, the doctor says to the slightly responsive man. AFO turned to the doctor and with a raspy breath says, do it. With a nod, the doctor set the cube on his master's chest. When it didn't activate right away, the mad scientist attached a few cords to it and ran some power through it. The cube then started to light up more and more. With the three observing, their eyes widened and were hoping the master would be revived. Suddenly the cube starts to float and glows brighter and brighter. Suddenly a bright flash covers the area, blinding all who could see. When the light fades, the cube is gone. But AFO was not restored. Instead, floating above the group was a woman with ghostly pale skin and hair. She had a strange bow and fox-eared combo above her hair and was wearing barely anything over her chest and lower body. She had a teasing smirk on her face. But what was eye-catching was the massive tentacles and futuristic cannons around her. So, were you the ones who brought me here? The woman said with an unsettling distortion to her voice. Most of them are unsettled by this strange entity, but Tamura stepped up first to say something. Who are you, and can you help heal my master? The strange woman looks to her side and sees AFO laying on the bed with machines attached. She hums before saying, you may call me Observer. Not that it will matter much longer. It is time for we sirens to see what this world has to offer. She then points her cannons all around and unleashes beams all around her, vaporizing all the humans in the room. With that done, she looked around before her smile grew. Now then, let us begin. With a snap of her fingers, portals opened around her, summoning her fellow high-ranked sirens. The six then combine their energy and unleash a blast that destroys not just the hidden building but parts of the mountain all around them. Suddenly around the world, more portals open and various siren ships appear out of them. Some of the ships start flying around and blasting the cities near the ocean, while some high-ranked sirens suddenly appeared above the cities and start attacking the people. In Mustafa, a few sirens start shooting all around. Izuku happened to be walking through the city and saw the sirens arrive. After a few shots he saw that a few people are trapped. He hyperventilates a bit before running to those who are trapped, lifting up parts of the rubble to help them. With the sirens, Endeavor, Ryukyu, and over a dozen other heroes are engaging the invading aliens. But they are having no luck getting through the enemy's shields and kept getting blasted back. Who the hell are you? Endeavor shouts with a beam hole through his stomach. Purifier floats up with her hammerhead shark rig behind her. She starts laughing at all of them before saying, name's Purifier, and I'm going to have fun ripping all of you apart. She turns her cannons and drones to the heroes and starts firing at them. Suddenly, All Might appears and punches the side of the woman to send her back. He is breathing heavily, but he still has enough energy to say, there is no need to fear. Why? Because I am here. He then leaps up and attacks the sirens a few times, with some shards and cubes falling when he breaks some gear. But even he can't defeat all of the sirens gathered. He gets blasted back from a few tester clones who start to mock him as well. You are here. What good does that do when you can't even compare? 𝗧𝗂 was running down an alleyway when he found a cube on the ground. He reached out and picked it up. It didn't do anything, but he was still curious. Suddenly he saw All Might get blasted back and hears the sirens mocking his hero. 𝗧𝗂 then shakes out of his fear and runs to the number 1. He then gets under All Might's arm and tries to help him up. "Oh, a courageous young one, huh? Well, it won't matter soon," Tester says while pointing her guns at the two. She charges up and fires at the hero and boy. 𝗧𝗂 then turns and closes his eyes, sure that this would be the end. But the only thought going through his mind was, I wish I could have saved more people. Suddenly the cube he grabbed lit up and with a flash the beams were stopped. From the smoke, a few shots were heard ringing out. The shots couldn't be seen, but all of the sudden 6 tester clones were destroyed. "What?" Purifier says before getting struck by a round fired at her. From the smoke in front of All Might and 𝗧𝗂 was a very tall woman with fox ears and 5 black fox tails behind her. Her eyes are a piercing sapphire color, and her black hair is in a long ponytail. For clothing, she is wearing a kimono-like garb with samurai armor on parts of it, which is off on left arm and showing off her impressive bust with a surashi tied around it, and the waist is also exposed with just a large bow in front covering her private areas, as well as having black stockings that cover her legs, with tall 𝗬𝗬 sandals on her feet. In her left hand is a massive sword. She has a smile that just radiates confidence in herself. Behind her body is a setup with 10 large gun barrels set in pairs around her, as well as a variety of other guns scattered across the mechanical setup. That is when she speaks with a confident tone. "Well now, it seems we have some targets to face off with." Battleship 𝐻𝐸 reporting, Commander. With that said, she leaps up and engages the sirens with both sword and gun. It takes about 15 minutes, but 𝐻𝐸 manages to run off the high-rank siren and defeat all of the clones. But shots are still being fired from the ocean, and the Coast Guard and JSDFM is having little luck against the enemy. Even the heroes like 𝐬𝐭𝐴 and 𝐺𝐴ngorka are useless, as even when they get on the ships, there is no one to stop and they can barely make a dent in the metal of the ships. While 𝐻𝐸 was fighting, 𝗧𝗂 stayed and helped a few of the heroes and others before falling back a ways. "What you did was reckless, young man, but it was still impressive. You have the heart of a hero," All Might said to 𝗧𝗂 when they all had a moment to catch their breath. Then 𝗵𝘃 begrudgingly acknowledged 𝗧𝗂's efforts as well, as did a few of the other heroes in the area. Ryukyu was about to ask why he didn't use his quirk when 𝐻𝐸 arrived and walked up to 𝗧𝗂. She then saluted before saying, "The main force of the sirens is still out there, sir. We need to take the fight to them." 𝗧𝗂 looks around before asking if she was talking to him. With a smile, 𝐻𝐸 nods before saying, "You were able to call to me and summon me to this world, even though I had never been built by this nation long ago." This shocks everyone, wondering what the woman could be talking about. 𝗧𝗂 tries to process this, but he can't. 𝐻𝐸 hums a bit before saying, "Maybe this could help you summon more." She reaches into her sleeve and pulls out a handful of cubes to show the group. She then tells him to remember what he thought of when he summoned her. 𝗧𝗂 looks at the battleship woman like she is crazy, but he grabs 2 of them and thinks back again. Nothing happens for a bit and 𝗧𝗂 gets discouraged. 𝐻𝐸 then pulls the boy into a hug before saying, "Don't overthink it, Commander. Just feel it." 𝗧𝗂 is shocked by the close proximity, but the woman's voice helps to calm his heart and he can remember the emotions that he felt when he summoned 𝐻𝐸. The cubes light up and before long, 2 more women appear before the group. While the heroes are shocked at what is happening, the 2 new arrivals speak up. The youngest looking of the 2 was a girl with white hair and bright red eyes and wearing an unusual sailor outfit. On top of her head are mechanical pieces that look like horns, and at her side are a set of cannons and 2 triple torpedo launchers. In her right hand, though, is a large sword. Improved Fubuki class destroyer, Ayanami. I'm also known as the Demon. The older of the 2 new summons has a crisp white uniform on, with dog-like ears on top of her head. The uniform, while not showing skin, seems to accentuate the woman's impressive bust. On her legs are black garter belt stockings with white heels on her feet. At her sides are what appear to be ship sections with 6 double-barreled cannons on them. Behind her back is a katana. The woman then speaks up saying, "Ara, what a cute commander. Please allow your big sister 𝗃𝗃 to take good care of you from now on." She then walks up and gives 𝗧𝗂 a hug. 𝗧𝗂 is still not sure how to process all of this, but 𝐻𝐸 helps him. With a smack of her sword to the top of 𝗃𝗃's head, she then says, "We have more pressing matters to deal with. 2 cubes left, Commander, make them count." 𝗧𝗂 shakes out of the pleasant scent and comfort of 𝗃𝗃. "Right, hang on," 𝗧𝗂 says. He grabs the 2 cubes and reaches out again. This time only 1 ship appears. It is another fox woman, but instead of black hair, she has silver hair and is wearing a blue kimono. Said kimono is draped below her shoulders, with her cleavage on clear display. On her legs she is wearing white stockings with her 𝐻𝐸𝐽. Floating at her right side are a trio of katanas, and on her left appears to be a runway of 𝐒𝐵𝐵 called Shinano, an aircraft carrier of the Sakura Empire. Please allow the third ship of the Yamato class to guide you forward upon the right path. Izuku is just stunned by what is in front of him and can't build a sentence. Kiai notices this and puts a hand on his shoulder. Commander, there are enemies out on the waters. What would you have us do? Fight to defeat the enemy. Destroy all in our path. Izuku finally snaps out of it and thinks on what she said, before saying, no. You are going to fight to save everyone from these strange invaders. The heroes can handle evac on land. We need to fight back against the threat at sea. I think. Kiai nods before agreeing with the boy who summoned her. She gives the orders to the three gathered before they head out for the water. While shocking at first, the heroes went along with Izuku's plan and orders. You did well, young man. We'll handle things here. Get yourself to a shelter. Endeavor compliments, then orders the young man. Izuku though shakes his head before saying, no, I have to see them through. I don't know why, but I feel I have to. With that he runs off toward the water to see what will happen. Out at sea, 𝐬𝐭𝐴 and a few other maritime heroes have been badly injured or killed. 𝐬𝐭𝐴 is missing an arm, and 𝐺𝐬𝐴 has a hole in his stomach. Right as a few of the high-rank clones are about to finish them off, 𝐻𝐴𝐺𝐸 and 𝐼𝐴NAMI come out blasting and slicing through the enemy. They then land on the water and skate around firing blast after blast at the siren ships in port. Kiai and Shinano are a bit behind them, but they also contribute to the battle and cut down their own number of siren clones and ships. Around the world a few others awaken ships from the past, like a pair of men at Pearl Harbor. Both had family who had been stationed there long ago, and both had managed to awaken American ships. Marcus Miller, an African-American soldier at the harbor, awakened Arizona and the destroyer siblings of Downs and Cassin, while a National Parks worker, David Rasmussen, helped Miller to evacuate others. He awakened the Spirit of Enterprise herself alongside North Carolina and Minneapolis. A young girl in Kale called out and Bismarck answered and helped to bring forth Prince Eugene and Z-23. In York and London, two people called out and summoned Hood with Javelin and Ark Royal supported by Fortune. At Norfolk, a young captain of a cruiser called out while trying to direct her crew, and she summoned Long Island, Colorado, and Thatcher. Even some from Italy, Russia, France, and China were summoned. Near Cure, a young woman managed to reach the Spirit of Tehu, and with the Phoenix Carrier's help, she summoned 𝐈𝐧 and 𝐈𝐺𝐻𝐸. And after a stellar and brutal battle, they were able to summon Yukikaze and Megami to give them some smaller ship firepower. With the first battle of this new war winding down, and Izuku standing at the ocean as the girls he asked to protect everyone fought on, he couldn't believe what had all happened. With Kiai and Shinano using their strength and rigs to help lift up a few of the injured heroes, 𝐼𝐴NAMI could start collecting the cubes that had fallen all around the sea from the battle. 𝗂𝐴𝐺𝐸 though went back to Izuku for two reasons. Aren't you going to help them? Izuku asked when 𝗂𝐴𝐺𝐸 returned to his side. She gave a gentle smile before saying, I think it would be best to have at least some protection for our young commander, and I'm quite capable of that myself. But also, I think we could use a few more to aid us. At saying that, she pulled out two more cubes and offered them to Izuku. He was a bit surprised, but he did see her point. Izuku took the cubes in hand and tried to call out to whatever ship may be on the other side. It took a few minutes, but he eventually called two more ships into their world. The first was a mint green-haired cat girl with a blunt sword that seemed to have a variety of tools attached, and with a mouse she introduced herself. Naya, Commander, it's good to see you. Repair ship Akashi reporting for duty. Izuku was surprised, especially with how short the girl was. The second was a woman who could rival 𝗂𝐴𝐺𝐸 with the warm demeanor and friendly appeal. She was slightly shorter than 𝗂𝐴𝐺𝐸, with horns on the top of her head and her black hair in pigtails. Her clothing appeared to be similar to a schoolgirl uniform, with her breasts being accentuated by the sweater she was wearing. Around her body was a rig similar to 𝗂𝐴𝐺𝐸's but much smaller, and with a playful voice she said to Izuku, Hey, I'm Nagara. Commander, have you been anticipating my arrival? While looking at him like he was a cute little brother. Izuku blushed again, but he coughed before regaining a bit of his composure. Can you two go out and help the others with recovering people out there? The two looked out and saluted before heading out. Akashi would go to the various ships, including the Oki Mariner, and repair the damage that the sirens had caused, while Nagara helped to recover those who were injured or dead. She could not carry as much compared to Kiai and Shinano, but she was faster and made good time on her trips. With the first battles ended and the cleanup and recovery being finished, the world could begin to look around and take stock of what had happened. While most were shocked at heroes like All Might and Stars and Stripes getting knocked around by the invaders, more were looking toward the strange entities that had been summoned and managed to actually defeat the sirens. When it was discovered who had summoned the heroic ships, the militaries around the world began to try and recruit these warriors and the ones that commanded them. And while Izuku was still quite young, the defense of him by both his ships and from the heroes he had helped kept the JSDF leaders from pushing him around. If these monsters are going to keep coming, then I'm going to help fight, even if it is from the rear guard and trying to make a strategy. I'll help them protect everyone, Izuku said with a shaky but determined look in his eyes. With that, each of the summoners were given bases to command and some actual influence to help fight against the newest threat, and thus the Siren War subverted the age of heroes in the world. After the cleanup of the battle with the sirens, people around the world were questioning what could happen next. For Izuku, that was more prominent due to the newest additions in his life. After the battles were done, all 6 of the girls he summoned came back to his home. Izuku, who are these ladies? 𝐭𝐴 Midoriya asked when her son returned home. Izuku looked back and sighed before saying, I'm not 100% sure myself, Mom. I got caught up in, well, I guess we can say that I was in the middle of that invasion mess and these girls heard me when I called for help. I think. 𝐭𝐴 just looks at her son like he might need to see a therapist. 𝐾𝐻 has a bit of a laugh before speaking for herself and the others. Hello Midoriya-san. I'm the first of the 𝐾𝐻 class of ships. 𝐾𝐻, your son was trying to help and save people during the siren invasion. He found a mental cube that one of the enemies had dropped, and he used it to summon me first, then the rest. After hearing that info dump, 𝐭𝐴 was just shell-shocked and was trying to comprehend what she had just heard. After giving her a few moments, and all of them sitting down in the living room, a few more questions could be answered for both Midoriyas. As they were sitting down, Izuku noticed something important. Hey, where did your guns go? We just dismissed our rigging commander. We don't need it in such close quarters, so I guess you could say, retracted it into ourselves, 𝗂𝗧𝗏 says while crossing her legs. The 2 humans shake their heads before deciding to move on with the conversation. 𝐭𝐴 then asks, so, what are you? Your names seem like ship or location names. Does that have something to do with it? Correct, Naya. All of us were ships from back in World War II, Naya. We are what you could call the souls of the ship's given form. The cubes are what connects both us and the sirens to the world in a sense, Naya. Akashi explains. When she was given a curious look, she tells that since she was a repair ship, that meant she was deeper in tune with the cubes that brought them to life and their nature as ships. 𝐾𝐻 takes over again and explains that they know of the enemy and their nature due to being summoned in other worlds as well, or rather other dimensions. This isn't the first world the sirens have attacked, and each time, we spirits of the ships of old have answered the call to fight back. But we need to called by someone who is compassionate enough to reach out and try to help others, as well as something of a connections to our past. Shinano continues for her sister. This confuses the Midoriyas again, but the Silver Fox woman explains that their ancestor had helped to make the plans for all of the Yamato class, including her retrofit into a carrier. As such, Izuku was able to connect to us in a way few others could anymore, Nagara says while looking around the apartment. 𝐭𝐴 still isn't sure how to process all of this, but she moves past it. So I guess I'll need to make more for dinner tonight. That means I have to pick up more ingredients. I'll go with you, ma'am, 𝐾𝐻 offers. 𝐭𝐴 is a bit surprised, but then 𝗂𝗧𝗏 and Nagara offer to help with some of the cleaning, as well as making sure that Izuku does a few of the chores as well. While still confused by the whole matter, the Midoriya matriarch agrees, with that she and 𝐾𝐻 head out while the rest work to clean the apartment and set up for dinner. While on the walk to the market, 𝐭𝐴 keeps looking over at 𝐾𝐻 with confusion as well as a touch of envy, though she isn't the only one given the statuesque appearance of the woman next to her. This does work to their advantage in a few shops though. Since she's this big, she'll need a little extra. Have a few extra pork cutlets. If you've got more like her at your house, you'll need more food. These are a little lower quality, but you can have these eggs. These veggies are a bit odd looking, but they still taste good, is what a few of the shopkeepers say when they notice 𝐭𝐴 was buying extra food. And since they know about her raising Izuku, and how she has been a loyal customer for quite a while, they were willing to help in a few ways. Even more so when they noticed that 𝐾𝐻 was one of the women who helped save the city. A few people started to swarm them after noticing, some asking if she was a pro-hero. But 𝐾𝐻 just smiled and patiently slipped through with 𝐭𝐴 to get away from the mob. Sorry about that. I guess it shouldn't be too surprising given you saved everyone from those invaders. But I wonder how long before they come to our house to collect all of you, 𝐭𝐴 said with a worried look. Turns out not very long. When they arrived back at the apartment complex, a group of black cars with police and military escort were waiting outside. 𝐭𝐴 stepped forward with 𝐾𝐻, who had summoned her rigging just in case, to ask the men what they were doing there. One of the men stepped forward. He had the markings for an admiral on his coat and he saluted both women. Hello Midoriya-san. I'm Vice Admiral 𝗬𝗎𝗓 of the Maritime Self-Defense Force. We were hoping to speak with your son. May I come inside? 𝐭𝐴 just sighs before agreeing, but asking that only he and one of his men come in. We already have other guests right now. The Admiral chuckles a bit and agrees to her terms. When they all have come into the apartment, it is much cleaner than before, with Izuku and Ayanami currently cleaning the bathroom, while 𝗂𝗧𝗏 and Nagara had just finished cleaning and dusting the living room. Akashi though was apparently tinkering with the stove. and she happily reported to 𝐭 that she not only fixed a few leaks in the washing machine and damaged coils on the refrigerator, but she had improved the stove so it would cook faster and more efficiently. 𝐭 was surprised, but with how cute 𝐭 was being, she just felt the need to pat the girl on the head and praise her. And then she noticed that 𝐭 started purring. Is this normal? More or less. 𝐭-chan is a bit more like a cat than others with her kind of ears, 𝐒𝐴𝑡𝐴𝑔𝑜 says before stirring some hot water for tea. Nagara then says to 𝐭, we can help with making dinner. I'm guessing they need to talk with the commander. 𝐭 nods before calling in 𝐒𝐿. When he arrives, he is surprised to see an admiral in their home. The older man salutes before asking if they could discuss a few matters. 𝐒𝐿 agrees while 𝐾𝐻 stands beside him eyeing up the older man. Now then, young man, I understand that you were the one who managed to bring out the 6 women here, correct? Yeah, I don't really know how I did it, but when I was trying to help 𝐼𝐺𝐼, I reached out in some way and called them to this world, 𝐒𝐿 says with a sheepish look on his face. The military man nods before asking if he knew how anyone else could do the same. I don't know. From what 𝐾𝐻 and the others said, I was able to call to her first because an ancestor or something had worked on her plans and designs. And somehow this allowed the others to also be brought into existence. Sujita nods again before humming to himself. He takes a sip of tea before explaining why he is there. We would like these girls to come with us to the naval base nearby. We will compensate you, but we feel it would be better if they were handled by military personnel, Sujita says. This makes 𝐒𝐿 a bit nervous, as not only did he feel a connection to these girls, but he wondered if they would just treat him like a burden. 𝐾𝐻's face turns a bit severe before looking down at the admiral. We will not leave our commander. He was the one who called us here, so if you want us, Commander 𝐒𝐿 comes as well. But surely it would be better if you had a true commander or admiral leading you. Someone who actually knows strategy and tactics, Sujita says with a slightly panicked tone and a worried look on his face. 𝐒𝐴𝑡𝐴𝑔𝑜, though, comes from the kitchen with a suggestion. Perhaps the commander could show you how skilled he is even though he is just a child. Akashi then brings out a shogi board in pieces. 𝐒𝐴𝑡𝐴𝑔𝑜 puts forth the idea that 𝐒𝐿 could show what he could do that way. Sujita raises his eyebrows but goes along with it, thinking he'll beat the boy in a few moves. 𝐒𝐿 meanwhile is panicking about what she suggested, but a quick side hug from the buxom dog woman helps to relax and calm his mind. So, with a deep breath, the match begins. They decide to go with the best of 5 matches, but the admiral is defeated in 3 straight matches against 𝐒𝐿. Surprising. Do you have an intelligence-boosting quirk? Or perhaps something like foresight? Sujita says after congratulating 𝐒𝐿. The boy's eyes widen, and he looks down before he says, no, I don't have a quirk. This surprises Sujita again. And after a few seconds he starts laughing a bit. That is infinitely more impressive, young man. Perhaps with a bit more training, you could earn the rank of commander or even admiral, especially if you are going to command these girls against the threat out at sea. Sujita then goes into more of what has been happening in the oceans of the world. We thought the enemy had left after the battles in the bay and down in 𝐿, but intel from a few other navies of our allies says otherwise. They seem to be setting up bases or something similar out in the ocean. Pearl Harbor is apparently a major hotspot, but thanks to the these girl fleets, they've been able to protect it and most of the people. 𝐾𝐻 steps forward and says to Sujita, this is similar to a few other world versions of ourselves. We are all somewhat connected to our other versions, but not all of us can tell that. The sirens will keep coming at us, and they will do all they can to push humanity to the brink. The older man nods before asking for their help, not just the ship spirits, but 𝐒𝐿 as well, explaining that they need his ability to summon more ships if they were to hope to have a chance against this new foe. 𝐒𝐿 is shocked and a little terrified by all of this explanation. I'm sorry, I need some time to think about this, the boy says with a bit more pitch to his voice that he would have liked. The admiral nods before explaining that he will be in town for a few days. After Sujita leaves, 𝐒𝐿 removes himself to his room. When 𝐒𝐴𝑡𝐴𝑔𝑜 wants to keep him company, 𝐾𝐻 stops her. He needs to think about this for a bit. Let's give him some time. Let's help Midoriya-san with dinner. After 𝐒𝐿 went back to his room, he laid down on his bed and thought about the strange day that had happened. For an hour, he thought about it more and more, and he kept going back to one common thought. This is some of what I was thinking about. A different way to be a hero. But can I really do it? 𝐒𝐿 keeps thinking this over and over. Then he comes to a different thought. If you could do what I can, and could summon and direct other heroes where they were needed, would you take this chance? 𝐒𝐿 thought while looking at an All Might poster on his wall. He knew the number 1 would prefer to fight this enemy head-on. But he knew that All Might was also for believing in others who were more suited to saving certain people. And maybe this was 𝐒𝐿's chance to save as many lives as possible. And at only 10 years old at that. 𝐒𝐿 then sat up and went back to talk with the girls he summoned as well as his mother. When he got to the dining room, there was a feast of katsudon waiting for him. Feeling better, Ayanami asked while looking to 𝐒𝐿 from the table. 𝐒𝐿 gets a small smile before saying, yeah, I feel better, and I know what I have to do. 𝐻𝐸 nods to her commander while 𝐻𝐸𝐺 and 𝗃𝗏𝐻 have warm smiles directed at the boy. Akashi cheers a bit and Shinano just has a small smile on her face. Izuku then sits down before saying he will help the admiral, and anyone else we can. I may not be able to fight on the front lines, but I can still help direct all of you, to save others, and to keep all of you safe as best I can, Izuku says with a nervous but determined look. 𝐸𝐴 then starts to cry for her son, and the courage he is showing. 𝗃𝐺 and 𝗃𝗏𝐻 then stand up and hug him at the same time. While a bit embarrassing given he gets a face full of both of their boobs, he also feels relaxed in the two women's warm embrace. Sujita had left his card, and they planned to call the man tomorrow. Once dinner was done, 𝗃𝐴 was setting out a few futons for the girls. 𝐻𝐸 was sitting in the chair with her sword in hand, saying, just in case something happens, it would be better to be ready. Shinano was taking up the whole couch. 𝗃𝗏𝐻 and 𝗃𝐺 offered to sleep with Izuku, but 𝗃𝐴 put the two in a guest room, and then offered to let Ayanami sleep with her, while oddly Akashi had already curled up like a cat in Izuku's room. I guess that is fine, 𝗃𝐴 says while petting the cat girl on her head, and making her purr. Izuku chuckles a bit before settling in for the night, and tomorrow he would begin his new life as a commander for Azur Lane. The day after Sujita visited, 𝗃𝐴 called the number on the card he had left. While she was doing that, Izuku was both looking forward to this call and dreading it. Maybe I'm not ready. Maybe. Commander, stop. I know you are nervous, but you have to stay resolute in your decisions. And remember, we're all with you, 𝗃𝐴 says as the boy starts to panic about what his role could be. While her words don't fully calm down Izuku, they are enough to get him to stop rambling. When the admiral picks up the phone, he comments that he is surprised they called back so soon. I thought you might agonize over this for days or something. Izuku chuckles a bit before saying he had somewhat been thinking on things like this for a while. Since I didn't have a quirk, I was trying to think of ways to be a hero without one. I look to heroes a bit like Nezu, and other super intelligent strategist heroes. Sujita hums before agreeing with Izuku's thought. We can help you improve the strategic skill you've shown already. And as you say, you won't be on the front lines, but you will still be saving lives. And trust me, we need it now, Sujita says before telling the boy, as well as his mother and fleet, that he will be sending cars for all of them later, noting that it would be better if he was on base to command and direct his girls. Izuku thanks the man and asks if he will be in command of him, considering his position as only commander, not admiral. The older admits he will just be charged of passing down orders and intelligence to the fleet. It will be up to you to decide where to go and how they will fight. I thank you again, young Midoriya, and I know your country will thank you as well. With that, the admiral hangs up. With that done, the Midoriyas pack up the apartment and get ready to head for the base. It only takes them about 2 hours, and they are ready, and just in time as the cars arrived right as they were finishing packing. The military officers then salute before helping the group load up the packed-up apartment in a van brought as well. To make sure nothing would happen, a ship girl stayed with both of the Midoriyas present, 𝗃𝐴 staying close to her commander, and 𝗃𝐴 with 𝗃𝐴. Gotta admit, this wasn't what I was expecting when Vice Admiral Sujita ordered us to collect the new fleet. Is that what you girls or women look like? And that a kid would be a part of the deal. A female officer driving Izuku and 𝗃𝐴 said as they were heading for the base. Izuku ducks his head a bit while blushing, and the military woman chuckles a bit before saying he would be fine. Mongol base is a secure location, and it will give you plenty of time to grow into your role, whatever that is supposed to be. Izuku groans a bit before looking out at the sea. 𝗃𝐴 puts a hand on his shoulder and gives him a warm smile. It takes about an hour before they reach the base. Once there, Izuku just steps out and looks over the whole location. He sees a few soldiers jogging around, as well as others loading up materials and equipment into the hangars on base. And he starts to think, will any of them be willing to accept that I'll have a leading role here? For the ship girls, they are each enjoying the sights, sounds, and smells of the base as well as the sea again. 𝗃𝐴 leans back after helping 𝗃𝐴 out of the car and says, it feels comforting to be on a military base again. Like coming home. Ayanami nods while Akashi seems to be eyeing up some of the equipment that the soldiers are moving. 𝗃𝐴 and Shinano though both note the tone of the base. Something big must have happened. There's this tense air about the everyone, Shinano says while the soldiers start to move the Midoriya family's effects to a residence on base. Sujita then arrives and notes she is correct. There's been a startling development out at sea. Midoriya-san, I need to speak to Izuku about matters. Do you mind? 𝗃𝐴 shakes her head and goes to help the soldiers move their things to the new house along with 𝗃𝗏𝐻. Izuku meanwhile is concerned about what could be so alarming. 𝗃𝐴, Shinano, and 𝗃𝐴 come with Izuku and the Admiral to the office building on base. Once there, the Admiral asks most of the staff to leave before bringing up some files on his computer. After the attacks around the world, a lot of navies have been damaged. China and the Philippines were some of the worst. But that isn't the worst part. A lot of trade and shipping vessels have been lost or sunk. Some disappearances are almost Bermuda Triangle-like. The admiral then shows the screens noting where even modern US Navy ships had been lost or sunk after the battles around the world, before saying that overnight it seemed as if the nations had been isolated from the oceans. There's no place for humanity, it seems. Even heroes have had little luck. A few have been lost already, 𝗧𝗪𝗧 says with a downcast look. Izuku gulps before asking if there was anything they could do to save those sailors. They can't be saved, Commander, but they can be avenged, and we can save the rest, 𝐾𝐻 says with a stern, determined face. Shinano and 𝗃𝗏 mirrored this, while Izuku looks down sadly. 𝗧𝗪𝗧 nods before saying they need to prepare for a renewed attack. He then notes that the sirens will most likely be coming for the bases to engage and defeat the possible resistance that had been brought to the world. No, they won't be going there, or rather coming here. They'll be aiming for the cities again, Izuku says after thinking about matters for a few minutes. 𝗧𝗪𝗧 is surprised and asks the boy what he means. Izuku scratches his head before saying, the way one of them talked, and the other with her was taunting me about being brave. I think they'll be aiming to hurt as many as possible to stretch us thin, and they'll be aiming for Mustafa again. 𝐾𝐻 agrees with Izuku before noting something in her faint memories. In other dimensions, it almost seems like they are testing humanity. And given this world's obsession with quirks and this version of heroes, they'll want to test what humans think they can do with those quirks. 𝗧𝗪𝗧 leans back before thinking the matter over. He agrees that they could be doing that but asks what they should do. Izuku then says they need to start partial evacuations of the seaside areas, and to have the heroes help with that. I've admired them my whole life, but they can't really fight against this threat. But they can keep everyone else safe. 𝗧𝗪𝗧 nods and then asks Izuku to come to a different room. On a side door to 𝗧𝗪𝗧's office, there is a massive holograph projecting table with a few other radios and comm stations around. He turns on the table and it shows a map of Japan. As he does, another screen pops up and it shows a different base. After about a minute, the screen shows a different admiral and a young woman. This admiral is Vice Admiral 𝗂𝗪𝗧 and the young woman with him is Hirano Himori. 𝗧𝗪𝗧, I take it this is the young man who summoned the fleet near you? 𝗂𝗪𝗧 asks, while looking over the four in the room. 𝗧𝗪𝗧 acknowledges that and asks about Himori. She is an average-looking young woman, though she does have red skin and eyes, with dark sclere, and a pair of nubs on her head giving her the appearance of an oni. After introducing herself, Himori says, I was just a university student out here, but when the attacks happened, I grabbed a cube that had fallen and somehow could hear and call out to, well, Shikakin, where have you gone? Don't leave me behind. As soon as that is heard, a new woman in a red short-skirted kimono with her large breasts on display is seen. She then glomps onto Himori before pushing the woman into her breasts further. Izuku blushes a bit at this and 𝗃𝗏 quickly covers her commander's eyes, but he also gets a good feel of her own breasts on top of his head. Himori pulls out before saying, 𝗃𝗏, stop, at least for a minute. We're having a discussion here. 𝗃𝗏 then looks at the screen and sees the other admiral and Izuku on the screen. She then coughs before apologizing. Excuse me, Admiral. Young Commander, I was just looking for my commander for a while and was happy to find her, 𝗃𝗏 says politely, though she has yet to let go of Himori. 𝗧𝗪𝗧 coughs before saying they needed to move on. Agreed. Photo base is secure, and we've been preparing for the likely attack on this location, 𝗂𝗪𝗧 says, but 𝗧𝗪𝗧 mentions what Izuku said. He then goes on to say that Izuku is one of the few who actually had contact with the sirens, while the heroes did as well. Most of them are still in the hospital or are helping with recovery. Given what young Midoriya mentioned about our enemy, I'd be willing to agree with his assessment. The other admiral hums a bit to come up with a counter. Himori then asks 𝗃𝗏 if she remembered similar instances and attacks by the sirens in her memories. Indeed, I do, Himori-sama. The sirens would often attack more unusual targets. It often seemed as though they were testing the resolve of the humans there, as well as we ship girls. Upon hearing that, 𝗂𝗪𝗧 stops the counter he was about to put forward. He then says, well, if that is the case, then we should go ahead with the evacuations, but we still should keep some forces ready at the bases. I do agree, sir, but we still need to be ready for when they hit some of the cities, and I'm willing to bet that they would be focused on where heroes are often seen fighting, Izuku says before pointing to a few different locations, namely Mustafa, Tokyo, Fukuoka, and Otaru. These would probably be the main locations that they would attack. I agree with, what is your name, kiddo? Himori says while looking over Izuku. Izuku then introduces himself and explains that they need to try to lure in as many of the sirens as they can. When questioned about why, Himori surmises it is to try and get more cubes to summon ships. Only a few of them appeared after all of the fighting, and only a handful of shards came from the autonomous ships that the girls fought, meaning that we have a better chance of getting more resources from the higher-ranked ones. Right. Izuku is surprised but glad his fellow summoner can see what he has in mind. The older soldiers nod a bit but wonder if these youths truly understand the weight they now carry. They then agree and set about plans to evacuate the cities Izuku mentioned. I think you need to talk with your fleets before setting out, 𝗧𝗪𝗧 says before hanging up. 𝐒𝐭𝐚𝐲 and the 3 ships who accompanied him discuss a few other details with Admiral 𝗧𝗵𝗲 before heading back for the evening. When they arrive at the house, 𝐭 and 𝗧𝗏 had already set up and cleaned the house 𝗧𝗏 would be staying in. 𝗧𝗏: the Admiral mentioned that a barracks had been set up specially for us. Most of us will be living there, but I do think that one person should stay with Midoriya-san and keep the house safe, 𝐻𝗧𝗏 mentioned while helping set the table for dinner. 𝗧𝗏 volunteers first, saying she wanted to take care of 𝗧𝗏 a bit and would be a great help around the house for 𝗏. 𝐾𝐻 though shakes her head and says, "I'll stay with the commander for a while. It would be better to have some extra muscle while we are all still settling in." 𝗻𝗧𝗏 and 𝗧𝗏 want to argue, but they also know they can't compete with her battleship muscle, let alone the fact she was the first ship 𝗧𝗏 summoned. The boy meanwhile is just looking all involved with confusion. After dinner, 𝗧𝗏 goes into the room his mom had set his things in and starts to unpack more. While he is setting up his All Might collection, he questions himself more and more. What if I'm wrong? What if they do come here and we aren't ready for them? What if I fail at leading these girls, and it gets them all killed? 𝗧𝗏 thinks to himself after pulling out a few action figures. After a few minutes, a knock is heard at his door. "Commander, it's 𝗃𝗧𝗏. Do you want some help?" While 𝗧𝗏 is suspicious given how amorous the woman had been at times, he could hear in her voice that she was just concerned. He gives her the okay and she opens the door to see some of the All Might memorabilia 𝗧𝗏 had. She titters a bit before saying, "It's a bit unusual to see all of these stars and stripes here in Japan, but I guess that man was inspired by the determination of those people who defeated us long ago." 𝗃𝗧𝗏 then helps 𝗧𝗏 with more unpacking before asking him if he was trouble. 𝗧𝗏 looked up before sitting down and sighing. "I'm just afraid. I'm so used to being called useless or helpless just because I don't have a quirk. But now, I've got so many lives riding on the decisions I make. The 6 of you for starters. Then there's all the people in the cities, not just in Japan but even in other parts of the world. If I fail, how many will die?" 𝗃𝗧𝗏 just listened to her commander vent for a bit before sitting next to him on his bed. She then patted his head before saying, "You are right to be scared. This is a daunting task that has been set before you, but the fact that you are still willing to make decisions and try to save others shows you have the heart for this fight. For now you need to trust your instincts and trust in us. We all trust you and believe you can lead us through this." She then gently pulls 𝗧𝗏 into a hug while patting his head. The tone of her voice, as well as the patient and gentle actions she took, are enough for 𝗧𝗏 to melt into her embrace. When 𝗧𝗏 and 𝗃𝗧𝗏 had finished with decorating his room, the latter excused herself before saying, "If you ever need someone to cry or talk to, please leave it to your big sister, or this big sister as well." 𝗃𝗧𝗏 then says from down the hallway. 𝗧𝗏 blushes a bit before asking, "Is this what it is really like to have siblings?" The 5 ship girls chuckle a bit before admitting it was somewhat similar. With that, 4 of the 5 go to the barrack that 𝗧𝗵𝗲 had designated for them, but not before 𝗧𝗏 asked them to go find Akashi. With all of that done, 𝐾𝐻 then sits down in the living room with some tea. "You might want to get some sleep early, Commander. Tomorrow, or possibly even during the night, you may be called on to direct us in battle," 𝗃𝐻 says while relaxing in the chair. 𝗏𝗏 agrees before mentioning that she was tired from the packing and unpacking, so she would be turning in early too. 𝗧𝗏 smiled a bit before heading to his room to first look over some hero news, and then get some sleep, because tomorrow would be the first true day for him as a commander of naval ships, against the threat of the sirens. It's hard to say if this is going to work, but I have to put my best guess and foot forward, if I want to prove that I'm a capable commander. "Backdraft, sir. Have the evacuations been going smoothly?" I asked the rescue-focused hero from the comms station at Mongol base. "It is going well so far, young man. After what happened 2 days ago, a few people had already started to move inland. The only ones left were those who couldn't or wouldn't move. The surprising thing though has been from those we thought of as villains. Some of them have actually been helping people evacuate, like twice." I nod at this before saying, "An alien invasion tends to make people reevaluate a lot of things, though there will still probably be a few who want to take advantage of the situation. Be prepared for looters and the like." Backdraft gives me a roger before focusing back on the city and the evacuees. I look over the map before going over the plan. My lead assumption was that the sirens might focus on the cities where heroes are the most focused. If they are trying to test humanity, then going after the new version of humans involved would be the best test. Given the top 10 to 5, it was best to assume they would head for those regions first, especially with All Might having moved to Mustafa. I say to myself before scratching my chin. One of the other members of the JSDMF steps up and gives a report from the US. It appears San Francisco and Los Angeles have both been destroyed, and the cities of Portland and Seattle have been heavily damaged. There are no mainland awakenings on the West Coast, so the cities were basically undefended. The only hero still alive is Star and Stripes. She managed to defeat a few of the sirens, but most of the heroes and people are dead. I gulp at hearing that and start to panic a bit more. "Commander," I hear over the comms. It's Kai speaking to me. "You can't change what has happened. And you can't about every matter in the world. You have to focus on one thing at a time." I look over the map before taking a deep breath to calm my nerves. I then sigh before agreeing with and thanking Kai. Hopefully some good can come out of that. Maybe some of the survivors can awaken the power of the ships. I focus back on the task and point out the main likely target. They'll probably start at the cities of Shimoda and Amizaki and destroy as much as they can along the way. But we need to pull them more towards Shizuoka itself. If we can at least somewhat box them in, we can concentrate the fire on them and slow the attacks. I agree, Izuku. I have Tehu, Yukikaze, and Megami near the city of Fukuoka, and if we can pull them into the bay, the Eye sisters can hammer them with their guns, as well as what is left of the SDF ships, Himori says before bringing up some other images. Izuku looks them over and can see the dark clouds that seem to be gathering, but the weather maps show nothing. Izuku gulps again before trying to make a speech. I'm not going to say this is going to be easy, nor will I say we can win this with no casualties. But right now, we have to slow the siren advance as much as possible, and try to give more hope to everyone, not just the people of Japan. So, to my ships, and even your ships, Himori-san, I've got a special order. Come back alive. Give everything you've got, but you have to make it back to us, because then we can bring hope to everyone. I say while trembling while I stand. Himori chuckles before agreeing with me. It may not be as possible for the sailors on the normal ships, but I agree with him. We need to all make it back from this, because it will show what is possible for the battles ahead, and what we can all do to save our home. Once both speeches have finished, there is silence. But then, a few more screens pop up, and the captains on board the normal vessels are saluting us. Even the few that were left from the US's 7th Fleet are standing and saluting the two of us. So Himori and I return the gesture and thank all of them for believing in our hunch and trusting in our girls. As I sit back down, I get a quiet call from Ki. "Well done, Commander. You might have just inspired more people than most back in the day. And you're so young at that," she says with a light teasing tone. In the background I can hear both Itago and Nagara making comments about how I'm growing up so fast, and that they're proud. I chuckle at that before announcing to stand by for battle. It shouldn't be much longer. "You think that kid is right, Captain?" a sailor on board one of the U.S. cruisers asks while monitoring the radar. The bare-headed man sits back in his chair while sighing. Normally I wouldn't be one for trusting a former civilian on matters such as this, but given the strange entity we are facing, I'm more willing to believe, especially after the intel that noted him directly confronting the sirens, the captain says before asking for a status report. A few of the captains and commanders on the other ships around the Suruga Bay and at Hataka Bay. For the ship girls though, they were more focused on what they could feel. "Tehu-san, do you feel that?" Megami asks while tightening her grip on her guns. Tehu's red eyes narrow as she looks out over the Sea of Japan. "Indeed, I do. It seems that other commander has a good head on his shoulders. But I do wish our Himori-sama had been one to say the same," Tehu says, before the look on her face morphs into one that displays her less than moral intentions with her commander. Yukikaze though has barely noticed and shouts, "Why are you so worried, Megami-sen Nanoda? Don't forget you have Yukikaze-sama on your side. We'll send them packing with my divine grace, Nanoda." This little rant, as well as the actions of the first member of the photo fleet, make Megami's sweat drop. Eyes and Hyuga though have heard the whole thing and laugh a bit. "Don't worry too much, Megami. Just bring them in and we can try to finish the fight, and maybe get some more help along the way," Ai says with a twirl of her Naginata. With the Mongol fleet, Ki is standing by in the bay with the other ships, alongside Akashi and Itago. Ayanami, Nagara, and Shinano though are outside the bay and can feel the tension in the air. "I do hope the commander's plan works," Nagara says with a nervous look on her face. Ayanami though is focused and ready. So, she says to her fleet mate, "Don't worry, you have the strength of the demon here, as well as the power of the third Yamato. We'll be fine, and we can trust in Izuku." Shinano smiles at Ayanami before agreeing with her. While this doesn't placate all of Nagara's fears, it is enough to help her focus on the task at hand. Suddenly a new ping comes up on the radars of a few of the ship girls. "I'm picking up a cargo ship of some kind out there. Or a fishing vessel," Nagara reports. Shinano then launches a few planes to investigate and confirm the report. When the planes get close, a new set of lights show up above the ship. Then a variety of new portals appear behind it. "Sirens," Shinano reports as she orders her planes to engage. Ayanami draws her sword, while Nagara gives her cheeks a quick wake-up slap to begin. A few other ships come behind them to be ready to engage as needed. The two smaller ship girls focus on their AA for the time being and wait for a moment to engage up close. Shinano flies above and watches over the battlefield. "We have to get away," the captain of the illegal fishing vessel shouts as the siren ships appear behind them. He orders his crew to try and push the engines as much as they can. A few of the beam gun ports point towards them and start taking shots. Most miss, but one man on deck is struck and vaporized by the impact. Just as they are sure they will die, a few of the ships are struck by the bombs from Shinano's planes. A few of the fighters engage the siren fighters above the ocean, and the torpedo bombers set up for their runs. I don't know what is happening, but we need to get out of here, one of the fishing vessel's crew says before running below to help coax some more speed out of the engine. It takes a few minutes, but the fishing boat gets far enough away and they pass 𝐼𝐼𝐵 and 𝗧𝗏𝗏 as they are going to engage the enemy, with the former trying to get as close as she can to the ships for a torpedo strike. 𝗧𝗏𝗏 hangs back a bit and focuses more on 𝐴 with the other allied ships. She and the other ships take a few grazing hits, but they manage to hold the line for a time. Shinano, though, is more focused on a different fact. This is too easy. It's almost like we have to head back toward the bay. Shinano calls out over the comms. Izuku, meanwhile, has been viewing the battle much the same. He chuckles before saying, I was about to say something similar, Shinano, but I will admit, I'm glad you all moved to save those people on the fishing boat. He had already warned Kai and the others about the threat, and they were standing ready. Above Tsuruga Bay, a set of portals open. It is not just siren ships that appear, but Purifier as well. HELLOOO. Where are you, silly little heroes? Thank those worthless little bits that mutated you can stop me. Purifier shouts as she and a few clones of herself start shooting around the bay and into the city. While Kai and the rest are about to engage, Izuku tells them to hold off for a minute. I want to see what she does, Izuku says while gripping his arm. He wants to stop them no matter what, but there are a few things that have him curious. When Purifier doesn't hear the screams of humans or heroes announcing themselves, a puzzled look comes across her face. Nothing happens for at least 5 minutes and her impatience leads her to just cause random destruction. Where are you? Come out and let me hear your screams. I have to cull the weak and cut you all down. Purifier shouts before using her rig to vaporize a building and start shooting all around, her face showing her rage and annoyance. Seeing that is enough for Izuku to get a better idea of what pushes her buttons. Okay, Kai, engage, Izuku says, before telling the rest of the ships to do the same. Kai's smile widens as she and the rest of the ship girl fleet come out of hiding and start engaging the clones and other vessels. She quickly cuts through a pair of clones before using her guns to blast the ships out in the bay. 𝗃𝗏𝗄 meanwhile focuses on the water and deflecting the attacks of the airborne monsters. She manages to sink a few ships before engaging a couple of the Purifier clones. Akashi meanwhile had been focused on AA fire as that was what her guns were. But then she got a report from the captain of the 𝗬𝗵𝗲 and JSDF Naka. That gear you built is ready, Minty Kitty. This should leave a nice mark. The two captains happily report before using a beam gun that Akashi had built using the modern tech and her own otherworld experience with siren tech. The resulting shots destroyed a battleship siren as well as vaporizing a few Purifier clones. That's what I'm talking about, NYA. Give those sirens a taste of their own medicine, Naya. Akashi shouts before focusing on the aircraft again. Purifier meanwhile is looking around in worry and annoyance. Did I walk right into a trap? Yes, you did. Kai finishes the siren's sentence. She then rushes toward her in the sky with her blade drawn. They clash again and again with Kai smiling all the while. Right after the first ship Izuku summoned engaged the siren leader, Shinano and her attached ships returned to the bay. The two smaller ships went to aid Akashi and 𝗃𝗏𝗄 while Shinano flew up to aid her sister. She drew 2 of her katana, wielding one in each hand. She then used her foxtails to grab the third sword and engages Purifier. Izuku then orders the two to keep Purifier busy. She's the strongest enemy right now. We need to keep her off balance long enough for the rest to engage and defeat the other siren ships. With a subdued Roger from both Yamatos, they battle Purifier in earnest. She growls before bringing her drones close and making beam blades from them. You bitches think you can take me. You've got another thing coming. Purifier shouts before attacking Kai. Back on the ocean, 𝐼𝐼𝐵 and 𝗃𝗏𝗄 get up close and personal with their blades and cut through the few clones close to the ocean, before unleashing their torpedoes alongside some of Shinano's planes. 𝗧𝗏𝗏 though stays back and focuses on AA with Akashi, though she is nursing a few wounds from a dive bomber or two. Hold still, Naya. I'll fix you up, Akashi says when 𝗧𝗏𝗏 gets close. The horned girl nods and thanks the cat girl before focusing on the siren aircraft. In Hataka Bay, the battle had been much the same with Tester replacing Purifier and engaging both Ai's sisters near the water. This could fun. Let's see what you can do, Tester says before blasting them with her cannons. The two jump out of the way before shooting back with their own cannons. Tester tries to block with her shields, but the impacts do more damage than she anticipates. How? She asks before getting slashed from behind by Ai's Naginata. She tries to retaliate, but the battleship is gone. Soon the two are attacking her from multiple angles and she can't react in time. Then out of nowhere, a new face shows up and stabs her in the side. While wincing, Tester looks down and sees the tearful and nervous face of Kashino. Just as the siren was about to attack again, Aiz and Hyuga blast away at her with their cannons, and Teiu's bombers return and strike the siren as well. What did I tell you? With the grace of 𝐒𝐭𝐴ZE-sama, we have nothing to fear, 𝐒𝐭𝐴ZE shouts before attacking with her torpedoes. Behind her though, Teiu and Megami are less impressed, and are annoyed as they had taken damage, with cracks and tears in the fan-like deck of Teiu, and Megami having burned hair and a damaged turret. But the two keep fighting and put their frustration into engaging the sirens. Back at Tsuruga, the battle has continued to go as Izuku hoped and planned. I thought so. She's been so focused on getting payback and trying to get her sadistic kicks in, that she failed to notice what has happened to the rest of her fleet, Izuku says before telling all of his ships to engage Purifier. During the sword battle with the two Yamatos, Shinano had tossed Ki her extra sword and the two were wearing her down more and more. You think I'm done? I haven't begun to Gurk. Purifier starts, but then a shot from both Atago and Ayanami hit her in the stomach. Ki then takes the chance to knock the siren closer to the water, with Shinano's planes pouring on the attacks and fire as fast as they can. When she has gotten close enough to the water, Ayanami leads with a torpedo volley, before firing her guns to get close. Atago follows behind and both engage with their blades. The strikes and explosives from the two, as well as the renewed attacks from Shinano and Ki, do enough damage to Purifier's rigging and body, removing one of her arms and legs. Damn you, how can this be? I'm a high-ranking siren, she shouts while wincing at the missing limbs. Ki comes forward and says to the siren, it's because you're predictable. The commander knew after meeting you that all you were interested in was making people suffer, so he counted on you wanting to engage as many civilians and heroes as possible. Izuku closes his eyes and tells Ki to finish the alien. She then brings her swords up to cut down the invader. Oh my, it seems they made quite a mess of you. Whatever will I do with you? A voice calls out above, and a new barrage of beams fire down at the ship girls. Up above is Observer, who keeps up her attack before taking Purifier in her tentacles, and chooses this time to torment the other siren with them. Well done all of you, and you as well, young commander of the Sakura Empire. I thought the two at Pearl Harbor would require all of our attention, but you have my interest now. Good day, Observer says before firing off at the water again. Just as the two are about to leave through the portal, Purifier struggles enough to use one of the cannons and fire it at Nagara. The girl doesn't notice in time and is badly injured in the blast, losing her right arm and leg. Nagara. The ship girls call out with Izuku asking for a report. When it is given, the blood drains from his face and he is about to be sick to his stomach. Thankfully, Akashi is close by and quickly starts to repair the wounded girl. Ki-san, I think the commander may need you, Naya, Akashi says while working to save Nagara. Ki nods and orders the rest to look for any cubes or shards, enough of them that we can try to make a full cube. We may need a new member after this, Ki says before going full speed back to Mongol base. When she arrives, she rushes to the command room. Sujita is there and commends her and the girls for their victory. Never mind that for now, sir. Where is Commander Izuku? Ki asks with worry etched all over her face. Sujita nods before guiding her towards the bathroom. He's in there. After he gave the order to start with cleanup, he ran here. I heard him heave a bit so. Well, do what you can, Sujita says before saluting the battleship girl. The door is locked, so Ki has to break it down and check on Izuku. The boy looks disheveled and is leaning over the toilet, with tears streaming down his face. Ki walks over to him gently and rubs his back. While he doesn't throw up again, it still takes a minute before he can breathe easy. Ki then brings him close to her and rubs his hair. His mother follows soon after and she hugs both of them, comforting her son and thanking his first ship. They do not move for an hour, and luckily the battles of both bays come out as victories, perhaps thanks to the luck of 𝑒𝐭𝐴ZE. No grievous injuries are had on the photo fleet side. Nagara though is lucky that Akashi was able to save her. She may need to rest for a few days, Naya, but she'll live, Akashi reports to Sujita. The admiral nods and thanks all the girls for work in protecting Japan. After an hour, Izuku is able to relax and thanks both his mother and Ki for helping him. I'm supposed to be the commander, but when I saw Nagara, no one blames you, commander, especially the fleet. And frankly, you held up well enough given how young you are. This was your first battle, and we won thanks to your planning, Ki says with a smile. Izuku sniffs before going out to meet the rest of his fleet. When he arrives at the docks, the other soldiers on base take note and salute him. He nods and returns a few salutes. When the ship girls arrive, a rousing cheer is let out. Nagara is being carried by Shinano, but otherwise the rest are none the worse for wear. At the docks, the captains of the normal ships are also greeted with cheers. Akashi then comes forward with a pair of cubes. We could only get 3 cubes, Commander Naya, but it might be enough for you to summon some new forces, Akashi says before handing Izuku the cubes. He nods before checking on Nagara, the little brother wanting to care for his big sister. That's a bit different, but I'm alright, Izuku. We may need more help soon. Nagara says with a wince before patting Izuku on the head. He blushes at the attention, especially when the soldiers tease him a bit at the action. But he does agree to summon more ships later. For now, we've won our first true battle with the sirens, and we've pushed them back from our home. I think that deserves a bit of celebrating, Izuku says, and the soldiers cheer again, with his ship girls agreeing. It isn't much, but the base does have a barbecue before lights out. While elsewhere in the world some are thinking of ways to summon more aid for the nations. With the first battle for Japan finished, and the celebrations past, Izuku looked over the 3 cubes his fleet had managed to acquire. He was in the command room and was in a video call with Himori, so it was similar for your group. We only recovered 2 cubes from the battle, Himori said with the cubes in front of her. Izuku nodded with a sigh. I'm hoping with the next set of summons I can get someone to replace Nagara for a time. But I don't know how to summon a specific ship. Maybe we're not supposed to. Maybe we just have to trust luck or fate, Himori said with an unsettled look on her face. That is fairly accurate, Commander Hirano. While the cubes have to be used to call to us, you just have to trust the fates and hope for who will answer the call. Izuku hears behind him. Kai had slipped in while Izuku and Himori were discussing the battle. Behind Himori, though, Teiyu decided to sneak up on her commander and then quickly hugged the woman's head into her cleavage. Izuku decided to focus on his ship and asks, is there really no other suggestion for getting a specific ship? Kai just shrugs, but Teiyu has a suggestion. If it helps, young commander, normally the trend in some worlds was to use 1 cube for a smaller ship, and 2 would be used for heavy and specialized ships, such as myself and Kaidono there. The fact she is saying this while still having her commander's face pressed into her cleavage is a bit distracting for the boy. But he shakes his head to refocus, mentioning that he only used 1 cube to bring out Kai and Atego. So what's up with that? Izuku asks with a puzzled expression. Himori finally pulls herself out of Teiyu's breasts with a gasp and says, couldn't breathe. Maybe it was just luck or something else. I only needed 1 to summon Teiyu here. Maybe whatever connects us to the realm where the ships come from decided we needed some real muscle. Izuku nods before chuckling, saying, it sounds like they just wanted to watch an interesting story unfold, and they put us at risk to make it. All of the women in the room look at him with a side-eyed glance before moving on. Himori says that they need to bolster their forces as well as try to establish some trade of some kind. You're right. With shipping cut off, most island nations could run into the issue of dwindling supplies. Too bad we can't use the girls' original ship forms, Izuku says while resolving to test out Teiyu's suggestion. Though we actually can, Commander, Kai mentions nonchalantly. Izuku and Himori then look at the battleship girl with a raised eyebrow. Teiyu confirms the same, that they can turn their rigging into the entire ship. Then why didn't you use the full ships in the battle yesterday? Himori asks with a flat look. Both girls just shrug before saying it feels better to fight with their rigging compared to just directing or controlling their ships. Izuku facepalms with a sigh before asking to meet with Himori later to discuss future options. The photo commander agrees and signs off. Izuku leans back before picking up 1 of the cubes. It's all up to luck or fate, huh? Guess I'll try it, Izuku says before gripping the cube tightly. He focuses more on trying to get a smaller ship, someone to take over for Nagara. While she's recovering, the boy commander thinks. The cube starts to light up in his hand, and then begins to form into his new ship. What appears before him is a young girl with very pale skin, almost akin to the sirens themselves, right down to the white hair. Though unlike the enemy of humanity, she has bright blue eyes, and atop her head are black and white fox ears, and behind her is a white fox tail. She is also wearing a sailor uniform-esque garb, with sleeves that seemed more akin to a kimono or priestess garb. At her side for her rigging, she has 2 pieces of what appear to be a ship's hull, with a double-barreled gun on both, and a quad torpedo launcher behind that. But that is not all. On both sides of her hips are 2 full katana in their saya, while under the guns and torpedoes are another set of blades, though much shorter. It is then that the girl speaks to Izuku. I am Kawakaze, Shiritsuyu classes Kawakaze. I am not interested in getting along, so you can save your greetings, the now-named Kawakaze says with a slightly deeper and deadpan voice. Izuku is a little unsettled at how cold this new girl he summoned appeared to be. Kai, though, is a bit annoyed at the new girl's dismissive attitude and tells her off with, I'd watch that tone if I were you. He is your commander now. While Kawakaze's initial reaction to that statement is to scoff, she jumps a bit when Kai slams her Ndachi and its saya onto the ground, then feels a bit intimidated by the look the battleship girl is giving her. Kawakaze coughs a bit before subtly apologizing to Izuku. Izuku just gives a light admission of her apology, slightly intimidated by Kai as well. I know you are new to this world, Kawakaze, but we need your help. The sirens are here as you most likely guessed, and there aren't that many of you ship girls here as well, Izuku says to the newest addition. He goes on to tell her that there has already been an injury among his fleet and he needs someone to step up into the role. Kawakaze just sighs slightly before saying, While I'm slightly annoyed that I was summoned to be a replacement, I know enough to understand you didn't summon me without good reason. I'll fight alongside the rest. Izuku just nods before thanking the girl. He then picks up the remaining 2 cubes to summon another heavy or special ship. Or he would if he knew what the special ships were. Hey, what did she mean by a special ship? Izuku asked 𝐻𝐸𝐽, though decided to answer. Special ships fall into a few unusual categories. Carriers are the most common ones in the special group. Subs and repair ships also fall into that category of special ships. Accurate. Heavy ships, meanwhile, are generally battleships, battle cruisers, and even some heavy or large cruisers fall into that category. Kai continues while giving 𝐻𝐸𝐽 a glare. Izuku nods and then hums. I think I'll focus on a heavy ship for now. Seems like a better option for now, Izuku says before focusing on the cubes again. He thinks about battleships and hopes to connect to those of his homeland. I wonder if I'll be stuck with another girl akin to 𝐻𝐸𝐽, or maybe I'll have one like Kai. Though those cracks from some of the soldiers made it sound like I was trying to get more older sister characters. I'm too young for that. And I don't think I'm into that. Maybe. While this and other thoughts are swimming through Izuku's mind, the cubes light up and start to form into his next new ship. What appears before him is another young-looking girl with fox ears, though with black hair this time, and clothing akin to 𝐒𝐵𝐼𝐽's. She was quite short, shorter than 𝐻𝐸𝐽. However, her rigging was a monster in comparison. Behind her was a massive conning tower, and out to the sides were 4 double-barreled cannons with impressive calibers. While Izuku's head was tilting to the side at the sight of the visual contrast, the fox girl introduced herself. I am called Nagato, flagship of the Sakura Empire's combined fleet. Are you the one known as the commander? I shall bear witness to whether or not you have the ability to unite this world, Nagato says with a young lilt to her voice. Though Izuku had a different thought. She sounds like a little kid, but she talks really old person. Nagato then looks over Izuku a bit more before saying, You are quite young for a commander, sir. Izuku shakes his head before acknowledging her. That is accurate. And it's Izuku. Midoriya Izuku. Nagato nods before noting her companions in the room. She had known 𝐻𝐸𝐽 in a sense from their shared pasts. But I don't know you. You are quite the imposing battleship yourself. Thank you, Nagato-sama. I am 𝐻𝐸𝐽, one of a few planned set of battleships to defend Japan. Nagato nodded, acknowledging one of the last battleship types to be made in Japan. Izuku then brought his newest charge up to speed, including where he would need her. It's probably better if Akashi stayed behind and focused on repairs, and retrofitting the other ships that don't have ship girl spirits. I agree, Commander. I will gladly command the rest of the fleet in battle, Nagato says while patting her chest and bowing to Izuku. Izuku coughs before explaining that 𝐻𝐸𝐽 is the flagship for his fleet. 𝐻𝐸𝐽 herself is surprised by this and asks Izuku what he meant. You are my first ship, and you are one of the best fighters in the fleet. There's no one else to be the flagship, Izuku says with a small smile. 𝐻𝐸𝐽 blushes at this and thanks her commander. Off to the side, Nagato nods her head and agrees with his decision. Izuku then decides to introduce the 2 new girls to Admiral Sujita first. While I'm glad we have new reinforcements for the fleet, please at least run it by me when you are going to do things like summoning more ships, Commander. Izuku rubs the back of his head before apologizing. Then taking the new girls to meet the rest of the fleet. 𝐭 practically melts at the appearance of both girls, finding Nagato especially adorable, and quickly hugging the girl while patting her head. And she is a bit confused when many of the other girls in Izuku's fleet bow to the girl. Am I missing something? 𝐭 asks after seeing Itago go down to one knee to address Nagato. Said small fox puffs out her chest before saying, I am the manifestation of the soul of the Sakura Empire, the pride and glory of her warrior spirit. As a big 7, I am also the symbol of an era. Open your eyes and bask in my radiance. At hearing that, Izuku and 𝐭's eyes bug out, with most of the older or known historic members confirming what she said. But the mysticism is lost when Nagato says, You may stop basking now, I'm getting a bit sleepy. This makes Izuku laugh a bit before rolling his eyes. 𝐭 smiles as well, and then tries to address 𝐻𝐸𝐽. But the girl is just as standoffish as when she first arrived. Don't mind her, 𝐻-san. She's just a bit. Well, she's just kind of prickly. She'll warm up to everyone eventually, Nagara says from the kitchen table. She had been cutting some vegetables to help 𝐭 with dinner. While Akashi had restored her arm easily enough, she needed a bit more time to restore the light cruiser's leg before dinner could really start. Izuku decided to go through what he had in mind for later operations and sorties. I want the fleet to patrol the area around here for now. 𝐻𝐸𝐽, your flagship with Nagato and Shinano as the main fleet. 𝐻𝐸𝐽, Itago and Ayanami, you'll be the vanguards. Nagara, you're on reserve for now. And Akashi, I want you to stay back at the base, not just to repair the others, but to help the other regular ships be brought up to the level they can fight even. While Nagara is a bit saddened at being benched as it were, she does understand what Izuku had in mind. Akashi as well, who was happy to stay behind to tinker with all the new gear on the base. Akashi can make other devices to help everyone Naya. I have lots of ideas of what to do to boost up firepower and recovery Naya, the Minty Kitty says with a happy jump from her chair. But Inko then claps her hands to tell the rest to holster work conversations for later. I'll take those veggies, Nagara-chan. It's time for curry, Inko says while picking up the cutting board. After hearing what was being made for dinner, all of the ship girls celebrate. Even Kawakaze's eyes light up at hearing that curry was what was for dinner. All of the girls happily eat when the curry was done, with Izuku liking the cutlet that his mother put on the top of his. Once dinner was done, Ki once again stayed with the Midoriyas, while Nagato and Kawakaze were shown to 2 empty rooms in the barracks for the night. With the new day, Izuku contacted Himori again. Alongside her was her newest summon. The girl had black hair with wolf-like ears and was wearing a blue sailor uniform. At her side was rigging set up with 4 large double-barreled turrets, and in her left hand was a katana. This is Ashigara. I had to use both cubes, but she should be able to help with covering my heavier ships, Himori said. Izuku nodded before introducing Nagato. I also summoned another destroyer, but she's a bit difficult, Izuku says with an uneasy look on his face. Himori just laughs before saying, so you can handle meeting a siren face to face, but can't deal with one troublesome destroyer. Izuku is about to retort when a new contact appears on the screen. It is mostly static at first, but Izuku ordered the comms text to descramble the signal. It took a minute or two, but they were eventually able to get a visual. Hello, is anyone there? A woman said on the screen. She appeared to be quite tall and had long blonde hair and a few points upward. Izuku's eyes bug out and he shouts, "Your Star and Stripes, the #1 hero from the US. Upon hearing that, Nagato's eyes widen as well. She hums before saying, I guess it has been quite a while since the war. No reason we might not be allies. It is good to meet you, ma'am. Though I do wonder what this call could be about. Who's the little kid who is talking like she's 80? Star asks. Nagato then puffs her cheeks before Izuku placates the girl. He goes on to explain who Nagato is, as well as explaining he was the commander for the base. Star is wide-eyed at the fact that the little girl was not only a ship, but a battleship, let alone the fact that Izuku was a commander for his nation's ship-girl forces. Wish we had that luck here on the West Coast. Most everyone in the major cities was killed off in the first wave of attacks. Los Angeles, San Francisco, Portland, Seattle, all gone. And basically, everyone who lived there too, Star explained while looking down. Himori then asks what she was calling about. One of the comms techs on Star's side explained that they were trying to contact Pearl Harbor. Guess we overshot. A lot, the tech says. Izuku snorts before asking if they had found any cubes during the fights with the sirens. Star raises an eyebrow before bringing out one from one of the sirens she had killed. This thing, yeah, it's what you'll need to try and summon a ship girl. That's how we managed it, Himori explains. Star looks down at the item before trying to summon a ship herself, but she has no luck. Izuku looks down before saying, I guess that means you aren't meant to be the commander of the ship girls. You'll have to find someone who can though. Maybe the cubes will direct you. Star sighs before agreeing with the boy. She thanks the two for more information. There's been little communication the last few days here. Whatever those sirens are, they've made it ridiculously hard to contact anyone. We can barely make calls to any part of the US. Hopefully we'll find something, Star says before signing off. The techs again try to reach Pearl Harbor while Star leaves for the time being. So the cubes decide who gets to call to the ships. Wonder how they could tell me. Star thinks out loud while walking through the damaged military base. While the fighters and other military had managed to help fight off the sirens, most of the heroes had been relegated to evac work and rescue, with herself as an exception. While she is walking by a refugee area on base, she feels the cube get warmer in her hand. She then holds it up and moves it back and forth from the tents nearby. She hums before heading over to the camp. She walks between a few of the tents and giving some autographs to some of the surviving kids and adults, as well as trying to reassure them that they would be safe. She then arrives at a hospital tent and the cube lights up even brighter. She sighs before going in herself. When she sees the injuries that some of the people have, her heart feels even heavier. It was our job to protect these people, the heroes and even the military, but we failed because of the enemy we were up against. Hopefully whoever this cube is guiding me to can change that, Star thinks to herself. She meets with a few of the ones who were awake and apologizes for what happened, though some try to reassure her it wasn't her fault. One of the last people she passes though, the cube lights up more before fading. She passes the thing back and forth a few times to make sure she isn't imagining it. Once she's sure, she doesn't talk to who is there right away. She instead meets with a few others in the hospital and signs some more autographs. When she comes back though, she decides to test to see if what Izuku had said was true. He is an average-looking man with black hair and what looked like a farmer's tan, given he wasn't wearing a shirt. though the injured person has it a bit rough at this time. He's currently missing a leg and is just sleeping. So with a sigh, Star clears her throat to get the young man's attention. "Hey, anybody awake?" "Not exactly. I was having a good dream," the young man says with a grunt. He opens his silver eyes, then sits up and swings his remaining leg over the side of the bed. "So, what can I do for the #1 hero of the US?" the man says sarcastically. Star looks down a bit, knowing why he's a bit disgruntled, and asks for the man's name. He introduces himself as John 𝗏𝗏. When Star asks what happened to him, he just looks up at the hero in annoyance. "Look, I don't really know the best way to explain this, but I think you could turn the tide for us here. But I'd like to at least know who you are." John just sighs before leaning back a bit. He explained that he and his family had come out to visit his older brother in Los Angeles. "We're a bunch of farmers and oilfield workers, so when we get a chance, we jump on getting to see something new. We didn't expect this. And now I'm alone," John says while looking down. Star looks down as well, shedding a small tear for what he lost. She apologizes, saying, "If we could, I wish I could have stopped them sooner. I'm sorry for what you lost." Everyone's sorry when they hear that. Doesn't change that they're gone, John says dismissively. Star agrees but then brings up why she was there. "I have something. It was dropped when I defeated one of the beings who attacked us. We recently got in contact with some from Japan who have managed to fight back. They said these things can call. Well, they can call to those who can fight back against others." John just looks up at her with skepticism before looking at the cube in her hand. "And you think I can summon them? What good would it do? It can give us a way to fight back, protect everyone else, and maybe get some vengeance for those who were lost," Star says with a slightly pensive look. John looks back and forth between Star, the cube, and his missing leg. He seems to be thinking it over a bit before sighing. He reaches up and says, "What the hell? What have I got to lose?" Star smiles a bit before handing him the cube. It does nothing at first, even when John focuses on the cube. Star then mentions he may have to calm himself to properly summon something. He just raises an eyebrow at her suggestion but tries it anyway. He starts to feel something while calming himself. He isn't too sure on what it is, but he can feel someone reaching out, crying about some kind of darkness. "I don't know who you are, but I'm right here. You aren't alone. Let me help you," the man says with his eyes closed in concentration. Star hums a bit at his words, before covering her eyes as the cube lights up. Inside the cube, John feels as if he's reaching into the darkness to pull someone out and grabs onto a hand of the person that seemed to be crying. When the light fades, a woman stands in front of John and Star. She has silver hair and kind blue-gray eyes. Her dress is white and black with an officer's coat over it that seems to accentuate her breasts, with a blue rose on her chest. On her legs are black pantyhose with blue shoes, and for rigging she has a solid runway on her right side attached to her back with mechanical parts. On her left is a piece that seems similar to a command tower. "Hello, I am Yorktown, lead ship of the Yorktown class of carriers. Are you? Oh dear, what happened to you?" Yorktown says while looking over John. John meanwhile is a bit enamored by the woman he had managed to summon. Star on the other hand is wide-eyed at what just happened, but then a huge smile breaks out on her face. She laughs a bit before congratulating John. "You just gave the West Coast a better chance of fighting against the Sirens." Upon hearing that, Yorktown puts together what happened to John. "You've lost quite a bit, haven't you?" "Yeah, I think I could hear some of. Maybe it was a similar pain to mine when I was calling out to you," John says while looking at his hands. Yorktown smiles before taking his hands in her own. She then smiles at him before saying, "And I thank you for calling to me. Now I have the chance to help you and many others, Commander." At hearing himself being referred to as that, John tries to deny it. Suddenly though, Star returns with a wheelchair and a few other soldiers from the base. "If you don't mind, Commander, we could really use your help. We've got a way to bring in a bit more reinforcements and save more people," the #1 hero says before saluting the man. He gives her a look like she's crazy, but Yorktown's presence is enough to convince him to go along with what she has in mind. He stands with a bit of help from Yorktown to sit in the chair. Star and the soldiers then bring him to the command office, while the other refugees look on in confusion, both at John and at Yorktown. "So he's the one who managed to summon this girl, eh?" Commander 𝗏𝗏 says while looking over both John and Yorktown. John just sighs before saying, "Yeah, pretty sure the embodiment of the us Yorktown from WWII standing here confirms that. Oh, no offense, Yorktown." Yorktown just gives him a look akin to a mother scolding her son for being a smartass. 𝗏𝗏 just chuckles at the two's interactions before going back to his desk. "It's not much, but we did manage to defeat at least a few of Sirens, was it? And these were all that was left." The long-headed man then pulls out 3 cubes to show those gathered. Yorktown then nods before saying, "Those are about the only way you'll be able to call to we ship spirits. And if I'm going to fight, well, I would like a bit more help to do it." John chuckles a bit before reaching to grab one of the cubes, but he's not close enough, so instead, Star hands him the cube. He just looks down a bit sheepish, but he tries to focus on the cube to call to a new ally. It takes a minute, but he eventually summons a new ship girl. She's quite a bit smaller than Yorktown, appearing to look like a young girl. She is wearing a red skirt with a white spaghetti-strapped shirt, with one strap down and a pink jacket over that. Her legs have white stockings and white shoes. And for rigging, she has a single turret on her right side and a quintuple torpedo mount on the left side. In her hands is a small spotlight. She has sleepy red eyes and white hair and 2 wild pigtails, held in place by 2 clips with bunny ear protrusions coming out of them. When she speaks, her voice is a bit monotone and sleepy as well. Benson-class destroyer, Laffy, awaiting your orders. Commander, these ears aren't real. You don't need to stare at them, Laffy says with a look to both commanders. John meanwhile is tilting his head to the side in confusion but does apologize for staring at Laffy funny. So, we've got a destroyer now. Well, that's a start. Guess I'll try the next one, John says before wheeling a bit closer to grab the next cube. When he does, he feels a bit more accomplishment due to moving for himself. When he calls to the cube, it lights up quickly and a slightly taller girl appears. While she also has red eyes, her hair is strawberry blonde. She has a confident smirk and a sportier look about her. From her star-spangled socks with tennis shoes, a black skirt on her waist with a zip-up blue long-sleeved shirt, and a cape over her shoulders, she seems to embody American patriotism. For rigging, she has 2 sections of hull along her sides, with the right side having 2 twin-barreled gun mounts, and the left having 2 triple-barreled guns of a larger caliber. And the first thing she says to her summoner is, "Pleasure meeting you, Commander. I'm Cleveland, a Knight of the Sea. Come on, time is money. We can't afford to take a break." John just looks at her with a laugh at how excitable she is compared to his previous summon. "Not sure you should be saying something like that to someone in my condition," John says with a smirk. That is when Cleveland notices that John is in a wheelchair and missing a leg, and she starts apologizing rapidly. John just asks her to stop after the 20th sorry and grabs the last cube. With this one he calls out to get some more solid firepower to strike back at the sirens as best they can. What he summons is a tanner young woman with blue-black hair and green eyes, though one is covered by her hair. She is wearing the most revealing attire of the summons so far, being short white shorts and a tight white top with a star on it. On her mostly exposed legs, she has a U.S. Navy tattoo on the left and a black stocking with black straps on her right. For rigging, she has 2 triple-barreled guns attached to her back mechanically, and is holding a third in her right hand, both hands of which are covered by red gloves that reach up to her elbows. When she speaks, the girl seems a bit more contemplative than the previous 2. "It is good to meet you, Commander. I'm Northampton, heavy cruiser of the U.S. Navy. Or at least I'm supposed to be a heavy cruiser." John just smiles before holding out a hand to shake with Northampton. And then Cleveland. Laffy though just yawns before laying on John's lap, and then promptly goes to sleep. Star, John, and 𝗵𝗃 just look at the situation with confusion, while Yorktown is tittering off to the side. "She's always been a bit sleepy, but don't worry, she's plenty capable," Cleveland says with a smile and a bit of a laugh. The humans in the room just shrug their shoulders and move on with matters, namely, trying to fight back against the suspected next attack of the sirens. "They let us off yesterday, but they'll be back, and they'll probably hit this place to cripple the military even more," 𝗵𝗃 says while bringing up a map of the area. Star agrees and asks that the girls help to intercept the sirens before they get that close. I wonder," John says with a scratch of his chin. He then asks the commander to show how the sirens attacked previously. While the other 2 military members are confused, the ships back him up on wanting to see where they attacked. Star just shrugs and agrees. When the map and path is shown, as well as some video from the attacks, John notices a pattern. It's like they're hunting. They stir up the regular folks who can't fight back the same way, and then wait for their main target to appear. The heroes. John analyzes. Star concurs with that thought, noting, "It did seem like they were more interested in causing damage and attacking heroes more than anything. Too bad there aren't many left here. But you are still here, and they may know that you are the number 1. And a good way to trick or defeat a hero is to put civilians in harm's way. My guess, they won't be focusing on the arsenal here. They'll go for the refugees," John says while noting some of the places where the sirens attacked earlier. 𝗵𝗃 sees what the younger man is saying, and the 2 put together some ideas to ambush the sirens with the ships gathered and Star's power. "Tomorrow, the U.S. comes fighting back hard," Star says with a slam of one fist into her palm. "I hope this plan works, Commander 𝗵𝗃," Star says while waiting in Botwa base. 𝗵𝗃 hums a bit before defending the plan he and John had put together. "I'm willing to believe some of what he said. If what some of the ship girls said was true, that the sirens are just out to test humanity, well then the best ones to test in this version of humanity would be the heroes." Star looks down before nodding, noting that it would be a way tell if humans are really capable. 𝗵𝗃 then goes on to mention that she had gone off on small hunches herself to save lives. Star just chuckles a bit before saying, "True. I guess I'm just worried. Before I was sure my power, let alone the backup I had from my brothers in arms, would be enough to fight against most threats. But now, after facing off with this alien enemy and failing to stop the destruction and death, I don't want anyone else to go through what John went through. You don't have to worry about me that much, Bates, or the rest of us refugees. Your buddies did get most of them away. Hopefully this gives us a chance to really fight back against these guys. 𝗏𝗏 says on a separate link. He was currently with the rest of the refugees, who were being shipped further inland away from the San Diego Naval Base, though he was still kept in the loop thanks to the mobile command center he was stationed in. Star starts pacing after waiting for over an hour and is about ready to head off for the city when she hears an explosion. Don't do it. It's bait. You'll just end up like Cow Lady. I saw some of it after they collapsed a building on me and my family, John says firmly. Then with a bit of remorse, he thinks back on the fact that his family and others had been in a department store when the sirens attacked. He was back a little way and wasn't in the main blast radius. Unlike the rest of his family, he saw what remained of his parents and siblings after the attack, as well as the cold look of the horned girl with white hair, and a large metal shark-like construct behind her. Right as he was sure he was done, Cow Lady had appeared and stopped the siren, even helping John to get away after he had gotten the rubble off of his crushed leg. But the siren wasn't alone, and the aging heroine ended up losing her life while trying to save his. She succeeded in getting him to safety. But John can't forget the sight of the gaping hole where the woman's stomach and intestines used to be. With a sigh, John continues with, whoever is leading these sirens here wants to lure heroes away. They want to draw them into impossible situations. At least that's my take on it. Star's eyes widen again as she remembers that Cow Lady was another hero who had tried to save her family back when All Might did the same. And now that woman was dead from these invaders. Okay, I'll trust you and your girls, Star says while waiting at the refugee area. It doesn't take long before the sirens appear at 𝗵𝗲 base, and right above the refugee area, just as John and 𝗵𝗲 anticipated. Well now, it seems that there is one hero with either a brain or a lot of restraint. I thought for sure any hero left would go right for the explosion we set off, and right into the pack I had waiting for them, the high-rank siren emitter says with a mocking tone. This incises Star even more and she is about ready to engage. But 𝗵𝗲 tells her to stop for a moment. Types like her love to boast. See if you can get her to tell more of what they are after, 𝗵𝗲 says to Star. While it isn't in her usual repertoire, Star does just that while subtly giving herself a new order in case things go south. Okay, this may sound odd, but I'm really curious. What do you all even hope to accomplish with all of this? Why are going to such lengths to test what we heroes can do? Star asks while crossing her arms and glaring up at emitter. The siren snorts before saying, I suppose it won't matter if I did tell you. Plus, I was impressed at the fact that you managed to defeat some of my clones by yourself. Let's just say the Empress is interested to see if this version of humanity will fare any better than other versions. There have been those who have defeated us, and others who have fallen. But with this world's obsession with those silly, worthless, and insignificant mutations, she wanted to test just how far your reliance on something so stupid and so unneeded would take you. Early predictions put it at you all lasting about, well, a year before you were eliminated. Upon hearing that, Star and all the others listening are shocked, not just at the predictions, but the way they referred to quirks as worthless or unneeded. This is further exacerbated when emitter tells that worlds without quirks had fallen much later compared to theirs. I think one where there were no powers of any kind. They did fall, but it took over a decade. Comparatively, these quirks make you all far weaker than any other world, even those where some powers do exist, emitter says with a cruel smirk. Star tightens her fist and then puts all her strength into leaping up and punching emitter in the face. But the siren's barrier stops the head, and she as well as her forces take aim at Star. They unleash their beams upon the hero, but she manages to catch them in time. I had a feeling you'd be using lasers, so I made sure to be ready, Star shouts before making a new order to reform the 𝗏𝗏 beams into a spear, which she uses to take out a clone, but she misses the second, and then promptly gets shot from behind by the cannons on emitter's rigging. Not bad, hero, emitter says before tail smacking Star through a wall with her shark rig. She then orders her copies to start attacking the camp. She floats towards Star again and mocking what she and the rest of the heroes stood for. Star interrupts her though by saying, don't think it'll be that easy. We heroes, even weak ones like you say our quirks make us, can still inspire others, as well as giving them a bit of hope to try something new. As she finishes saying this, from the sky a squad of 𝗲𝗲 bombers dive down and attack the clones gathered, quickly destroying 5 in the first pass. Then the Wildcat fighters come in next and clear out the few siren fighters overhead, and fires some rockets into the crowd of siren clones. This shocks 𝐒𝐻𝐵, who then gets sucker punched by Star before being blasted by 𝗵𝗵𝗏 and 𝐒𝐵Land. "We got your back, Kate," 𝐒𝐿and says with a confident smirk. Star smiles back before giving 𝐒𝐿and a thumbs up. "Hey wait, where's Laffy? Is she sleeping?" Star asks before catching another laser to throw back at the sirens. Both 𝗵𝗵𝗏 and 𝐒𝐿and give nervous laughs before a siren clone comes flying at them. With a caved-in head, Star's eyes are wide, and when she turns back toward the camp, she sees Laffy going to town on the clones. She leaps up at one point, using 𝐒𝐭𝐴𝐺 to propel herself upward before kicking one clone across the face. She then takes 2 torpedoes out of her rig and chucks them precisely into the cannons 2 clones were about to fire. The resulting explosion leaves nothing of the clones, and Laffy isn't done. The little destroyer uses her spotlight to blind another clone close to the ground before getting up close and kneeing the clone in the stomach. And while it is bent over, Laffy takes aim with her turret and fires at the siren's face, which just leaves a headless siren. Laffy then runs to the water, dodging shots and beams from the sirens. While still having a sleepy look on her face, she fires off a few torpedoes at the sirens in the bay, while also shooting up into the air to knock down any siren planes or clones. When a few more get close to the water, Laffy takes out 2 more torpedoes and rushes toward the clones. She nimbly dodges their beams before getting close and kneeing one in the face. And then she uses her torpedoes as makeshift bats and bashes around 2 more clones before turning her turret to engage 1 more, and then firing off her remaining 3 torpedoes in her launcher. The long-range fire takes out 2 clones and a full-sized ship, before she kicks and bashes the first 3 engaged a few more times. She then shoves 1 torpedo into a dazed siren's mouth, and the other torpedo up another one's. Well, it's somewhere you wouldn't want it to be. And the third she gets behind and snaps its neck. Star's jaw is on the ground as well as feeling a bit inadequate. Where the hell did that come from? Well, it has to do with her history. She was a fighting ship to her end after all, even against opponents that she should have been outmatched by, 𝗵𝗵𝗏 says before getting up close herself and engaging as many of the clones as she could. She uses her right-hand cannon as a bit of a shield before kicking 1 siren across the face, and blasting it with all of her cannons. 𝐒𝐿and meanwhile takes a bit more of an acrobatic approach to the fight and does a spinning flip into the air before shooting at different angles to strike the sirens on the ground, while also using a special barrage to clear the air for more of Yorktown's fighters and bombers to hit the ships and sirens gathered. When she gets up close though, she takes more of a boxer's stance and bullet punches a few in the face. It stuns the gathered sirens enough to let 𝐒𝐿and lay into them with her guns again. Star shakes off the shock of the way the ship girls were fighting and does her best to keep up with them, even jumping on top of some of the flying sirens and aircraft to attack or throw them into each other, while the few other soldiers who were in the surrounding region also engaged the siren ships with whatever ordnance they had. 𝗵𝗃 and John have just been watching the whole matter with a mix of intrigue and excitement. 𝗵𝗃 is happy that Star and the ship girls appear to be winning, while John is impressed by the way some of them fight, especially Laffy. "Didn't think that sleepy little bunny had that in her," John says with a chuckle. As he's watching though, he has a bad feeling growing in the back of his mind. He then asks the driver of the mobile command center to take him to just inside of the city of San Diego. While the soldiers are confused, they go along with it since they were told to follow John's orders. "I hope I'm just being paranoid," John thinks to himself as they head into the town. Yorktown meanwhile had been waiting closer to Los Angeles when the sirens first arrived. She launched her first wave of fighters and bombers after the explosion Star had been tempted to investigate, under John's orders. It took her about half an hour to reach the main battlefield, and the ship girls as well as the soldiers and Star were starting to feel exhausted. But now that she was much closer, she could use something special to help her comrades. "Now then, I think it's time for some vengeance," Yorktown says with a smile. She sneaks up behind a few clones and quickly sucker punches and kicks the 2 down to the water. She then launches a wave of bombers at the 2 below her before jumping onto one of the aircraft she had launched earlier. She then rides the plane into the main battlefield, before launching more planes to engage the enemies. When Star and 𝐒𝐿and had been knocked back again by the original 𝗒𝐻𝐵, Yorktown came out of nowhere and kamikazed the plane she was riding on into the siren. Once 𝗒𝐵 was reeling from the hit, Yorktown spun around and back-kicked the siren across the face, before drop-kicking the top of her head, right into Star, who unleashes the strongest punch she can again. But unlike before where the siren's barrier stopped her, Star connected cleanly to 𝗒𝐵's face, seemingly breaking the siren's nose. "𝐷AMNIT. I wasn't expecting this. You ship girls weren't supposed to be here," 𝗒𝐵 says while wiping the blood from her face. Meanwhile, Laffy, 𝗵𝗵𝗏, and the sailors and soldiers managed to clean up the rest of the clones and ships 𝗒𝐵 had gathered. The high-ranked siren looks around in panic and annoyance at her plans being derailed, let alone the fact that there were no civilians at the base at all. Her rigging picks her up again as she looks over all the gathered enemies in one place. She grits her teeth before saying, "I was only going to use this if some heroes showed up there, but I can still leave some lasting damage." 𝗲𝗵𝗲 then shows a detonate command with her rigging and then presses the holographic button. Right as it does, a countdown of about 5 seconds is shown. A wicked smile grows on 𝗲𝗵𝗲's face as the countdown goes down. All of the human side's eyes are wide with worry now, as they have no idea where the possible bomb the 𝗲𝗵𝗲 placed was. But just as the countdown reaches 0, the explosion doesn't happen in the city. Instead, a large explosion that would have taken out at least 5 city blocks is seen out at sea. "Okay, glad I went with a large boost before doing that," John says while laying on the sidewalk in the city. When his group reached the city, he told the men to check for abnormal frequencies, anything that could be receiving or transmitting a signal. John orders before asking for a crutch. When sensors pick up something odd, John tells the men to head for the source. When they arrived, they found the initial blast site, as well as a large device sitting in the crater. One of the soldiers commented, "If that isn't a bomb, I'll pay out $1,000 to the next guy who walks into the barracks." While most of his comrades and John give him a flat look, they do agree with the man. They think about calling in the bomb squad to disarm the weapon as they get a closer look at the device. But as they are inspecting it, the device suddenly lights up. Sensing trouble, John orders the men to get away. He then leaps forward, grabbing the device and activating his quirk, Maximize. "I'll have to go 100 times most likely," John thinks to himself while he balances on his one leg before spinning and chucking the bomb out to the ocean. He of course falls down afterwards, but he succeeded in stopping the destruction of part of San Diego. "What the hell, man? What the heck kind of quirk do you have? How come you're not a hero?" a few of the soldiers asks as they help John get up again. Once he has his crutch back and is walking back to the mobile command center, he answers a few of the questions. "My quirk is, well, I just call it Maximize. I can amp my strength and physical abilities to certain levels. What I did there was max my strength 100 times what it naturally is. I can probably go higher, but I've never really tried. Didn't want to. And yes, it does affect my durability, but I didn't think I'd need it active when I got crushed under the rubble." John explains first. He then goes on to tell them that he never wanted to be a hero or anything like that. He just enjoyed his life on the farm back home. He'd be up for adventures for a period of time. "But I don't like the idea of having to fight idiots who think their quirks mean that they can do whatever they want, or that they have to make some flashy spectacle that other idiots can be the audience for." When John explains that measure to his thinking, a few of the soldiers do see his point, especially at the fact that he'd be having to fight various idiots every single day most likely. "I think I get what you mean, man. Plus, you don't seem to enjoy the city life that much. You're just you're a good old boy from the farm. And not too dissimilar, since I'm from a farm in Nebraska. Name's Chester or Chet." The now named Chet says to John before holding out his hand to shake. John takes it with a bit of a smile. He then tells the men to head back to base. Upon seeing her bomb threat thwarted, 𝗲𝗵𝗲 is even more livid. But now she has more issues with the fact that all of her enemies are still nearby, and now she has no distraction to pull their attention. "Well now, what do you think, Yorktown? Should we let Star and the soldiers finish this one? Or do we turn her over to Laffy?" Cleveland says with a smirk. Laffy meanwhile had been napping slightly while standing. But upon hearing Cleveland mention her, she wakes up with a little yawn, and then pulls out 2 of her torpedoes and swings them around like bats. "Well, I have to say that was more impressive than I thought it would be, especially that wildcard in the city. Seems we'll have to reevaluate some of our plans," is heard above the base. Once again, Tester appears to help her failed sister. Upon seeing her, the ship girls quickly fire on her with the soldiers following suit, but her barrier protects her for the most part, and she fires back with a beam barrage. Star catches the few shot her way and sends them back at the siren, but it distracts the rest to give 𝗲𝗵𝗲 more time to recover. The beaten siren then flips off the whole group before disappearing into the portal, while Tester titters at her colleague's attitude. "Oh, before I go, consider this a special reward for that broken hero, or whatever he calls himself. He was more interesting than I believed," Tester says before summoning a pair of wisdom cube in her hands. She then drops them before warping away. With that done, the battle with the sirens in the US comes out with a standing victory. When John and his crew make it back to base, they are greeted with celebrating and cheers, with his fleet of girls happily reporting the defeat of the siren invasion. But the cheers start anew when Chet and a few of the others reveal that John had been the one who chucked the bomb out into the ocean. While most of the soldiers and Star are amazed at what John had done, his fleet quickly comes up and checks him over, with Yorktown hugging him tightly. "That was reckless. What if you didn't have a power to stop it? What if you didn't find it and it went off with you in the blast radius? What if?" "I know, but I did have something to do about it. And if I didn't do it, they would have made it seem like our victory had a price to pay. I didn't feel like letting them have that." John says with a slightly confident look in his eyes, one that makes Yorktown blush. Upon seeing this, some of the soldiers are quick to wolf whistle at the interactions of the two. But the cough of Commander 𝗵𝗃 brings back the attention to the battle. Well done all of you. We've managed to win a major victory this day. Thanks to all of our soldiers here, Star and Stripes, and of course the ship girls Yorktown, Laffy, Cleveland, and Northampton, let alone the summoning, command, and apparently power of Commander John 𝗏𝗏, 𝗵𝗃 says, and the soldiers cheer again. He does bring it down a bit to say that they still have work to do, and more battles ahead. With that, the soldiers head back to clean up after the battle, while Northampton and Laffy go out to collect shards to help build a new set of cubes. Though 𝗵𝗃 isn't sure about trusting the cubes that Tester dropped, I don't think we have to worry about as much as we may think. You said Omitter called her Tester, right? My guess, she's just wanting to see what kind of havoc she can build up for later battles, including giving her enemies a leg up, John says with a grimace. Star nods before noting that Tester seemed intrigued by her when she caught the beams and threw them back, so she most likely gets a kick out of watching battles unfold, Star says with a grimace of her own. 𝗵𝗃 just sighs because he knows John will probably use the cubes no matter what he says. When Northampton and Laffy return, they have enough shards to make 3 more cubes. Now it's just up to your luck, Commander, Northampton says with a nod. John returns the gesture and takes up a cube. Yorktown though stops him to mention the pattern for ship types. You might want to try for a heavier ship. No offense, Northampton, but we could use some battleship muscle, Yorktown says, and two agree. Not Laffy though, she's sleeping off to the side. John just hums before taking a second cube and gripping them tight. The light flashes from the cubes, and when they fuse together into a new ship, the girl is quite a bit different from the ones summoned before. What stands out first are the 3 large triple-barreled turrets beside and behind the girl. She is tall with a dark tan, silver-white hair, and red eyes once again. Under her eyes though are a pair of black lines, akin to war paint or eye black for athletes. She is wearing a black bikini top, with a white tube top that has the letters 𝐴LBM on it. Around her hips are tight black shorts, while her stomach has more of the black lines on it. On her legs, she is wearing tight black stockings with tennis shoes under that. Around her shoulders is a white, black, and teal jacket that appears very tattered from various battles. And in her hands is a massive weapon that looks akin to a reaper's scythe. When she speaks up, she is very calm compared to what John was expecting. Given her sporty appearance, let alone being a battleship, I thought I'd be dealing with another Cleveland, John thinks while the girl introduces herself. I'm Alabama, 4th ship of the South Dakota class, also known as Lucky A. Alabama says with a monotone expression. Most of the humans gathered are a bit intimidated by the girl though, especially after getting a good look at the scythe she was carrying. John though just nods before welcoming the girl. Okay, this time I'm going for a little more air power. We were known for that back in the day after all, John says while taking 2 cubes again. He concentrates again, and when the cubes are done with the light show, Northampton and Yorktown are shocked at who was summoned. The girl this time had blonde hair tied up in 2 pigtails. Atop her head was a black and yellow cowboy hat. Draped from her shoulders is a large black coat with yellow lines, while her breasts are covered by a black bikini top. For pants she has tight black jean shorts, and she has black knee-length boots on her feet. She has a confident smile and mischievous light in her green eyes. Just like Yorktown, she has a runway on her right side. But unlike what had seemed like standard aircraft on Yorktown's rig, she had huge B-52 bombers on the runway. Yo, I'm Hornet. I don't want to impose, but don't call me Big Wasp and we'll be fine. My sisters are both legendary, but just wait and see what I can do, Hornet says with a big smile. And then suddenly both Northampton and Yorktown jump on her with big hugs. John and Star both chuckle, with Star especially happy. Kinda reminds me of my sister, Star says. Cleveland pats Star on the back saying she knows it well too. I'm a big sister as well, so I know what it means to care for and worry about your younger siblings. The lead ship of the Cleveland class says, well, maybe I'll summon one of your sisters this next time, 'cause I've only got 1 cube left, John says while grabbing the last cube. The ship that comes out though is not a Cleveland class. The ship that appears is a redhead with blue teal eyes. She's a bit shorter than Cleveland and is wearing a black shirt under a white and red shirt and blue skirt for clothing. On her legs are black garter belt stockings and loafers for her shoes. Her rigging meanwhile is much smaller compared to the last 2 but seems to be gunslinger focused. Both sides have 3 twin-barreled turrets, and they seem to be controlled from pistol-like protrusions from the gear. Her general attitude just seems extra happy and is expressed with, hello, I'm San Diego, the cruiser who earned the most stars in World War II. Hee, that's it for my introduction. I'm just too good, San Diego says with a little wink. Well, that seems very convenient. We just saved San Diego, and now we have the spurt of San Diego in both ship and maybe city form, Star says with a little laugh. 𝗵𝗃 though sees all of this as a very good omen going forward. Commander 𝗏𝗏, We'll get you set up with more of a proper commission with the military, as well as getting you a new leg, 𝗵𝗃 tells John before saluting the man. Star's buddies from her unit then catch up and say that they'll be celebrating tonight, and all the girls are invited too. Though maybe we shouldn't have ones like 𝗵𝗃, right? As one of the guys is saying that, 𝗵𝗃 swipes the bottle he had behind himself and downs the whole thing. Not bad. Could go for something stronger, 𝗵𝗃 says with another yawn. This just gets everyone laughing and ready to celebrate the first big victory for the US in the Siren War. Alright, we've got our fleet. Now we need to start hitting the sirens again. I know you only had yesterday to celebrate, but we've already lost so much. We need your help to take back the West Coast. The newly promoted Rear Admiral Lower Half 𝗵𝗃 said to the gathered shipgirls. Next to him stood Star and Stripe along with John, now dressed in a proper commander's uniform. While he still only had one leg, he could at least address his troops in proper uniform. With 𝗵𝗃's address done, John outlined the plan he, Star, and 𝗵𝗃 had put together in the morning. It was simple in essence: send the fleet of shipgirls out and engage siren forces still stationed around the besieged city. But John had a special set of orders for the girls. First of all, I want all of you to come back alive. No going on suicide charges. And it's not just because you're all we have right now. I don't. We understand, Commander, and we'll do our best to follow that, Yorktown said with a smile directed her commander's way. He returned the smile and gave his next few orders, namely to aid any civilians or heroes that were still alive, and to gather up whatever materials they could find to summon more allies. With the orders given, the fleet of U.S. Navy shipgirls saluted and leapt out into the Pacific, the rigs gleaming in the sun. Once they had left, the commanding officers adjourned to the command center. On the way, Star was questioning how much longer Pearl Harbor could hold out. If need be, we might want to call our allies in Japan, see if they have forces to spare. Wonder what's going on back there. Turns out not much at the moment. After the call from Star and Stripe, there had been little siren activity so far around the nation of Japan. All they had done for 2 days was patrol, with little event. On board. Seriously, you summoned me because you needed replacement forces. But right after I get here, nothing happens. What the hell? Kawakaze says, disgruntled after another uneventful patrol of Suruga Bay and the surrounding sea. Izuku just chuckles nervously before asking, isn't it a good thing if it's peaceful? Normally, Commander, yes, but this is kind of unsettling. Like the calm before a storm, Ki commented while watching over from her position as flagship. Izuku hummed a bit before asking what Sujita thought. I would agree with her, but for now, perhaps we can do something different for the next few days. We'll discuss it when the fleet returns. Izuku nods before signaling the fleet to return. Once back, Sujita brings up that they all could use a break. It is true that the sirens are still out there, and are still a threat, but frankly you all could use a little time off. Nagara is the only one of you who has had any time to relax. Admittedly that is due to injury, but I digress. If you all can work out a schedule, I think we could allow for 1 day off a week or so. It surprises the shipgirls, but they are willing to agree when Izuku puts in his own thoughts. I kind of want to see what is happening in Mustafa. We've been focused on the ocean and base. Besides, I think a few of you could stand to see what it is and who it is you are fighting for, Izuku says with a smile. A few of the others agree and say that they'd like to go into town as well, with Kai volunteering to stay behind for the time being, as she was the flagship of the fleet. The rest go back and forth on how to decide who gets the day off, when Inko puts forth the idea of deciding with rock, paper, scissors. After a few rounds, 𝗃𝗃 comes out the winner. She is given a day pass, but she then wraps Izuku in a hug, saying, I'd be more than happy to take you into town, Izuku. You need a break too. You're still just a child and I'm sure there are things you'd like to do. Izuku blushes a bit but does agree with his one-cent suggestion. The next day, while the rest of the fleet is on patrol, Izuku and 𝗃𝗃 spend time in Mustafa. 𝗃𝗃 had changed from her usual crisp white uniform to a pink sweater and plaid skirt combination with black pantyhose and black loafer shoes. Izuku meanwhile just had a simple t-shirt, sweatshirt, and jeans outfit with his usual red tennis shoes. For the most part the day goes easy. Not a single villain attack occurs during their transit and initial walk around the city, which surprises Izuku as there seem to be at least 3 incidents a day before the siren attacks. 𝗃𝗃 enjoys walking around and enjoying some of the sights and sounds her crew would talk about while aboard her. I doubt I'll be able to enjoy the other things they would talk about in the current company, but perhaps someday, perhaps even with you, Commander, 𝗃𝗃 says with a smile, then a coy smirk directed Izuku's way. He doesn't understand what she is getting at, but he does say he hopes she gets her fill of living now. At one of the shopping centers, the pair take their time wandering around, stopping to shop at a few stores, even picking up some Hero and All Might merchandise from one store. Though Izuku blushes bright when 𝗃𝗃 makes for a lingerie shop, and then teasingly asking the boy to come in with her. He refuses at first, but 𝗃𝗃 quickly grabs his arm and drags the boy into the shop. While inside, the other women in the store can't help but gossip. How cute. A brother and sister pair out shopping. He's so embarrassed. It's adorable. The two are quite the pair of snacks. Izuku shivers at that last statement as he looks around nervously. And who would stand before him but a pro hero from the area? She had long raven hair which is tied back in a ponytail. She had glasses on and was wearing a sweater-like dress, but the boy could recognize her based on her voice and the look in her eyes. You're Midnight, right? Izuku started blushing more as he tried to say her title. 𝐭𝐚𝐲 could tell that the boy was uneasy, so she shied away from her usual teasing and toying. Rather than her usual teasing grin, she put on a more relaxed and relatable face. I am young man, but it is my day off, so it's just Nimari right now. Nimari says with a gentle pat to the boy's head. This helps Izuku relax a bit, and 𝐻𝐻𝐽 ruins it by bursting out of the changing room to say, I am his big sister. Don't you dare horn in on the commander, madam. Nimari looks up in a bit of annoyance to 𝐻𝐻𝐽, while Izuku turns back in surprise, only to quickly blush and have a massive nosebleed. 𝐻𝐻𝐽 had come out of the dressing room in just a black bra and panties. But that wasn't what sent Izuku over. That would be due to the fact that 𝐻𝐻𝐽 failed to properly fasten her new acquisitions, and she promptly spilled out of the bra for all of the shop to see. While I want to be angry at you using the term madam with me, perhaps you should focus on fixing your appearance, Nimari said while cradling Izuku's head and adjusting her glasses. 𝐻𝐻𝐽 looked down and realized what she meant and quickly turned back into the changing room with a blush of her own. Nimari chuckles a bit and then offers to treat the sibling pair as she saw it to a drink. 𝐻𝐻𝐽 accepts, and Izuku groggily does once he has recovered from the nosebleed. 𝐻𝐻𝐽 pays for her new underwear, and the trio head out to the food court. So, you two are out shopping. Any particular reason? Kind of. We've been away from the city for a while and, well, I lived around here. I just wanted to know what had been happening after the siren attacks, Izuku says after sipping his cola. Nimari sighs before acknowledging the reason the two were displaced. She then notes that things have changed a bit for the heroes now. It used to be straightforward with what we did, fighting villains, rescuing civilians, and patrolling, or even in my case teaching the next generation of heroes. But those aliens have changed everything. Nimari explained that most heroes had been regulated to rescue work and their patrols did nothing to put civilians at ease. So many saw the videos of All Might getting knocked around by the sirens. People have lost almost all faith that heroes can keep them safe. Heck, even some villains started helping us, saying it was their world and country too. I don't disagree, but it does make you wonder what our purpose could even be anymore. Do we even have one? Nimari says while looking into her coffee. Izuku isn't sure on how to answer, so 𝐻𝐻𝐽 speaks her own mind. I don't think it is as cut and dry as you want to believe, though some of the fault may come from all of your reliance on your strange powers. You are also focused on those alone that you have forgotten some of the essence of battle and what it means to protect something. At least that is how I see it. With her piece said, 𝐻𝐻𝐽 takes a drink of her tea. Nimari meanwhile is a bit confused by the way 𝐻𝐻𝐽 phrases her points, especially with calling their quirks strange powers, as if the girl didn't understand or accept the term. All of a sudden, a crash is heard as a man is floating above the center of the shopping center on a glass ball. He reaches his hands out and pulls the glass from the various shops to himself. The end has come. The beings who have appeared are the first step toward the end. We must find a way through the mirrors and away from our doom. The strange man rants before attacking some of the civilians. A few he simply strikes with the glass orbs. Others he traps in glass, with the people pounding on it, hoping to be freed. This is bad. You need to get out of here. I'll try to 𝐻𝐻𝐽. Ready for combat. Aye, Commander. All of a sudden, 𝐻𝐻𝐽's clothing changes to her standard uniform. She then summons her rigging and katana to her side, with a smile on her face. Izuku on the other hand steps forward to survey the situation. He hums before saying to Nimari, Miss Midnight, I know you were planning to distract him, but your quirk won't be very effective in this situation. He's floating high enough away to be out of your range, unless we have a different set of ways to get it to him. Nimari is shocked at the way Izuku took charge, so she numbly nods along. He then tells 𝐻𝐻𝐽 to keep the villain busy for a bit and free some of the civilian. Back of the blade. Understood, 𝐻𝐻𝐽 says before leaping down and freeing some of trapped people. Meanwhile, Izuku directs Nimari to a maintenance section nearby. Once there, he tells the hero to use her quirk full blast. Are you nuts? What good would that please? Just trust me. Izuku has a determined look upon his face that surprised Nimari again. She sighs before saying he shouldn't blame her for what happens next. Right as she pulls up her sleeve to release her somnambulist mist, the fans in the room start sucking the mist out. Izuku had turned on the system after he noted it was controlled from the room they were in. While this is happening, 𝐻𝐻𝐽 has been deflecting or breaking the glass orbs sent her way by the now introduced Star Servant. Before he can start on a rant about her being a part of the end of the world, Midnight's quirk starts to fill the area. Some of the mist blasts right down upon the villain. But he doesn't fall. It's working, but it is slow. We need more concentration. Nomiuri says after the two had returned. Izuku hummed before putting together the rest of his plan. 𝐻𝐸𝐽, fire at the 4 shops we visited earlier with rounds, then shoot above the villain. While Nomiuri thinks the boy is ordering for collateral damage, 𝗂𝐸𝐽 can see what her commander is getting. She fires away, and the resulting blasts push the mist away and closer around the enemy. Izuku then tells 𝗂𝐸𝐽 to leap into the mist and break the glass. Nomiuri again is confused as she is sure that her quirk got the job done. 𝗂𝐸𝐽 does as instructed, and leaps into the mist cloud, and breaks the glass bubble helmet that 𝗬𝗏𝗏 had formed to keep from breathing in the mist as he started to feel the effect. But with that gone, and 𝗂𝐸𝐽 kicking the man in the stomach hard enough to knock the wind out of him, he gets a deep breath of the somnambulist power. 𝗂𝐸𝐽 starts to feel a bit drowsy herself, but she shakes out of it as the two fall to the ground. 𝗬𝗏𝗏 is fast asleep, with a bit of a lump on his head, and 𝗂𝐸𝐽 is smiling before sheathing her katana. Nomiuri meanwhile is a bit shocked, as are a few of the others who were still around and watching. Glad that worked. Too bad we had to damage the shops. I would say the damages are minimal, especially given this maniac did some of the damage himself. Izuku and 𝗂𝐸𝐽 say before the police start swarming in, and the media right behind them. While the media first give credit to Midnight for the defeat and capture of 𝗬𝗏𝗏, the pro-hero rejects the claim. I only let out my quirk. The two who did all of the defeating and saving. Was this brother and sister pair? Or at least that is what I thought you were. Who are you really? 𝗂𝐸𝐽 and Izuku look to each other, with the former looking at her commander like she wants him to take credit, but the latter is nervous for the whole idea of speaking in front of others and the media. But 𝗂𝐸𝐽 doesn't give him a choice and bumps the boy toward the press. All of the cameras and reporters look to the boy with intent. Izuku gulps before saying, "It is true I put together a plan to defeat 𝗬𝗏𝗏, but it wouldn't have worked were it not for the efforts of these two, Miss Midnight and IJN Heavy Cruiser 𝗂𝐸𝐽. I was simply following my commander's orders, as he was the one who summoned me to protect this nation from the sirens," 𝗂𝐸𝐽 said with a smile directed at Izuku, who was internally freaking out as the reporters started to swarm the boy, asking questions ranging from who he was and how he summoned 𝗂𝐸𝐽, to questions about the sirens and what kind of hero he was. After a minute or so, 𝗂𝐸𝐽 tossed a few of the reporters aside and grabbed her commander. She then leapt away, leaving everyone there in confusion, especially Nomiuri, who was impressed by the planning skills a child barely into the double-digit age range had come up with. Meanwhile, in a different city, the boss of the 𝐒𝐻𝐼 Hasekai is meeting with his daughter and her husband. They were spending time in their little home and playing with their infant daughter. She's growing quickly. She is dad. I wonder what her quirk will be like. The boss looks down at this and sighs. His daughter notices and asks what was wrong. I just wonder what I can do now. Due to quirks and the rise of the heroes and villains, we Yakuza have nowhere near the presence or respect we once did. The old man goes on to say that the chivalry and honor that their organizations were known for has no place, noting that it is all about quirks and showing off that way. There's no honor, no respect, just groups of fools looking for the next challenge or... Right as he was talking, boss could sense something. He reached for the tanto in his obi and drew it with a reverse grip. When his son-in-law asked what was going on, he quickly silenced the young man. "Come out, I know you are there," he shouted while looking toward the tree line and bushes. Suddenly, a rush of white and black bursts out of the bushes. It runs right at the old man, who takes a swing with his tanto, but the figure easily spins over and dodges the strike. The parents in the yard though quickly cover up their infant girl to protect her from whatever animal was now in their backyard. Turns out it was an animal-like girl. She had long white hair, pink eyes, and white dog ears coming from the top of her head and a fluffy white dog tail coming from her back. She was dressed in a skimpy white and black school uniform. She was currently staring down the boss of the 𝗓𝗏 Hasekai, growling all the while. Said boss though feels a bit silly for being so wary of what appeared to be nothing more than a runaway girl, though he also knew she was quite skilled from the way she reacted to his attack. "Let's take it easy, little one. I'm not going to hurt you," he says before setting his tanto down. The dog girl looks at him with a tilt of her head, but after the man sits down away from his weapon she relaxes as well, at least until everyone hears a loud grumbling coming from the little girl. The boss's daughter laughed a bit before saying, "Are you hungry, little one? We were just about to have dinner. We're having yakiniku." Upon hearing that, the dog girl perks up and her tail starts wagging wildly. The boss laughs at this before offering to watch Eri while the two made dinner. The dog girl watches the parents walk off to the kitchen, leaving her with the old man and the infant Eri. When Eri starts to fuss a bit, her grandfather leans over to lend his finger to the girl. The dog girl meanwhile is curious and eases her way over to the infant and old man. When she gets close enough, she starts to sniff at the little girl, cocking her head back and forth a few times. The old man isn't sure how safe this could be given how the girl acted earlier, but he allows it for the time being. Suddenly, Eri reaches out and pats the dog girl on the head. The dog girl is surprised but doesn't react aggressively. Instead, she relaxes a bit at the gentle patting the infant girl is giving her. Her grandfather is astonished by the reaction, and he also tries to pet the strange dog girl. She eyes the man warily again, but when he eventually places his hand on her head, she relaxes even more. The old man just smiles before saying, "Maybe I'll be taking in another stray today. Wonder if you've got a name." The dog girl looks up at the man and seems to be contemplating. After about 5 minutes, the little dog girl seems to remember something. 𝐈𝐧𝐿, she says roughly, as if not used to speaking. The old man hums before saying, "Well then, hello 𝐒𝐬𝐽. It's nice to meet you." He then puts his hand down, and 𝐒𝐬𝐽 playfully puts her own paw in his to shake. "Quite the spectacle you two made," 𝐶𝐠žita said to 𝐒𝐿𝐴 and 𝐒𝐻𝐻𝐾 after the pair had returned to the base. 𝐒𝐿𝐴 was blushing a bit while 𝐒𝐻𝐻𝐾 had a proud look on her face. On the Admiral's computer was a video of the attack by 𝗧𝗏𝗏, and how 𝐒𝐻𝐻𝐾 fought the villain, and then Midnight giving the two praise for saving everyone, with the rest of the fleet nodding in approval at how the two handled themselves. 𝐭𝐸 meanwhile was slightly panicked about the fact her son had been involved in a villain attack, but also extremely proud of the way he handled himself in the situation. 𝗧𝗏𝗏 sighed before noting that they would have to make a statement to the press. "We had been keeping the ship girls a secret for the last week, but now the genie is out of the bottle. I guess I'll have to talk about some of this," 𝐒𝐿𝐴 said with a nervous look to his commanding officer. 𝗧𝗏𝗏 nodded before noting that one of his ships would have to speak as well. 𝗧𝗏𝗏 noted that it should be 𝗂𝐻𝐾 that is the ship that explains more to the public. "Aside from having a friendly and warm demeanor, you look the most professional and military out of the girls. No offense to the rest of you. None taken, Commander. Quite a few of us have attires that would be more distracting," Qiai notes while looking down at her own semi-exposed breasts. Ayanami agreed, noting that her Akashi, Nagato, and Kawakazi looked too young to be taken seriously. This comment makes Nagato mad though, and she says, "I am a member of the Big Seven, and one of the leading battleships of the Sakura Empire. I can act ass." I bit my tongue. This gets a few snorts of laughter, with Kawakazi rolling her eyes at the rest for being childish. After the room has calmed again, 𝗧𝗏𝗏 notes that they will call a conference in a few days to address the situation. Before then though, rumors and details kept circulating about the hero who had fought a villain and the person who had directed her and Midnight to defeat 𝗧𝗏𝗏, some even wondering if 𝗂𝐻𝐾 was just an extension of the boy's quirk. But those ideas were pushed aside when the press conference started. "I know many of you have at least heard about the invasions happening around the nation and the world. What most do not know is that the heroes have not been able to fight back against this threat. The ones who have been aiding humanity against our new enemy are these ladies. 𝗂𝐻𝐾," 𝗧𝗏𝗏 explains before deferring to the heavy cruiser. She stands with gives a professional bow to the reporters before telling some of her tale. How she and a few others were the spirits of ships long in the past. "From a war we started, others finished. But now we all have the same enemy. I myself am the spirit of the IJN heavy cruiser, 𝗂𝐻𝐾. But I owe my existence on this plane to someone else." She looks to 𝗂𝐿𝐴 and the boy stands. He was wearing a proper uniform fitting his new rank, and his normally wild hair was somewhat tamed. But that didn't ease his nerves or stage fright with having to speak before all the reporters. 𝗂𝐻𝐾 places a calming hand on his shoulder and it slightly alleviates his panic. He takes a deep breath before saying, "I'm sorry to anyone who may have lost their homes or were forced out of their homes due to my orders. But this was necessary. The sirens seek to end as many lives as they can and destroy almost anything in their path to see if we can hope to defeat them. And I refuse to let them take any more lives than they already have." As 𝗂𝐿𝐴 says this, he gains a stern, determined look on his face, one that shocks many, as this was just a young boy, not a seasoned hero or soldier, who was showing a level of determination that few others could or would in the current age. With that done, 𝗂𝐿𝐴 and Himori then explained that they had managed to summon a few other ships and push back the sirens. "But we cannot become complacent. The enemy is still out there and they will keep coming. And we and our fleets will be there to stop them, and we will guide them to protect all we can," Himori says. With these words, a few more are put at ease with what could be coming in the future. Though there were those who were shocked and angered at who was now the biggest hero of the nation. Deku, he just got lucky. He managed to find one of those things that brings those ship bitches. "I'm still going to be the best hero," Bakugo shouts after seeing the conference and video of 𝗂𝐿𝐴 helping to defeat a villain and guiding his fleet to fight sirens. Though he would later be angered at the fact that hero schools would be shifting from combat-focused elements to primarily focusing on rescue and evacuation, meaning his hopes to be a combat hero just like he saw his idol as were practically dashed. Even more so when more villains were helping with evacs and even surrendering. A few even saying, "There's no point to attacking or rampaging now. Not with what is out there." A large shark-faced villain who was originally a purse snatcher. Others even helped to bring in other dangerous or rampaging villains like Muscular, During that time, elsewhere in the world the fleet's summon managed to make some headway in pushing back some of the sirens. The West Coast Fleet managed to break down and push out the sirens that were setting up fortresses in Portland and Seattle, though the fighting ended up leveling what was left of the cities. But this also allowed for the finding of more survivors and cubes to summon more allies. With a bit of help from John, a young woman named Mara managed to summon her own ships. She had lived in Portland with her family but was the only survivor after the first wave of attacks, and was trapped and trying to survive when the fleet showed up and helped her. So I just need to focus on my feelings. That's about the only way I can explain it. It may help you to imagine someone, or to focus on trying to feel something from the other side, John said while handing the woman a cube. It took a few tries, but she eventually summoned Lexington and Saratoga with Portland and Indianapolis. Upon seeing how each of the sisters acted, Mara started to tear up. "What's wrong?" Saratoga said with a tilt of her head. "It's just, sniff the way you are acting. It's a lot like my sisters. But I never understood. I just felt they were stifling or treating me like a kid because I was the youngest." Mara starts to break down and Lexington gently glides over to the girl before wrapping her in a hug. She pats her summoner's head a few times before saying, "Just let it out. Plenty of us who are ship girls know what it is like to lose sisters. And we may not be the same, but if you want to you can think of us like your sisters too." Mara tears up more before gripping Lexington tighter and crying more. Each of her other ships come forward and hug her tight to help comfort the young woman. John and Yorktown then help walk Mara through guiding her ships and organizing the fleet, and they hit a few more stragglers from the sirens and the girl gets enough cubes to summon another pair of ships, being California and Atlanta. With this help they were able to punch a way toward Hawaii, giving the beleaguered forces of Pearl Harbor the strength to push back the invading forces. "Glad to see you held out. We're the relief forces," John said while walking on the new metal leg and with a cane. Marcus Miller greeted the new fleet with his flagship Arizona. "We finally got some breathing room. I'd say it took you long enough, but I'm guessing you've had a rough time too." John just smirks before lifting up his pant leg and tapping his metal limb. "You could say that." They get a rundown from the pair of commanders on the island, while some of the ships they brought are helping people to load up and leave the islands. Aside from Arizona, Marcus's fleet had Downs, Cassin, Bog, Vestal, and Montpelier, with Honolulu and Mullany in reserve. They had been focused on defense and been shooting down whatever air forces sent to attack the islands. David Rasmussen meets the group next with his flagship Enterprise. "Glad to see some friendly faces. My fleet's been going out on strikes, but the enemy seems to always have plenty in reserve. Aside from me, North Carolina and Minneapolis. Thanks to all the battles they had fought, there were 6 other ships with for the strike fleet, namely Eldridge, Denver, Quincy, Gridley, San Juan, and Independence. Well, you've had plenty of fighting. Any chance you've got some extra cubes?" John says with a raise of his eyebrow. The 2 commanders then show the way to the warehouse where they have 8 cubes. "We couldn't get them to work. Nothing we did made anything appear," Marcus notes with a shrug. John hums before picking one up. He reaches out as best he can before feeling something odd. "Joking. No. Fun-loving and ... wet. What are you doing and saying?" Mara says with a skeptical look at the man. John tries to explain what he was thinking and feeling from the cubes, before he wonders if submarines could be ship girls as well. "They can," Arizona says with calm look. Marcus then asks, "Why didn't you tell us that earlier?" "You didn't ask, and I thought it was obvious." Mara and David facepalm before each take a pair of cubes. They follow John's suggestions and finally get the cubes to work, with Mara summoning Dace, John summoning Albacore, David awakening Nautilus, and Marcus calling forth Archerfish. The 2 subs though automatically trying to push their commander's buttons. "Is this normal?" John asks Yorktown, who titters before confirming that it was, at least for our subs. They tend to joke around more and try to prank people. John and Marcus let out annoyed sighs before the former chops the top of Albacore's head, and the latter giving a rundown of what had happened in the last month and a half. Though none of the commanders had enough for full sub-fleets, they each agreed to leave them in the command of Marcus for now. "We need deep probe scouts, and subs are best for that. Better they be here than anywhere else," Mara notes while the rest help with offloading supplies and signal boosters for Pearl Harbor. Once the resupply was done, and the civilians had been evacuated from the Hawaiian Islands, Mara and John's fleets escorted the transport ships back to the mainland, with the latter noting, "This war has only just begun. Over the next 3 years, this general trend continues, with sirens appearing and attacking from the seas and attacking the bases where ship girls were stationed, but each time they were rebuffed, with minimal casualties on the human side of the war." Izuku, who at this time was 14 years old, had grown into a capable commander and strategist for the JMSDF. having tricked enough of the high-rank sirens to where they rarely attacked where he was directing his fleet. Thanks to this, a few people had started to move back into the coastal areas, especially those near Mustafa City. Quite the impact you've made, Commander. If only we could fully end this conflict. Izuku's current secretary ship Kongo, one of the ships Izuku had summoned over the 3 years, had commented. Currently Izuku commanded 15 ship girls on his base, though Akashi was almost constantly at base due to her position as a repair ship. One of his best newly acquired ships though was a surprising carrier he had summoned a few months ago, that being Katsuragi. Though her competence wasn't what surprised Izuku and quite a few others on base. That was due to her appearance, especially when compared with Teihu from Photo Base. Speaking of, Himori had also gained new subordinates over the 3 years as well, namely the subs I-19, I-25, destroyers Ushio and Yurikaze, cruisers Suzuya and Nachai, and the battleship Hiei. I gotta wonder if you have like a breast fetish at time, Himori ni. Not funny, Izuku. And please be careful not to call me that next time we have a meeting, Himori says with a crimson blush to her face, all while Teihu and Hiei are both pushing their breasts against each other, while also resting on top of the girl's head. Izuku gets a laugh at this while asking if any new had happened out her way. She notes that there hadn't been anything other than the usual siren attacks. Most of the villains have stopped trying anything. Some even joined the military to deal with certain problems. Not to say some of them might be out there plotting, but it probably won't be a problem for a while. Himori notes after finally getting her ships to stop arguing. That may not be a good thing though. There could be someone plotting in the background. To what end though, I don't know, Izuku says while leaning back in his big chair. Izuku's second secretary, Sendai, comes in with some new reports. Hey boss, we got some info from the First Fleet. Hiei and her group took out a couple of scout fleets and blew up another high-rank clone. Just as Izuku was telling the girl thanks for her report, the intruder siren went off in the base. Izuku then hangs up on Himori before pulling up the security screens around the base. He checks each before finally noticing where the intruder is. By the mess hall dumpsters, Akatsuki, Kinu, Kirishima converge on that point but do not engage. I'll be there soon. Why are you going to where the intruder is, Commander? Sendai questions as the boy holsters his pistol and some strength enhancer gauntlets. I think they are intruding with a good reason, and I want to know what it is before I make any judgment, Izuku says with a determined look. While walking his way over, Kawakazi joined him. She was still rude to him, but she had gained a bit of respect for him when he sparred with her, and kept coming even after getting knocked around multiple times. Kawakazi draws 2 of her swords before passing another to Izuku. When they arrive, all 3 of the ships Izuku had called were around the dumpsters. Kinu and Kirishima were on either side of the receptacles, while Akatsuki was on the roof of the mess hall watching the intruder. Commander, I wasn't expecting this, but I think I know who it is who is intruding, Kinu says with a worried look. Izuku nods before sheathing the sword Kawakazi loaned him. He raises both hands before gently saying, hey there, any chance you could come out and talk to us? We won't hurt you. Izuku hears a growling from beside the dumpsters and can see red eyes from the shadows. He walks over calmly before trying to kneel down to get eye level with whoever he was talking to. And then he noticed that whoever this was, they weren't alone. Can you come out into the light a bit? I just want to talk, Izuku says while backing up from the pair. Kinu had slipped away and gotten something from the mess hall, a plate of chicken katsu, and some spare ribs. The intruder's eyes widen and Izuku can hear sniffing. The girl then walks out on all 4s and he can see her white hair and dog ears, or rather 3s. In her arms is a little girl who looked to be only 5 years old, who also looked scared with red eyes of her own, and silver hair with a horn peeking out of her forehead. Izuku took the plate of food from Kinu before setting it down between the 2 of them. He then gestured that the girl could take what she wanted. The dog girl kept her eyes on Izuku before rapidly grabbing some of the chicken and scarfing it down. Yudachi, Kirishima said beside Izuku while sheathing her sword. Izuku puts together that the girl was in fact a ship girl, but that didn't answer why she was there, or why she had that little girl in her arms. Yudachi had set the little girl down and was sharing some of the food with her, and both were eating like they hadn't had food for a while. Izuku smiled at the pair before saying, how about we go somewhere else, and eat plenty of good food, especially meat, Kinu quickly adds while the 2 pale-haired girls are eating. Upon hearing that, Yudachi's eye widened in happiness, while the other girl isn't sure on what to say, looking between everyone with confusion and a bit of fear. Yunichin, who are these people? The little girl asks finally. Yudachi finally snaps out of her meat daydream, and her face falls while looking between Izuku and her charge. She then puts herself between Izuku and the girl before saying, I don't know for sure, Eri, but I think I know these people, and I can trust them. You can indeed, Yudachi. I'm not sure what is going on, but we can find out together, Kinu says while putting out her hand as if to shake, while Yudachi does give the larger girl her paw, and does the same when Izuku puts his own hands out to both Yudachi and Eri, who eventually is willing to take his hand. What could have happened? Izuku questions in his mind while escorting Eri and 𝐒𝐬𝐽 to his house on the base. After escorting 𝐒𝐬𝐽 and Eri to the Midoriya house, 𝐭 was surprised but happy to feed both of the girls. So who are these two? 𝐭 questioned after a few plates had been cleaned by 𝐒𝐬𝐽 alone. Eri though needed a bit of help, given how young she was. I don't know about the little girl with the horn, but this is 𝐒𝐬𝐽. She's one of the best IJN destroyers from the past, and a top-notch warrior, Kinnu explained while looking over both girls. Izuku hummed a moment before questioning aloud why Eri had referred to 𝐒𝐬𝐽 as his sister. Because Yu-Nichan has always been there for me. Or she was until. Upon saying this, Eri's eyes widened and she started to hyperventilate. Her horn and body started to glow before she screamed for everyone to get back. You'll disappear, just like Daddy, Eri shouted as she freaked out more and more, until 𝐒𝐬𝐽 leapt forward and wrapped the scared girl in a hug, pulling her into her, rather generous for her height, bosom. SHHH. It's okay, Eri. I'm not going anywhere, 𝐒𝐬𝐽 said while patting the girl's head. This seemed to help the little horned girl calm down. While most of the other ships were surprised on how responsible 𝐒𝐬𝐽 was acting. Normally she's extra goofy and just food crazed. What happened? Kinnu questioned while looking over the girls. 𝐭 was doing the same until she took a good look and saw how dirty both of them were. She clapped her hands before saying, "We can ask a few other questions later. For now these two look like they could use a bath." Eri and 𝐒𝐬𝐽 looked down and could see the older woman's point, but 𝐒𝐬𝐽 said she didn't need one, dropping her responsible facade to sneak away, like a dog avoiding going to the vet or a bath, right down to setting Eri down and running to the door, and meeting the armored belt of 𝐻𝐸𝐽. The battleship gasped a bit before looking down and seeing the dog-eared head of the just past her breasts. Who? Commander, did we get a new summon? No, not exactly. Though could you restrain her please? I think she could stand to be cleaned up, Izuku says with a light chuckle, which grows when 𝐻𝐸𝐽 basically picks 𝐒𝐬𝐽 up by the back of her sailor uniform and she curls up like a puppy, with eyes to match. Eri meanwhile just looks lost and confused by all the people around her now. Kinnu walks over and puts her own hand out before asking if Eri would like to take a warm bath. The Oni-like woman has a gentle smile, and since she seemed to know her big sister, Eri was willing to trust her for now. The two older ship girls take the two silver-haired and red-eyed girls to the bathhouse on base, while Izuku hums on why both of them looked like they'd been homeless for a while. "Akatsuki, you still here?" Izuku questioned aloud. "Hi, what do you need, Commander?" Akatsuki said while appearing behind Izuku, startling 𝐭 and almost making her fall into the trash can. But she was caught by the other ninja that 𝐭 didn't know was there, Kirishima. Izuku nodded while acknowledging the battlecruiser girl. "Good, you both are still here. I want both of you to go into town for a day or two. Listen in on the back streets and the like. I'll rework the duty roster, so don't worry there. I've got a bad feeling something could be coming." Both of the ninjas nod before disappearing from the house. I don't know how they do that, but it is often very unsettling, 𝐭 says while brushing off her clothes. She then asks what Izuku suspects could be coming. "I don't know for sure, but did you remember what Eri said about us disappearing if we got close? I can imagine a lot of people would want to use a power like that for a lot of the wrong reasons," Izuku says with a contemplative look, before checking in with a few of the regular soldiers on if they had some extra girls' clothes. 𝐭's eyes widened slightly before feeling pity flutter for what both of those girls likely went through before reaching the base. For said girls though, 𝐒𝐬𝐽 was currently trying to run from the big bath after being stripped out of her dirty and slightly tattered uniform. Eri meanwhile was confused and feeling more comfortable after Kinnu took off her tattered rags and the bandages on her arms. And while the Oni girl still had a calm or pleasant face on, she was currently raging about the scars on the little girl's arms and legs. The way 𝐒𝐬𝐽 was holding her, I know this wasn't her doing. Someone else did this to this sweet little girl. Before 𝐒𝐬𝐽 could break her out, Kinnu thought as she was stripping out of her own uniform. And when Eri seemed nervous about going to the bath, so Kinnu held the little girl's hand as they walked into the washing area, while 𝐻𝐸𝐽 has to slightly drag 𝐒𝐬𝐽 into the bath area, before holding the girl in place while she washes the dog girl's hair. Kinnu meanwhile takes to helping Eri clean up as well, being extra gentle on her arms and where she had been operated on or injured. Once she was cleaned up, Kinnu and 𝐻𝐸𝐽 escort their charges to the big bath to soak, with the golden-eyed Kinnu letting Eri sit on her lap as she soaked. She gently brushed the little girl's hair as she was soaking and letting her rest on her chest as her eyes started to droop, and seeing the somewhat still scared look on her face made Kinnu want to find whoever hurt her and introduce said person to her katana, torpedoes, and cannons. 𝐻𝐸𝐽 meanwhile was working to keep the dog girl on a leash, to the point of holding the girl into her chest, and noticing the dog morph has quite the impressive bosom herself. "How, or rather why, do you have such a chest?" 𝐻𝐸𝐽 questions. 𝐒𝐬𝐽 just looks down at her chest before saying, "I don't know. Maybe it's because of all the meat I eat." 𝐻𝐸𝐽 gives the girl a flat look and a sigh before sitting her down again. After soaking for quite a while, Eri had completely fallen asleep in Kinu's arms. When they were changing, one of the soldiers on base had brought pajamas and some underwear for Eri. "My daughter used to be about her size. These should fit the girl," he said before handing the clothes to Kinu. She thanked the man and gently changed Eri. 𝐒𝐬𝐽's uniform meanwhile was cleaned and pressed, and she was quite happy to have it on again. "Ah, that's better. Hey, got any nail polish? I need to touch mine up," 𝐒𝐬𝐽 says while looking down at her hands. Ki rolls eyes, but she suggests that she ask the commissary in the morning. "Though right now I think you have some questions to answer," Ki says while rewrapping her surashi. It took her the longest to change, so Kinu and 𝐒𝐬𝐽 had left to take Eri somewhere comfortable to sleep. They returned to the Midoriya house, and Izuku was happy to lend his bed to the girl, with 𝐒𝐬𝐽 taking Eri from Kinu's arms to tuck her in, something that again surprised the Oni girl. "You were usually a lot more rebellious or combative. What happened to you, 𝐒𝐬𝐽?" 𝐒𝐬𝐽's eyes widened a bit before looking down again, and patting Eri's head gently. She gestures to the living room before quietly closing the door. Ki had arrived since then and was quite interested in the Destroyer Girl's story as well. "It's a bit of a long story, but I'd say it started not long after most of yours did, though I didn't remember it," 𝐒𝐬𝐽 says while settling in on a couch. Kinu sat next to her while Izuku and Inko each took a chair. Ki stood by the entrance while looking on. 𝐒𝐬𝐽 explained that she awoke in this world 3 years ago. "But I didn't remember who I was. I guess, just operating on animalish instincts. That was when I met the boss. Or rather, I attacked him." Kinu chuckled at that while Ki pondered if she was an incomplete summon. Perhaps someone else had managed to summon her but died before she could be fully brought onto this plane. Izuku hummed while Inko was surprised how calm everyone was acting. "I mean, I've working alongside and summoning the spirits of Second World War ships. Crazy seems kinda normal at this point, Mom," Izuku says with a chuckle, one that is mirrored by his ships, before he gestures for 𝐒𝐬𝐽 to continue. 𝐒𝐬𝐽 nods before saying she had been astray in a sense to him. Like a few others he picked up over the years. "I just happened to come upon him while he was visiting his daughter, Eri's mom, and her husband." 𝐒𝐬𝐽 explained how she had been a semi-enforcer for the Yakuza after the boss took her in, using her instincts with combat and natural strength to deal with troublesome quirk users, never killing them but breaking most of their bodies to where some couldn't use their quirks again. "Things were nice for a while. I was slowly remembering things, not the fact that I was a ship, more like who my friends were and what I liked to do. Things changed about 6 months ago," 𝐒𝐬𝐽 said with a sad look on her face. She explained that Eri's quirk had awakened, the ability to rewind organic things, to even before they existed. One of the first things she rewound, though, was her father. She erased him from existence, and her mother saw her as a monster, 𝐒𝐬𝐽 said with furious look on her face. All those listening were wide-eyed, with Inko being furious about what Eri's mother had said about her own child, especially when 𝐒𝐬𝐽 explained that she had all but abandoned the girl to her grandfather. It got worse though. There was someone in the gang, Chisaki Kai. He'd been with the family a bit longer than me, but, well, aside from him always smelling wrong when I was around him, he always just gave off this unsettling air. 𝐒𝐬𝐽 explained that she and a few others knew he'd been gaining followers, but they could do nothing about it, especially when he took control of the Shihisaki gang. He'd already been taking blood samples from Eri to try and make a weapon of some kind, and making sure she wouldn't tell me or the boss, and when he was finally confronted about it, he put the boss in a coma, 𝐒𝐬𝐽 said with some tears in her eyes. This had everyone furious, with Kinu now knowing who and how she was going to use her weapons on Chisaki. Izuku meanwhile was contemplating how much of the military he could bring down on the monster. Inko though was in tears at what that poor little girl had gone through. 𝐒𝐬𝐽 sniffled a bit before blowing her nose in the handkerchief Inko had lent her. "I was in shock at first, but when I snapped out of it, I tried to attack the bastard, only to get knocked around a bit by a few of his grunts. Kendo I could deal with, but I really hated getting felt up by that 𝐬𝐽𝐽 asshole." The dog girl explained that she had been chained up and locked away after that, and for 6 months they basically kept her alive to keep Eri a bit in check, telling her that if she wanted to keep her sister alive, she'd have to let them take what they wanted. Before any of them could get madder, 𝐒𝐬𝐽 explained that she'd gotten a bit of revenge. "And it's mostly thanks to you and your fleet commander. One of the guys who had been guarding me was watching a video of you and your girls getting interviewed. Hearing Kinu talking though was what I needed." She explained that her memories started coming back in full force, letting her remember who she was, what she fought for, and what she could do. And she accentuated that by summoning her rig and blasting off the chains she was held with, and then blasting the thugs into red mist. "I went after Eri and the rest stood between us, but I gave them more than they were expecting," 𝐒𝐬𝐽 said before explaining how she handled a few of the 8 bullets as they called themselves. One of the first she fought was 𝐬𝐽𝐽, with the man grabbing her fists when she tried to punch him. Dumbass didn't notice that it wasn't just my hands I was punching him with, 𝐒𝐬𝐽𝐽 said before summoning her rig and the guns on the back of her hands. I basically blasted both of his hands off, and when he was screaming, I grabbed his tongue and ripped it out, 𝐒𝐬𝐽𝐽 said with furious grin. 𝐒𝐭 had turned green at this explanation, while her fellow ship girls nodded at her actions towards the man. After that she avoided 𝗧𝗵𝗲 𝗵𝗲 and 𝗵𝗃 on her way to 𝐒𝐮. But she had to quickly knock out 4 of the other bullets. Kendo Rappa and his partner didn't try to stop 𝐒𝐬𝐽𝐽 when she came upon them. Tengai himself didn't seem to approve of what Chisaki was doing to 𝐒𝐮. He was newer and apparently just there to keep Rappa in line. And even he didn't want to fight me, saying, "You're not looking at me, so it wouldn't be a good fight. Come back when you want to take me down." And they stepped aside. 𝐒𝐬𝐽𝐽 then noted that Chisaki, or Overhaul as he called himself, had 𝐒𝐮 captive when 𝐒𝐬𝐽𝐽 found the girl. And he ordered a few of his other thugs to attack 𝐒𝐬𝐽𝐽, thinking she had just managed to slip out of her restraints and would be beaten easily. But she shocked him by quickly knocking out most of the goons and rushing in to attack the young man. I kneed the bastard in the face before I grabbed 𝐒𝐮. When that was done, Overhaul tried to remodel the building so we couldn't escape. That was when I pulled out my rig and blasted a hole in the wall. Overhaul had tried to attack again, first with stone knives from the ground and then directly with his quirk, only for 𝐒𝐬𝐽𝐽 to easily evade the stones and giving Overhaul a lasting mark by slashing his face with her nails and ripping out his right eye. This heroic story made everyone listening cheer a bit, with Kinu and Ki telling 𝐒𝐬𝐽𝐽 they were proud of her. After that I ran out made for the base, but I took a bit longer because we were avoiding the police and heroes. Overhaul had already been paying off a few of them. Took us about a week or 2 to get here, 𝐒𝐬𝐽𝐽 said while looking down at her hand. A hand that was taken by Kinu and 𝐭, with the former saying she did well and that it explained the state the two were in. 𝐭 meanwhile was glad that the girl had gotten away, and you protected 𝐒𝐮 better than that fool of a mother of hers. Izuku meanwhile had been conversing with Kai about the next steps. Obviously she's going to be part of the fleet, but I'm worried about 𝐒𝐮. We have to make sure Overhaul can't get his hands on her. I agree, Commander. Luckily very few knew about these two being here. We should be able to hide this or disguise them, Kai says before asking if 𝐒𝐬𝐽𝐽 wanted to come to the ship girl dorms. 𝐒𝐬𝐽𝐽 shook her head before saying she was going to stay close to 𝐒𝐮. I'm not leaving her alone like that again, even if I do trust you. Izuku nodded before saying she should go back up to his room. 𝐒𝐮's probably going to need her big sister again before the night is done. Izuku then put his hand on her shoulder before saying he was proud of 𝐒𝐬𝐽𝐽 again. And welcome back to the Navy, 𝐒𝐬𝐽𝐽. I hope you're ready to give the sirens as much hell as you gave that bastard Overhaul, Izuku said with a smile. 𝐒𝐬𝐽𝐽 smiled before glomping Izuku's upper body. With the boy's face buried into her very generous chest, she lets go and heads up to Izuku's room. And when she gets there and sees 𝐒𝐮 sleeping soundly, she smiles, before walking in a circle and curling up on the floor next to the bed. Seeing this gets a few chuckles from the other ships and the Midoriyas. She really is a puppy, a good loyal dog, 𝐭 says with a gentle smile. Izuku stretches his back before saying he'll sleep on the couch, and while his mom is tempted to say he could use her bed, Izuku stops her and says he'll be fine. The next morning though his neck disagrees with him. Okay, maybe that was a bad idea to sleep like that, Izuku says with his head stuck at a funny angle. 𝐭 has a chuckle before cooking a bit of breakfast. The smell and sounds of meat cooking awakens 𝐒𝐬𝐽𝐽, making her run around Izuku's room a bit, like a dog excited for their food or a treat. And these actions wake up 𝐒𝐮. 𝐻, wait, where are we? 𝐒𝐮 questions from the bed. 𝐒𝐬𝐽𝐽 snaps out of her meat-focused thoughts and looks back to 𝐒𝐮. She smiles and says, we're somewhere safe. Now what do you say we get something to eat? 𝐒𝐬𝐽𝐽 holds out both of her hands, and 𝐒𝐮 takes them in a similar manner to when 𝐒𝐬𝐽𝐽 first met her grandfather. 𝐒𝐬𝐽𝐽 picks up 𝐒𝐮 and they head downstairs for breakfast, with 𝐒𝐬𝐽𝐽 getting a laugh at Izuku's head being stuck at a funny angle. 𝐭 meanwhile had made extra bacon and some ham for 𝐒𝐬𝐽𝐽 after a suggestion from Kinu. What about you, sweetie? Is there something you like? 𝐭 says in a gentle tone. 𝐒𝐮 seems uneasy about 𝐭, but she does say she liked apples. 𝐭 nods before picking up an apple and slicing it up, even giving the apples bunny ears and playing a bit with the girl. Izuku chuckles and smiles before digging in himself. I do hope that the Yakuza don't show up, but if they do, I'll bring down every one of my girls on them, and maybe even deal with Chisaki myself, Izuku thinks while cleaning up after breakfast. In the 3 years since Jon Kotov had become a commander, many things had changed. First and foremost, he was now a registered hero with the United States. He rarely got involved in the day-to-day protection though, given his distaste for the profession. But he was quickly bulked up thanks to Star and her boys putting him through rigorous training. Despite that, he had rapidly moved up the ranks to be in the top 10, primarily due to another defense of San Diego. This time, while he had originally directed his ships to engage at sea, a group of siren submarines had invaded and were attacking the civilians. 𝗧𝗵𝗲 was of course the first to jump in to save everyone. But as she was leaping off, she grabbed Jon and dragged him to fight the sirens head-on, despite his protests. But when they arrived and saw the destruction, Jon could only think back to the day he lost his leg and family. Thus, he went for full maximize and fought alongside 𝗧𝗵𝗲, the man taking off his officer's jacket and wearing it akin to a cape around his shoulders. And the pair demolished as many sirens as they could, aided by the fact that they both knew the sirens' tricks at this point and could properly counter whatever traps the clone subs could set, let alone a few tricks of their own that the sirens would underestimate. This event, plus a handful of others he was dragged into, along with his actions as a commander directing the ship girl forces, pulled him up to the number 2 point in 1 year. Much to his annoyance, especially when toy companies started selling action figures of him with his jacket on shoulders and no shirt, with exchangeable legs, given he had a special one from DARPA and an island that had weapons in it, or figurines, posters and trading cards where he had his arms crossed looking down, calling him the naval hero, Captain or Commander Brawl. "You still mad I dragged you into that last fight?" 𝗧𝗏 asked while checking in on the man in the command room. Jon rolled his eyes before saying, "No, at least not this time. Something else has been bugging me." As he was saying this, he was rubbing the ring on his left hand. Over the 3 years working with his girls, he'd become much closer to all of them, especially Yorktown, to the point they were married, with a later summon of 𝗬𝗏 becoming akin to a daughter for the two of them. Among the other summons were San Francisco, Sims, Fletcher, Cooper, Omaha, Benson, Quincy, Marblehead, Baton, Boys, and Ticonderoga, greatly enhancing the strike and defense capabilities of his fleet, making them confident about being able to handle anything, especially since they found a way to unlock greater combat potential in Laffy, giving her a retrofit to amplify all of her combat potential, to the point she soloed a group of 20 siren clones and crippled a high-rank siren alone. But much of this happiness was not to last, thanks to a dangerous group of sirens and some others that couldn't be identified, due to the convoy that Yorktown had been escorting being utterly decimated, with the woman herself barely clinging to life when the rescue team found her and now trapped in a coma. This had happened 6 months prior, and it pushed Jon into a spiral of anger, even pushing Spence away, as well as the other girls, with 𝗧𝗏 barely able to get a response from him. It took one of his first summons to snap him out of it, Cleveland finding Jon after he'd been pushing his quirk and his own physical strength to a near breaking point, and when she first tried to talk to him, all her commander did was roughly push her aside. So, Cleveland grit her teeth before tackling him to the ground. "You think you're the only one who lost someone? Every one of us ship girls knows that better than you. We've all lost family in one way or another, but you have a bigger family than you realize. We're all here for you and we need you with us." Cleveland shouted at him between punches to his face. This helped to snap Jon out of his spiral in anger. He still needed help, including apologizing to Spence, but she teared up and wrapped him in a tight hug when he did apologize and say he didn't blame her if she couldn't see him as a father anymore. "Welcome back, Daddy," was all she had to say to make both tear up and Jon to keep apologizing to her. 𝗧𝗏 chuckled thinking back on that before saying, "I'm glad you eventually snapped out of it. BTW, you ever gonna follow up on what else Cleveland said to you?" Jon just gave 𝗧𝗏 a sideways look to as if to say to stop asking Matt. She laughed again before mentioning that she was glad he'd summoned more reinforcements, even if one is a bit comically clingy with you. 𝗧𝗏 says while noticing said clingy member was sneaking up on Jon. "Don't remind me. When Yorktown wakes up, I'm not sure I want to explain that to her." Suddenly a large pair of breasts are sitting atop his head and a sing-song tone is heard above him. "Oh, come now honey, don't you just love it when I'm close? And I'm sure I'll get along with her just fine. And it could be quite fun for all of us later." The one saying this was one summoned a few weeks ago, one of the last battleships built by the United States, New Jersey. It was not long after Jon had snapped out of his funk that he tried for a new summon, and he somehow gained the power of the strongest battleship in the Eagle Union. She meanwhile seemed extra smitten with the commander and had quickly glomped onto him. Even after telling her that he was married, she was still clingy and affectionate with him, especially given she was currently feeling up the muscles he built up over his aggressive stage with her hands, while rubbing her boobs atop his head. "Please stop, especially if someone calls. This a very compromising and unprofessional position to be in," Jon said with a blush while grabbing Jersey's wrists, who just giggles before saying, "Oh fine. Hey, are you going to see her again?" Jersey had a less flirty look and now was looking at him with concern. He looked up at the rabbit-like battleship with a bit of shock but then acceptance. "Yeah, I avoid it for a long time. But it does feel better to see her with Spence." An alert came in from the returning fleet, namely the fact they had gathered new materials and took out another small fleet. But the two leads of the fleet said they had some unsettling details to report. I'd prefer we tell you when we get back, John. It's a bit sensitive, Cleveland said first. Behind her, Hornet agreed, saying, yeah bro, this could complicate a few things. We may want to bring in the Admiral as well. John hums before agreeing, telling Hornet he's going to the hospital for the time being. Along the way he goes to pick up Spence from the makeshift study rooms that were added for the younger ships, only to find a few younger soldiers and the kids of a few on the base surrounding her, and he can see her tears from his position. He sees red and is about to give them a bit of hurt, only for a few of Star's crew to show up and do it for him. The second of her squad sees John walking up as he's choking out one of the soldiers. Hey Commander, came to get Spence right. Don't worry about these punks. We know how to deal with them. Thank you for that. I'm not sure I could get away with either chucking these brats out to sea, or asking Jersey to give them an up-close view of her 16-inch guns, for either their faces or anywhere else, John said with a dark look directed to some of the teens. Spence dries her eyes as John walks up. I'd ask if you're okay, but Spence shakes her head before saying, I'm okay now. Thanks, Uncle Max. Guys. Each of the guys gives her a thumbs up, salute, or a nod while they're dealing with the unruly teens. John smiles before holding his hand out to her. How about we go check on Yorktown? The destroyer girl nods before taking his hand, and ignoring the screams and strangled cries of some of punks. When they arrive at hospital, a few mechanics and doctors were mulling around, as was a workforce created by the genius of Akashi from Japan. She had found that she could fuse tools with wisdom cubes to make repair and upgrade groups, who called themselves Bulans. Dr. Yubi, how's she doing? John asked, with Spence looking up with slightly hopeful eyes. The doctor gave them a smile before saying there had been a minor change, but nothing substantial. There was some brainwave activity and she started to move a bit. Just twitches, but it's something. Spence is extra excited at this, and John is happy to hear it as well. They go to Yorktown's room and see lying as still as when she was brought back, and still missing 3 of her limbs. Both legs were gone, and her left arm had appeared to have been burnt off. John and Spence went over to her remaining hand and grabbed it, before the former talked to her a bit about what had been happening, with Spence coming in after the reports to say she was enjoying the pseudo-school that had been built for the ship girls. I hope you wake up soon. We all miss you, the girl said with a sad look on her face. John patted her head and agreed that they all missed Yorktown. What happened next, though, surprised and excited both of them. It was subtle, but Yorktown's hand ever so slightly gripped theirs, as if to tell them that she could hear them. This gets a fresh wave of tears from Spence, and John is barely hanging on himself. Come home soon, Yorkie. It's not the same without you here, John said with a slight blush at using her nickname. With their visit done, John had a different matter to deal with. While Spence joined her sister Fletcher and Sims to work on some schoolwork, Hornet and Cleveland had something different to report. They adjourned to the commander's office to discuss the matter, with New Jersey, Star, and Admiral 𝗵𝗄𝐺 in attendance as well. So what is it you all found? Did you come upon something strange while you were out there? John asked while taking his seat. Cleveland and Hornet shared a look before the latter spoke up. Something like that, bro. We spotted something or someone who might complicate matters with this war, especially if history is anything to go by. Cleveland noted that while they were engaged in battle, she noticed something odd about the planes they had been shooting down. They seemed to be made of fire or something. Not only that, but their tactics were odd. It seemed too similar to the old IJN combat patterns. Not only that, but there was an odd couple of carriers at the back when I sent my Doolittle raid out. They didn't look like what we've been seeing from the sirens. They almost looked like Sakura Empire ships, Hornet noted with a worried look. This gets eyes wide, with Jersey and Star being the first to question if there was a rogue commander from Japan. We shouldn't assume that. Don't jump too far ahead, Kathleen, 𝗵𝗄𝐺 said with a stern look to the hero. He's right. This could be something else. The question is what? Though I have to ask, you said the planes looked like they were made of fire. Do you think that fire had something to do with what happened to Yorktown? John says while gripping his fist tight. Hornet seems surprised but then says she wouldn't rule it out. There have been some timelines where a few nations sided with the sirens, and others who were completely neutral to a conflict between the factions and just fought the sirens, but wouldn't help others. John sits back in his command chair and lets out a frustrated grate while rubbing his face. He suggests to 𝗵𝗄𝐺 that they keep this quiet for now, and the Admiral agrees. No reason to get some up in arms about there being rogue elements from the factions. The two commanding officers adjourn the meeting before John asks Cleveland to stay back. The sporty strawberry blonde seems nervous about what the reason could be but complies. When the rest had left, John directed Cleveland to take a seat. So, what's up? Did you want some more intel on what me and Hornet saw? Cleveland asked nervously. John grunted while sitting back in his chair. No, I wanted to discuss some other things that were said when you snaped me out of my funk. Cleveland blushed while looking away from John. I don't know what you mean. I just wanted you to, stop hurting yourself and pushing us all away. Cleveland stammered out. I acted like I didn't hear it, but I did hear what you said while crying on my chest after knocking me flat. I don't want to see someone I love destroy themselves. And that wasn't just hyperbole, right? John said with a raised eyebrow. Cleveland's face matched her eye color and her head was steaming. I don't. Okay, damn it, I can't play this off. Yeah, I meant it. That I do love you. You were strong, supportive, a friend when we needed it. And you didn't just treat me like I was a kid, a guy, or anything like that. You even went along when I wanted to try some frillier things, though at the time I wasn't sure if you were just acting like I was your sister or ramble mumble. Before the cruiser girl could go on an even more dizzying spiral, John clapped his hands on her shoulders to snap her back to reality. Cleveland was still surprised to see her commander's face as close as it was. But John's next words helped to put her at ease. It wasn't to treat you like you were a little sister or anything. That's closer to what the destroyer girls are. But you were a constant friend and person I could trust. The person I could always count on and be there for me. I think that was why it worked for you to knock some sense into me. And I can't thank you enough for that, John said with a smile that made Cleveland a little weak-kneed. John did have a chuckle at one point, though I was surprised. After all, you were the one who suggested that I propose to Yorkie. But after listening to what you said, I guess you thought it would look better if I was with someone who looked more mature. Yeah, I guess it was just a bit of self-consciousness. I look like a teenager and well, I'm kinda flat. So to be with a guy who looks like you, I felt like I stood no chance in comparison, Cleveland said while looking down at herself. John hummed for a moment before asking her to stand up. She was a bit shorter than her commander, only coming to his chest, but he looked her over with a slight appraising eye, making the ship girl feel slightly embarrassed. I said this when we went shopping, but you have a beauty all your own. Long legs, a cute face and reactions, and the sporty look works for you. Besides, you are the kind of person anyone would love, including me. It's just, well, this is odd territory, John says confidently at first before looking slightly bashful. He may be a somewhat confident 25-year-old man, but he'd felt the mutual attraction between him and Yorktown. Not to mention he'd been pursuing more of a relationship with Yorktown from the start, and he was generally of the mind of monogamy. But after hearing what Cleveland had said to snap him out of his depression, he could finally see that she had been doing the same things with him that he had tried when getting closer to Yorktown. I don't know what to think about this, and I'm not sure what the Almighty might think on it, but maybe we could try to see about this. But not now. Maybe when Yorktown wakes up, and she might soon. She's finally moving with her one arm, John says while blushing and rubbing the back of his head. Cleveland blushes as well and agrees. But you might want to be careful with that new battleship of yours. She seems to be extra interested in you. And she probably wouldn't be opposed to joining this if you really do decide to get involved with me. Or others, Cleveland says with a wag of her eyebrows. John nods before saying they should get something to eat. Cleveland agrees and thanks her commander for talking to her about this, and not pretending it didn't happen. When they get to the mess, most of the ship girls and other soldiers are eating and relaxing, with all the destroyer girls talking and sounding excited for their next sortie. All of the cruisers stretching out after a long sail. The carriers were calmly eating, while checking over some of their planes, and the battleship pair were arm wrestling with the other soldiers, and they win until it's down to the two of them, struggling and wrestling until the table breaks under them. While walking up to the food line, John noticed that Hornet was sitting and talking quite animatedly with Star, the hero herself seeming to enjoy the youngest Yorktown sister's presence, trading jokes back and forth for a time. He nods before sitting with some of the other officers on the base. Hey Brawl, any idea on the next fight you'll get involved in? The lieutenant asks with a smirk towards John, who just rolls his eyes before saying, I don't know, and I'd prefer not to get involved in those fights again, but there may be something else I'll be fighting soon. The officers seem confused but just shrug at that and just continue with their meals and small talk. John joins in, of course, and asks to train with a few of the reflex-enhanced soldiers, to better be ready in case he had to fight sirens again. When the meals end, he catches Cleveland and tells her they'll talk more about whatever is between them soon. The cruiser thanks him before getting close and climbing up on him slightly to kiss his cheek, making both of them blush before Cleveland ran off. John shook out of his shock and went to his house, and found Spence sleeping on his couch. He smiles before picking the girl up and taking her to her room in his house. After settling her in bed, she said goodnight to him as he was walking out. A few days after discussing matters with Cleveland, Yorktown was coming out of her coma, to the happiness of both John and Spence, but the nerves of the cruiser girl. She was surprised by Yorktown asking her to come in to talk with her. You saved John while I was gone, right? Not to mention admitting your own feelings, Yorktown said with a gentle smile to her old friend. Cleveland blushed a bit but did admit that. I couldn't let him go on like that. I didn't want to lose someone I loved again. Yorktown nodded before taking Cleveland's hand in her remaining one. She smiled at the girl and tried to pull herself up to hug the girl. Cleveland just stood and hugged the carrier herself. Hopefully they can fix you up soon. It'll be good to have you out there again. And perhaps somewhere quieter and in private too, Yorktown said with a coy smile directed the tomboyish girl's way, who looked down with a smile and a slight blush before agreeing. When Yorktown was stable and more ready for questions, John and 𝗵𝗲 asked who it was that had attacked her and the convoy she was escorting. I didn't get a good look, but I do know they were not your standard sirens. I'm not even sure they were sirens at all. The flames the four unleashed were so intense that they burned through all of my planes, and then my limbs, mocking my weakness as they saw it. John broke the rest of the chair he was sitting on at hearing that, and then told her that they were the weak ones. A sneak attack in overwhelming numbers may be sensible strategies, but they didn't do this for that reason. They were just looking to attack to feel superior, when they're not. Yorktown thanks her husband for saying that but couldn't tell any more about her assailants, given they had ran when one of them detected the rescue fleet that was headed for her. 𝗵𝗲 thanks her for the information and apologizes for not being able to get her help sooner. In the private command room, though, it confirms some of what they and some of the other ships suspected. There are ships from the 𝗧𝗏𝗃 Empire with the sirens, was what John said with a stern look over his steepled hands. And while he'd like to rip all of those ships a new set of holes, they had no idea where they were. A week after Yorktown had reawakened, a strange new report and signal came in at the command center. Please, need help, trying to evade. Traitors to our home. Lost our carriers. Vatwa base was the closest to where the signal was coming from, so John ordered a fleet to be sent out. One more thing. I'm coming with you, John said before switching to a more combat-armed leg the boys at DARPA had cooked up, as well as a rebreather and hydropack to fight in the water if need be. John, are you sure about this? Cleveland asked as she was the head of the vanguard crew of herself, 𝐿aFi, and San Francisco. But the lead ship of the main fleet agreed to with him. Don't you just love it when he gets fired up and fights those sirens and villains with his power maxed out? That savage look on his face is, 𝗬𝗵𝗲, so wild. New Jersey was the flagship for the main fleet with Baton and 𝗧𝗵𝗃 as the heir and extra anti-sub power. Both Cleveland and John had flat looks at the blushing, slightly horny face of Jersey. But the cruiser girl couldn't deny in her mind that he did look hot while fighting villains. So, she agrees to have him ride on her ship. What? Why yours? Why not mine? Jersey exclaimed with a pout. Because I'll be closer to the ships. He'd probably be better at taking down. You'll be in the back, and I know he prefers to be at the front, Cleveland says in a matter-of-fact tone. Jersey still pouts, but she agrees and says she'll just have to show what she's capable of from the back. And with that they sortie out to the ships, sending out the distress call. It takes them about 2 days to rendezvous with the ships in question. Or just one ship, an older-looking battleship, with 2 sets of cannons on either side of the ship and cannons at the bow and stern of the ship. What was chasing it, though, was fleet of siren ships and a handful of ship of a different type. There were at least 2 𝗧𝗏𝗃 Empire carriers at the back, and 1 battleship, and I see a half-dozen smaller classes of ships from the 𝗧𝗏𝗃 as well. 𝗧𝗏𝗃 reports with a disgruntled look on her face. John hums before telling 𝗏aFi to go full speed to get past the fleeing battleship. And keep your sonar up. I think we could have other trouble, John shouts as he maximizes and leaps from Cleveland's deck to 𝗏aFi's. Is Commander going to fight the other ships? Or is he going to meet with the battleship girl? 𝗏aFi asked while putting full speed in her boilers. John looks to the sea before saying he'd engage the sirens with his girls. 𝗏aFi gives him a small smile before warning him to hang on. John does just that while taking off his commander's coat and cap. After they had surged past the battleship, 𝗏aFi detected a few subs with her sonar. John nods before ordering her to engage any hostiles as she saw fit. With the little faux rabbit's eyes flashing at that thought, John then dove into the water with his body maximized to a respectable combat level. He turned on his hydropack and moved in the direction of where 𝗏aFi had detected the submarines, until he saw the torpedoes the ships had no doubt launched. He grumbled a bit before surging towards each and destroying the weapons before they could hit 𝗏aFi or the beleaguered battleship. Speaking of 𝗏aFi, she had turned her ship into her rigging and was rushing across the sea as fast as possible, blasting away with her twin pistols set up for her cannons and launching torpedoes quickly. When a couple of siren clones surged out of the sea to attack her, 𝗏aFi was barely phased, and used a quick mixing of gun kata to knock the monsters around and shoot out some of their limbs and armaments. And with the last one alive after her assault getting a double tap to the back while she was face first in the water. While surging through the siren ship, though, 𝗏aFi did pick up on a few more subs amongst the fleet, so she quickly deployed the depth charges she had to make them surface, some of which were actual siren sub girls, to which 𝗏aFi surged right at them to blast them point blank, sliding on her knees under a few beams fired at her from the larger ships. She then slid around to smack both sirens before having her cannons at both of their head, and blasting through them. 𝗏aFi was not alone in the combat, though. While Cleveland stayed back to cover the battleship, 𝗧𝗵𝗲 had no problem getting up close and personal with a few clones, using her baseball bat as a half-staff to take some off guard and then blast a few others, even joint locking one with it before moving it into place to take shots from their own allies. But with the last two, she really wanted to get in their faces. She easily evaded around their shots and torpedoes, only taking one hit to the shoulder. "Have a taste of this," she shouted before chucking her bat right at one of the clones' faces, making it flinch and surprising the other. She then rushed in and kidney punched the other before pulling it into a knee strike and a few blows to the head from her fists and elbows. Right as the first was regaining her senses, she took aim at 𝗧𝗵𝗲, who had her back turned, and fired a beam barrage at her. But 𝗧𝗵𝗲 quickly leapt up as the beams were fired and caught her bat in midair. She then uses a special piece she had requested to be modified on her gear. One of her turrets retracts the barrels and it becomes solid. She then sticks her bat into a hole that had opened in the side and detaches it from her rigging, turning her bat into a hammer. She then spins and flips around before bringing the hammer down atop the siren's head, crushing it, and she finished the impact with a short-range directed shot down into it to blow apart the body. "Too bad I can only do that one time before the barrels overheat, but I can take care of you just fine," the heavy cruiser girl says while reattaching her turret, and then flourishes a bit with her bat. The other clone snarls before rushing at the 𝐒𝐽 girl, firing beams and other shots with reckless abandon. But 𝗧𝗵𝗲 is confident and evades each shot before getting in closer and giving her a powerful thrust of her bat to the siren's stomach. She then combos a few more strikes with her guns and bat before shooting out the siren's knees. And while it is down, she takes her stance and winds up. "Batter up," she shouts before swinging with all her might to the siren's face, decapitating the invader. Under the water, John was currently engaged with a group of siren sub-girls and some rogue Sakura Empire sub-girls. He punched in the side for a few of the normal subs as well as repurposing the explosives ripped from a few torpedoes to blow them up. As for the siren sub-girls, John engages them with fist and firing micro-torpedoes from his leg, even taking one out to arm it before punching his fist into the mouth of one of the ships and forcing the explosive down her throat, before kicking her to some of her compatriots. The two Sakura ships though seem less inclined to take him on. "I don't think we should fight him, 𝐒𝐽. You saw how he ripped through the submarines and sirens. I don't know about you, but I'd prefer to stay alive," the dark-haired I-58 said while turning her rig toward the rear. 𝐒𝐽, or I-168 grumbled before she followed suit, firing some torpedoes from her rear to distract the hero and commander. "Damn, I was hoping to get a shot at another Eagle carrier. The last time she had help before I or the rest could finish her off." John noticed that the other two and a few siren sub-girls were getting away, but he wasn't pushing it further. He was already tired from holding Maximize for a period of time and his hydro pack was running out of charge, so he swam back to his main fleet. They themselves were engaged with both air power and long-range shots, and when John arrived, New Jersey happily reported that, "I've taken out about 15 ships of various types, and I personally put a hole into the deck of one of those carrier bitches." John nodded and told her to keep up the barrage. "And all of you get around that battleship. We're not letting them have it," John says before attaching his hydro pack to recharge, and asking if Jersey had some food on the ship so he could recharge his own power. With the enemy ships, the thoughts are much less jovial. "Damn that relic. Ah, that hurt. I can't launch any more of my plane 𝗍𝗵𝗲. I have to withdraw." The one saying this was the white-haired, blue-eyed kitsune of the Sakura Empire, 𝐒𝐭𝐲. Opposite her, in both appearance and somewhat temperament, was her adopted sister, 𝐒𝐭𝐲. Her red eyes were furious as she transformed her ship to her rigging and vowed to take out the person who would harm her precious sister, though the battleship among them wonders if that was a wise course of action. "I know you are my elders, but the battleship 𝗧𝗪𝗏 starts," but she is quickly cut off. "Quiet you. I will deal with that one myself, just as we did with that fool of a carrier months ago," 𝐒𝐽𝐲 screeches while flying toward New Jersey. Once there, she summons as much fire as she can to assault the fleet, not caring about the ship she was originally pursuing. John was already eating when he felt the shockwaves from 𝐒𝐽𝐲's attack and questioned what was wrong. And while New Jersey herself wanted to show that the battleships weren't done as a ship type, she couldn't do that right now. Not while Honey is below deck, she thought, while putting up shields to defend against the fiery assault, while Ticonderoga intercepts all the planes she can. Baton meanwhile was occupied with intercepting any more subs that could show up, only for Jersey's defenses to be overwhelmed when 𝐒𝐽𝐲 forms a massive dragon of flame behind herself. It breaks through her shields and starts her deck aflame. This is when John finally returns and sees Jersey burned, splayed across her deck, burns that look suspiciously familiar. John runs to her and checks her over. "So that is why you didn't engage me directly. You led yourself to your doom because of your compassion for those idiotic animals. Even more so if this one has those silly quirk mutations. You should have left him to die," 𝐒𝐽𝐲 says with a sneer. John has a furious look though as he glares up at 𝐒𝐽𝐲. "Were you the one who attacked Yorktown a few months back?" he says while tightening his fist. And when Akagi starts to mock Yorktown for her perceived weakness, John snaps. In a second, he is on top of Akagi, breaking her nose with a powerful punch to her face. Before she can be sent flying though, he catches her arm and yanks her back, pulling the arm out of the socket before punching her again and again, breaking more of her body, even ripping out some of her tails when she manages to regain herself to try and flee. He breaks a few more bones before pulling her in again and giving her a few solid kicks with his metal leg, and then kick-stomping her in the face to impact with the water, holding it there and grinding down on her, before micro-torpedo blasting her in the face as they hit the water. Akagi is barely clinging to consciousness as she floats up. Her face bloody and burned, missing a few teeth, and half of her bones were broken thanks to her underestimating John. Though the man himself is exhausted due to using his quirk again and barely having time to recharge, the Sakura battleship seems to take aim at the injured Akagi, but before they could fire, 𝐒𝐴𝐵 appears and distracts the rest, before recovering Akagi and ordering the rest of their forces to retreat. John himself needs to be recovered by Cleveland, who scolds him for rushing Akagi. Couldn't help it. She hurt not just 𝐒𝐴𝐵, but she was one of the ones who put Yorktown in a coma, John says as Cleveland leaps up to the deck of the Sakura refugee ship. "Is that true, young man?" A woman with black hair and uniform said. She had white horns on her head and an officer's sword at her side. Her yellow eyes had a pained look in them. Behind her were a set of very small girls, barely appearing to be elementary school age, as well as few other ships that seemed to be injured or exhausted, with two each holding a parry of wisdom cubes. John nodded before saying, "Yes, she and a few others attacked us Yorktown. My wife a few months back. She was in a coma until recently." Hearing this makes the horned woman drop to her knees, with what appears to be shame written across her face. She then bows her head in a full 𝐒𝐴𝐵. "I can never apologize for what happened, but we will help to make sure Akagi pays for what she did, and not just to her, but to any others she has hurt. I swear on my name, 𝗵𝗲 of the Sakura Empire." Yes, I made my semi-stand in as a Captain Strong or Popeye kind of character. It just fit too well, and the Navy kinda gets underrepresented in comics when you think about it. Also, if it seems like he's kind of overpowered. That's mostly the point. And the main reason he's winning is because the sirens have less of an element of surprise compared to the first few chapters. Also, I know I'm skipping a lot of what could be really good story beats, but I wanted to get to a bigger mixed story with this and how it could relate to the wider scheme of affecting the world of heroes, especially with rescues and countering crazy people who decide to work with the sirens. When the San Diego fleet returned to base, many were confused by the strange new ships that arrived with them. 𝗏𝗏 had retrieved his cap and coat and began giving orders to all of his ships and the personnel on base. "Villains and medics, I want you to check over the new arrivals after repairing our girls. Quartermasters, help with resupply where needed. And you, 𝗵𝗲, was it?" The dark-haired and yellow-eyed ship nodded while maintaining a stern visage. John told her to follow him to meet with Admiral 𝗵𝗃. It wasn't just the Admiral in his office. Star and Stripe was also there and she had a serious look on her face. "Are we certain, sir? But I thought Germany or the Iron Blood were standing with us." 𝗵𝗃 nods before saying, "They are. But we got a recent report from the East Coast about wolf packs of subs and a few ships that seem to be of Iron Blood may." Hearing this confuses John as well, but the look on 𝗵𝗲's face tell him that she has an idea on what could be going on. "Admiral, I think we may have some new intel on the matter." At John's announcement, the hero and Admiral look up and see the person who came with him. "That uniform isn't American style. What is your name, miss?" 𝗵𝗃 asks while looking over his steepled hands. 𝗵𝗲 seems unsettled by the appearance of the Admiral, but she does not say anything at the moment. She steps forward before giving a slight bow to the Admiral and #1 hero of the U.S. "My name is 𝗵𝗲. IJN 𝗵𝗲. I'm the commander of, well, I guess you could call us deserters from a dangerous alliance, the Crimson Axis." When 𝗵𝗲 says this, all of the humans in the room feel a shiver run down their spines, though 𝗵𝗃 is able to keep it from showing. He clears his throat before gesturing for her to continue. 𝗵𝗲 nods and recounts some of her tale, at how she and her retinue were ships that were not summoned by humans. "We are what you might call forgotten, ignored, or rejected ships. We could feel the people of this world call out, but their calls could not bring us to the front, as if there were those wishing to forget any role we played in the past." She looks down at this in sadness and notes how they all felt as though the world rejected them, and that negativity joined with other feelings of resentment, loss, and anger. The sirens picked up on this and used those feelings to make many ships want to take some measure of revenge, and thus many of us were summoned, and quietly formed the Crimson Axis. 𝗏𝗏 gulped at hearing that and questioned in his mind if there were any American ships that might have felt that same kind of loneliness or anger. Star meanwhile seems to be pitying all of those ships in her own thoughts. 𝗵𝗃 meanwhile nods before noting, I think I can guess the many ships that have felt this. Almost all of the member nation navies of the Axis powers, Germany, Italy, Japan, even some French. 𝗵𝗲 nods to confirm his suspicions. Yes, we know there is a fleet that is Iron Blood or German currently, but their numbers do not compare with the number of ships that have allied with the Sirens, and there are quite a number of 𝐒𝐭𝐲𝐽 Empire as well. So then, why did you and the ones you brought run? If you felt that much anger that you were willing to aid the Sirens, why did you run? Star asks in a bit of confusion. 𝗵𝗲 looks down before admitting it was mostly for the younger members of their fleet. The Sirens were doing experiments, invasive and painful ones. It was one thing for we battleships or carriers to endure it. It is another to force ones as innocent as the 𝗵𝗲s to undergo the pain, 𝗵𝗲 said while rubbing her wrist. John's eyes widened and he caught her arm. He held it up before pulling back her sleeve, and they all could see the number of scars that were littering her forearm alone. The humans in the room gasped before Star walked over and hugged 𝗵𝗲. Don't worry, we won't let them take you or anyone else, Star whispered while John and 𝗵𝗲 were mentally vowing the same. 𝗵𝗲 isn't sure what to think about the hug and just thanked Star before asking if she could let her go. John shook his head before asking a burning question on his mind. That 𝐒𝐭𝐲 person was only one of the ones behind an attack on a convoy in Yorktown, right? 𝗵𝗲 looks into the commander's eyes and sees what he was really asking. Was she one of the ones who hurt my wife? 𝗵𝗲 gulps a bit before admitting to the attack and how their group celebrated at the moment for the success of the attack. As soon as she said that she could feel the anger rolling off of John in furious waves, he takes a moment to calm down and keep from wishing to go after all of the ships. 𝗵𝗲 takes the moment to shift focus again to ask what the purpose of the experiments were. I'm not sure on every part, but I think some of it was to replicate us and make swarms of ships. That would explain a few of the ships we saw during the last attack, John notes while cupping his chin. He then asks where the Sirens and the 𝐒𝐭𝐲 ships were based out of in the Pacific. 𝗵𝗲 looks a bit sheepish before explaining, I don't exactly know. We were just running as fast as we could. We barely noticed where we were. I honestly didn't expect that we'd run into Eagle Union ships. Flat looks are given to the battleship with 𝗵𝗲 acknowledging that they were likely more focused on saving themselves. We'll need a count of the ships that are with you. You mentioned the 𝗵𝗲 class, but we need to know the others. 𝗵𝗲 agrees and gives the list of names for the ships she brought. 𝗵𝗲, Furitaka, Kako, 𝐒𝐭𝐲𝐻𝐼, Inazuma, 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝐻, Fumizuki, Minazuki, Kisaragi, Yuzuki, Mikazuki, and Nagatsuki. To be honest, most of the ships were smaller ones, and we lost 𝗬𝗏 and 𝗬𝗏 on our flight from our captors, their ships and bodies becoming the cubes we brought with us. The commanding officers nod before Star is asked to show 𝗵𝗲 to the barracks. What do we do now? 𝗵𝗲 asks while leaning back in his chair. John walks over to the windows and sees 𝗵𝗲 and Star walking away. I'd like to say we should let them stay here, but I think we need to take them to Japan, if nothing else to give them a chance to protect their homeland, John says while looking out to the sea. 𝗵𝗲 turns his chair toward John and gives him a sideways look. The commander doesn't look him in the eye. In fact, he seems to be avoiding the admiral's gaze. John, you don't have something else in mind, do you? 𝗵𝗲 asks with his large eyes narrowing at the number 2 hero. 𝗬𝗏 tries to play it off, but the old commander can tell something is up, and he puts together what that might be in a few seconds. You're thinking about using them like bait, aren't you? 𝗵𝗲 says with a minor snarl. John's arm tightens up and he can see that he can't deny everything. It's not 100% of what I'm thinking of doing, but I won't deny it as a pleasing idea. If for no other reason than we could cut down some of their shipgirl numbers. You idiot. Do you honestly think Yorktown would agree with that? Or any of the other girls? 𝗵𝗲 says with a consistent furious face. John looks ready to punch his commanding officer, but he holds back as he takes a moment to think on the situation, especially when 𝗵𝗲 points out that he'd be doing almost exactly what the Sirens had done to the ships, used them as tools for the battles. John doesn't dignify the matter with a response. Instead, he turns and heads out of the office to clear his head. When he leaves, he heads for the hospital to check in on Yorktown again. When he arrives, Spence is there with Hornet, Cleveland, and a new face to him. So who is this little one? He asks as the little girl with pink hair and a yellow hat quickly runs behind Cleveland, who just chuckles before saying it was okay. This is the commander, John Kotov, she says while picking up the little one. She had short pink hair and a pink dress. Her eyes were pink as well and they seemed extra tear-filled. Hello, I'm Yuzuki. It's nice to meet you, Shikakan, Yuzuki said shyly. It surprised John on how timid the little ship was, though he chuckled in his mind while thinking, I guess they all aren't fighters. You'd get some who are more scared than anything. John greets the little girl before patting her and Spence on the head. So she is one of the ones that you saved, John? Yorktown asks with a look to her husband. John coughs a bit before saying yes. He fought 𝐒𝐭𝐲 and beat her bad, and though he did seem sleepy after the fight, Yuzuki says with a bit of excitement from her spot on Cleveland's hip. The name of 𝐻𝐭𝐲 though makes Yorktown's arm tense up, and John reaches for it to say that he was with her. Yorktown nods at him before Spence and the rest start sharing stories and talking about other things to pass the time. John stayed silent the whole time while looking between each of the ship girls present, questioning in his mind if he was going too far with his idea. The oldest carrier notices something is off and asks if she could talk to John alone for a moment. Before they leave though, Spence and Yuzuki come over and give Yorktown a hug, with the latter hoping that she gets better soon. "All right, John, what is wrong? You seemed extremely uneasy when you looked at little Yuzuki. What are you thinking about?" Yorktown asks with a serious expression. John looks down and back at her a few times, trying to come up with something, but she knows him too well, so he comes clean about some of what he was thinking, using a few of the refugee ships as bait so he and his girls could maybe get a shot at the Sakura allies of the Sirens, all under the pretense of taking them back to Japan to protect their home. But after seeing Yuzuki, not to mention talking with Mikasa and seeing the scars of what she's been through, I was questioning a lot of it, and started to wonder if I'm. Yorktown stops him from speaking as she places her hand on his lips. She had a suspicion about what was going on, but she let him get out what he needed to say. She leans back on her bed before putting in her own input. "Far be it from me to deny that a bit of vengeance goes a long way. It is one of my skills after all. And from a tactical standpoint, it isn't a poor idea. Bait and traps are common in wartime, and this would be no exception." John is a bit surprised at the way she was approaching his conundrum, giving her a raised eyebrow look as she was speaking. The look changed to one of surprise when Yorktown started her next thought, accentuated by her grabbing the front of his shirt and pulling him to look her in the eye. "On the other hand, I can't believe you would even be thinking of trying to put someone as sweet as Yuzuki in the line of fire, just to get a tactical edge." The look in Yorktown's eyes is enough to tell John that she is very serious and somewhat disappointed. She lets him go before leaning back and saying that it would go against some of the good he had done for some of his own younger ships. "You know what you want to do. But I don't disagree that some of the girls that are here now may want to go to Japan, and that will be their choice," Yorktown says as her husband leans back. He thinks it over a bit more before Yorktown notes that even though they were ships that needed sturdy hands once, they can make their own paths. They may need you for guidance, but they are their own people, born from the experiences of our crews and the men who fought on and with us. "You're right. I'll still make the offer to take some of them to Japan, but I'll leave it to them, not just telling them they'll be returned to Japan, and I'll go with the fleet to protect them. All of those who want to go," John says after thinking about it for a while. Yorktown nods and smiles at her husband before taking his hand once again, telling him to be careful and good luck. The two share a kiss before the nurse comes in to tell him that visiting hours were over. John tells Yorktown he'd be back another day. He heads to the canteen to enjoy a hearty meal and spends some time with his ships, while also watching the refugee ships interact with their sisters and even some of his ships. Cleveland herself seemed especially attached to Yuzuki. He smiles at their interactions and thinks a bit more on when to bring up the idea of taking the ships back to Japan. While he is thinking this though, he gets a call from the Bulins in the docks. "Hey Commander Billy, we've got something for you." "Ta-da," the white-haired Bulin said before showing the man another wisdom cube, when they currently had none in stock. "Explain, how did you get a cube when I know we didn't take out anything that could warrant that?" The head Bulin and a few others preened for a moment before showing some strange shards of what looked like wisdom cube material. "Miss Laffy found these while taking out ships during the fight. They are wisdom shards, and we found that we could put together a number of them to make a whole new cube." John raised an eyebrow at this and asked why they hadn't found anything like this sooner. "We asked one of the Sakura girls about it. Apparently to make some of the copy ships and clones they need to use wisdom cubes. While they don't need to make them for the Siren ships or some of the clones, they apparently need it for Earth ships." The commander hums before picking up the cube and thinking about what it could mean for getting more forces. "How many shards does it take to make a cube?" John asked before attempting to summon something new. The Bulins chuckled nervously before telling him that it took 25 shards to make one cube, so we'd have to sink at least that many copies to get one cube. "Though I don't get why they don't stick to the Siren ships. I think I might have an idea, Commander," Mikasa said from the doorway of the docks. She first asks the Bulins and mechanics how her ship self was doing, before addressing her thought. "I believe they may be looking to use something that is almost abstract with our existence, our wills and feelings that seem to give us and other versions of us an advantage against them." John hums before wondering if it was anything reflective of the hero nature of this world this time around. I mean, it would make sense considering they wanted to test what the heroes could do, so they pushed the heroes to a breaking point and then new heroes take their place. It might. Whoa. As John was talking, the wisdom cube lit up in his hands and started to summon a ship into form. The Bulins and Mikasa also flinched and covered their eyes as the ship came into existence. The girl that came into existence was a silver-haired girl with lilac-gray eyes. She seemed to be wearing a cape-like jacket set up on her arms. Her impressive bosom was barely contained in her black sports bra and thin white shirt. She had a black skirt with a white star accentuating it, and her legs were mostly covered in black pantyhose. One of the most striking things about her, though, was her hands. She appeared to have mechanical prosthetics or maybe gloves on both, that seemed to glow and hum as she held them aloft. Her rigging was an unusual setup, with standard-looking cannons on her right side, while the left seemed to have some sort of special gun on the other side. A belt fed on with a bipod to brace it. Jutting out from the back appeared to be a set of wings that had anti-air guns lining them, while the cannon and gun sections had anchors draping from the machine. "You're the commander. I've always wanted to meet you. I mean, aren't people like you basically heroes trying to save the world? Which kind of makes me your sidekick, right? Oh, I'm Reno, part of the Oakland class. It's a pleasure," the now-named Reno says with a smile. John's eye twitches at her calling him a hero, but he moves past it, especially when one of the other mechanics notes that he actually is a professional hero, currently ranked number 2 in the United States. Reno's eyes light up before running to him and hugging her commander tight. "So you're a real hero and I'm really your sidekick? Ooh, or am I a full hero in my own right?" Reno starts before rambling off a few more questions, which stop when John chops the top of her head. She pouts at him before lighting up at him, mentioning that the number 1 hero was on the base as well. "She's probably still at the mess hall, and you could probably use something to eat anyway," John says while rubbing the top of Reno's head. Her stomach growling is all the response he needs to tell him he's right. "Okay, I'll go see her and get some food. But I'm serious. I want to talk about working with you on regular hero stuff," Reno says as she dashes off to the mess hall. "Such an excitable girl," 𝗵𝗃𝗲 says with a chuckle. John agrees before telling the Sakura ship he was going to do some paperwork before turning in. She offers to aid him, but he just mentions that she had been through enough for the day. "Go on, get some rest. Tomorrow there may be new issues to deal with." 𝗵𝗃𝗲 looks at him odd before bowing and thanking him once more for saving her and the others. John does just like he said and goes over some paperwork, while also considering the potential of what they could face from the Sakura Siren forces. Reno meanwhile had quickly endeared herself to not just the fleet, but Star and Stripe herself, finding the hero-worshipping girl somewhat relatable and entertaining, with a few of the guys being interested in the gadgets on her rigging and other items she apparently made herself. A few days later, John is being bothered by Reno in his office. "Come on, we should go out on patrol, deal with bad guys and keep people safe in the city." John is being shook a few times while sitting in his chair, and he points out that it was supposed to be Reno's day off. "You can go into town on your own after all, or you could go with one of the other girls who has the day off." Reno pouts again before telling him that was boring, and she wanted to go with him. John resists a bit longer until she knocks over his calendar. His eyes widen when he notices the month, not to mention what was coming up soon. "Shoot, I need to go," and before he can even finish his sentence, Reno knows she has her opening. She leans on him a bit before pointing out that she could maybe help with what he needed to buy or find. John grumbles a bit before agreeing to go with the girl. She celebrates and announces that Commander Brawl and Cyber Brawl are coming for you baddies. John just chops the top of her head before reminding her that they's something important to get. Fate seems to be conspiring against him though. After a few hours of exploring town and then stopping at a jewelry store for what he needed, a crash was heard a street away. "You're going to drag me to the commander," doesn't even get to finish his complaint as Reno takes his arm and pulls him along to find a pair of villains attacking some shops. While most villains had stopped attacking and rampaging after the start of Siren War, with 2 major fleets on the west coast, some had started to slip into old habits. One appeared to be a bulky bruiser with a transform quirk that made him look like a monster. The other, though, seemed to be more speed-oriented, given the rockets on his back. John sighs before saying, "I guess I am here, so it's time to take them down." Before he can get started though, Reno jumps on him to put his cap on his head and his commander's jacket over his shoulders, with a few medals gleaming in the sun. "Wait, when did you get this? Or my medals?" Reno shrugs before mentioning that she grabbed them while he was changing to go out. "All right, you villains, I suggest you stop now, before the brawlers get serious," Reno announces before firing some warning blasts from her gauntlets. It startles the villains and they both recognize John. While the jet villain looks ready to run, the bigger guy looks like he wants to fight 𝗂𝐴. "All right, if I take down the number 2, my rep will skyrocket." John raises his eyebrow as a punch from the fully transformed villain is thrown. "Only about 50%, I'd say," John thinks before putting up his hand, activating his quick, and stopping the attack. He then tosses the villain's hand into the air before punching him in the stomach. As his partner is rolling back, the jet villain starts up his own quirk and tries to get away with the spoils. "Oh no you don't," Reno shouts before summoning her rigging, adjusting pieces of it to help her catch up. by using the modified anchors, chains, and a specialized launcher she made to grapple and catch up with him. She uses that plus some jet blasting from her gauntlets to catch up to the villain. Even when it tries to throw her off with some funky maneuvers only someone with a quirk could do, she easily predicts where he is going and intercepts him. Take this, Reno Barrage. Reno shouts before firing shots from her gauntlets, lower power rounds from her cannons, and special taser rounds from the gun on her left side. All of these shots impact the villain and stop him in his tracks. While he is still groaning in pain, Reno unleashes another device to restrain the villain to the ground. How do you like that? Villain defeated, Reno says with a peace sign and a big smile on her face. To a few bystanders' delight as they start snapping pictures of her. Back with John though, he is easily countering all of the attacks the beast villain is throwing at him, even at one point jumping up and landing atop his opponent's arm, glowering at him while the hero's arms are crossed in his signature way. Cocky bastard, the villain shouts before swiping at the commander. But the military hero quickly throws out his fist to impact his opponents, knocking it away while destabilizing the enemy. As the villain was spinning and coming down, John got right under where the villain would land for his next attack. He flip-kicked the chin of the beast villain and sent him up into the air. While the villain was dazed by that, John leapt up and grabbed the man by the arm, throwing him toward an empty lot. As the villain was coming to in the lot, John was on top of him again, punching the villain in the face to knock him out. That was a pain. Wonder if Reno is okay, John says while dusting his hands off. With the police arriving, John could hand off the villain, and he found out what happened with Reno. Is this girl your sidekick, sir? She says that, but she doesn't have a license. John lets out an annoyed sigh before saying, it's fine. She's not exactly human in the same way you may be used to. This is us, Reno, a light cruiser with my fleet. I was showing her around the city while running an errand. A few who heard that started snapping even more pictures and posting about a ship girl being a hero on land and at sea, let alone proclaiming herself the sidekick to the #2 hero. Something Star and Yorktown teased John about later. Not helping Yorkie, but I guess I should just accept it at this point. Anyway, I at least got what I was hoping for while in town, John says before pulling out a box. Yorktown's eyes widen and she gasps a bit when she opens it. It was a pendant with diamond and peridot loops in white gold. Happy anniversary, John said with a little blush. Yorktown teared up a bit while looking at her husband and the gift. She asks him to help her put it on, and it shined nicely against her skin. She reaches up with her remaining arm and pulls John down to kiss him, only for them to be startled when the door is open. Hey sis, sorry did we interrupt, Hornet says with a shit-eating grin, while Spence is blushing, at least until she saw the pendant around Yorktown's neck. So you were wanting to bring Mom something too? Spence asked before walking forward with a little box. When Yorktown opened it, there were snacks contained within. Yorktown's favorite set of sweets. Thank you, sweetie. I'll be sure to enjoy these, Yorktown says with a kiss to the top of Spence's head. The Destroyer girl then mentions that she had worked with some of the other girls to make something for John at home, that being a cake that John was happy to share with Spence. Hornet, Star, Cleveland, and Yuzaki, the little Mutsuki becoming like a daughter to the cruiser. So, you two have anything you want to say? John says while noting how close Star and Hornet were sitting together. This makes both women blush a bit and they each try to deny anything. Hornet, Yorktown has already told me about your tells when you lie, and I think I know you well enough now, Kate. Star or Kate turns her head to his side and scratches her cheek before admitting that they were seeing what could happen with both of them. You got a problem with that, Kate says with a slight glare at John. He gives her a look and says, no, why would I? Honestly, I'm just glad my little sister-in-law now has someone she really cares about, and it's someone I can trust. John's phrasing make both women blush a bit, with Star admitting that she assumed he'd have more of a problem given where he was from. Frankly, it doesn't matter that much. There weren't that many who were gay or whatever, but most of us back home saw it more like it was just one thing about a person, and that it really didn't matter, and that it wasn't something to get up in arms about. We all had bigger things to worry about. Kate just gives a hug before shrugging and thanking John, and her girlfriend thanks John as well, with all the others laughing at their interactions, especially when Hornet asks if he and Cleveland were getting closer. Well, let's just say we've both gotten really close as of late, Cleveland says with a crimson blush and looking to the side. John coughs as Hornet and Kate put the facts together, teasing the cruiser girl but confusing the two destroyers. They all enjoy the cake before all of the ships head back to their barracks, but not before John passes something to Cleveland, some that makes her blush in embarrassment, smile in happiness, and squirm with excitement, all at the same time. A day or two after this event, John brings forth the idea to take some of the Sakura Empire ships back to Japan. I know a few of you have gotten to know the people on the base, so if you want to stay you are more than welcome. But I know some of you have been thinking about your home and how to protect it from the sirens and the Crimson Axis. As such, my fleet and I will escort all of you who want to go. Mikasa is the first to step up and agrees to go. I believe our homeland's commanders might benefit from the wisdom I have. Inazuma and Ikazuchi also say they want to go. The Mutsuki sisters, though, are more divided. Yuzuki seems unsure herself and grabs onto Cleveland's arm, cementing that she wanted to stay in America. Nagatsuki was also one who wanted to stay, as she was having fun with all of the Destroyer girls on base. Plus, Max and some of Star's squad had started treating her and Minazuki like family as well. Mutsuki, Kisaragi, Fumizuki, and Mikazuki, though, want to go back to Japan. With the refugees who were going decided, John announced the ships he was taking to Japan: New Jersey, Reno, Laffey, San Francisco, Ticonderoga. Boys, in Baton, the named ships stand before saluting the commander, with Mikasa bowing to her escorts back to her homeland. The day they were set to leave, all of John's ships saw him off. "Be careful, Daddy," Spence said with a hug, with the man telling her he'd bring back some souvenirs from Japan. "Hopefully you can help those folks over there as well. Who knows if the Sirens have decided to ramp up their attacks to take Japan," Alabama says with a nod to her commander. She was currently in command of the ships alongside Cleveland, who herself was wearing the ring he gave her a few days ago. She blushed before telling him to come back safe. "To all of us," the cruiser said before jumping up to kiss him. After she dropped back down, she helped Yorktown stand on her new legs and see her husband off. "I'm glad you two finally moved forward. And you heard her. Bring them all home and come back safe yourself." As Yorktown said this, she leaned in and kissed the man she loved passionately, making the destroyers gag, blush, or question what was going on, while some of the less mature cruisers took their time teasing all three, with Hornet and Star being some of the last to see the fleet off. "Take care of everyone, Kate. I'll be back," John said with an extended hand. She took it before pulling him in for a hug, making his back crack a bit, and the strain of the hug increased when Hornet jumped in as well, before kissing his cheek and saying, "Good luck, bro." With the goodbyes done, John rode aboard New Jersey for the trip, all of the girls having fully stocked holds of food and other ammo for the likely battles to come, while the Sakura girls were at the center of the formation aboard Mikasa. "All right, fleet ahead full. We're off to the land of the rising sun." The chosen ships of the San Diego fleet had been sailing for about a month, intercepting a few Siren fleets wandering about the Pacific. As such, many in the fleet were getting exhausted. "Commander, can Laffey take a nap now?" Laffey asked during a quieter moment during the trip. John wasn't too sure about switching out his girls for the ones he was taking back to Japan, given they didn't have ships of their own. But Mutsuki and Fumizuki make their rigs appear and then rush over to Laffey's ship. "Laffey Nichin, you can take a nap for a bit. We'll make sure your ship stays on course," Mutsuki says before offering Laffey some candy. Laffey nods before accepting the candy and going to her cabin to nap. John lets out a breath before sitting back in the command chair of New Jersey's bridge. New Jersey laughs a bit before saying, "They know how to surprise you, and don't you just love it?" The commander gives her a look before leaning back. Something that made John uneasy was that the latter half of the month had just been Siren-only ships. "We saw a few of the Sakura ships when we first departed, but since we crossed the international date line, it's just been the same ships we're used to." "I know what you mean. It's unsettling. I hope nothing is happening back home, or in Japan," Jersey says before using her radar to get a long-range scan of the area. John keeps his eyes on the horizon for threats, while also thinking that she just raised a major red flag, and it was paid off, but not on the San Diego fleet. Over the last week or so before they would arrive in Japan, the nation had been getting bombarded by renewed and unusual attacks from the Sirens, as well as some planes and ships that made little sense. "Are you sure what attacked us that last time were some Zeros?" Izuku questioned while Yudachi and a few others who were recovering in the medical wing. The dog morph nodded before saying, "They definitely used Sakura tactics as well. Not only that, but I'm sure one of the ships I charged into fighting was similar to a Mutsuki class and a Fubuki class." Izuku let out a stressed sigh before thanking the girls, as well as assuring them they would have a few days off to heal. "I'll rework the duty roster. You six need a break. And you, there's someone here who wants to see you." With that, Izuku opened the door and showed Uri in to check in on her big sister. Both of them smiled and hugged each other. Yudachi asked what Uri had been up to, and the little girl talked about her spending time with some of the other ship girls and a few of the daughters of the soldiers on base. The commander of Mongol base smiled before turning to leave. "Well, at least that's done. Now comes the worst part," Izuku thought aloud before Nagato joined him to talk with the admirals and other members of the brass. For the next hour or so, he and Himori were getting reamed out for the recent uptick in attacks and damage to the cities of Japan, not to mention all of the ripple effects from the panic and fear of what could be happening. People moving away from the coasts, rising rates of looters, nutcases claiming the end of the world, and then there's the latest where the media have been claiming that the military is looking to take over, given the reports and images of planes we've seen your girls using. Izuku growled before reiterating that it definitely wasn't one of his girls or from Himori's fleet. We don't have enough information to make any moves or take any actions. All I can say is that some of my own ships did confirm they were using Sakura tactics as well as ships and aircraft. The Oni-looking woman agrees and tells the top members that they had been doing all they could. But the attacks have been hitting us with a fervor we haven't seen for years. We don't even know if this is just happening here or elsewhere. Well, you had better find out soon, or we will take more direct control of the situation and the ships, one admiral said with finality before hanging up. A few of the others had similar thoughts but were less confrontational about it. Both of the ship girl commanders let out stress sighs with the calls wrapping up. This is getting out of hand. Where did the sirens get Sakura or Japanese ships? And why are they using them? Himori questions while resting her head on her desk. I have no idea. This is just crazy. And now we're under threat of losing everything we've worked to do for and with our girls, Izuku says while leaning back. Nagato places a hand on Izuku's shoulder before patting him on the head. Himori meanwhile is getting her shoulders massaged by Hiei, and feeling the battleship woman's generous bosom pressing against her back. But she didn't complain as the massage felt too good to ask her to stop. After a minute or so, Izuku asked if the ships knew anything. Nagato hummed before admitting that they had turned against their allies of Azur Lane before, explaining that it was an international alliance of all shipgirls when Izuku looked at her funny. We along with a few other nations' ships went against Azur Lane to use siren technology to defeat them. Yes, we thought it would help us to better protect humanity by taking whatever we could to defeat them. But it more often than not blew up in our face, Hiei says with a sigh. Himori peeks up at her before asking if they were crazy. That tech is dangerous and risky. Izuku had to clean up a whole incident when some nutcases stole that after all. The green-haired teen groaned while thinking back a year ago. A few technicians from Deternet had requisitioned some remains of the alien technology through a military connection. They claimed to be looking to find a weakness that could be exploited. But instead, they did something crazy and tried to make support items for those with quirks, hoping to improve their potential and be able to fight the sirens. All it did in the end was take over multiple civilians of Deku City, with a death toll in the thousands. Due to this incident, Deternet was shut down and many of the members were arrested, the CEO being put in one of the higher security sections under constant surveillance. The Hearts and Minds party leader was also arrested and the party itself was dissolved, with many of the members scattering to the wind, if they weren't arrested for various crimes that had been covered up. Thus the city, and by extension the Meta Liberation Army, were destroyed, with the only members who were still free being Genten and Curious. The latter was only able to avoid persecution due to being away from the city at the time. The former, though, had lost an arm during the whole matter by trying to stop his fellow members. As such, most thought he was dead. The destruction was only stemmed at the city due to Izuku taking point and directing all of the heroes and his shipgirls to restrain or take out those who might be controlled by the sirens. His efficient commands, planning, and even taking out a few siren-controlled entities himself had earned him some praise among the populace. I don't want to think about that. It was bad enough that we had to clean up that. You know what, fuck it. We had to clean up that fucking mess because those idiots thought they could play with goddamn eldritch horror tech. I still have nightmares about what it did to some of them. After Izuku had ranted for a bit, Himori chuckled before asking if he felt better. His only response was a little, and as he groaned in his chair, Nagato coughed a bit before acknowledging that it was a foolish plan by those who stole the siren technology, and various other versions of us have found how hard it is to deal with, sometimes to our detriment. We had been fortunate in some of those timelines. Azur Lane was willing to forgive us and help us to stop the foolishness we unleashed. Izuku nodded, but his musings were cut short when the alarm rang out. He rushed over to the command center and ordered a status update. A few fleets have been spotted with the long-range radar, sir. We have aircraft incoming. No reports of submarines, but we should be ready. The young commander nodded before sounding general quarters. Hiei, your flagship for the intercept fleet. Take Katsuragi and Shinano for the main fleet. Ayanami, Kinu, and Uedachi, you're the vanguard. After a quick set of Rogers from the girl in question, he ordered Nagato to take Kirishima and Kongo as a defense fleet, with Atego, Akatsuki, and Sendai as the vanguards. Akashi, I want you and the rest of the Bulans on standby to help the injured. Kawakazi, you and Nagara be ready in case something come ashore, or if you have to switch with the others. His girls give their affirmatives before setting out to do their duty, with Izuku planning and observing an unease. And the unease grows as the battle begins. What the? Why are there repis along with Shindens? Calm yourselves. Fate may be written, but ours have yet to be fulfilled. Shinano is the one saying this before launching a flight of her own planes. Her eyes then glow blue as she boosts the skills of the two destroyers in the fleet, with Ayanami and Uedachi rushing forward as fast as they could to engage any clones and ships. Ambo, here comes the nightmare of Solomon. 𝐒𝐩𝐢𝐳 cries before firing barrages of bullets and torpedoes. When she comes up on some siren clones though, she uses her sharpened nails and fists to deal with them. First clawing out one siren's eye, then using a few punches and kicks to hurt some others. She takes them out with her guns after, but for the last two clones she decides to have a bit of fun. She weaves around the attacks from both before leaping up and slashing the throat of one. While she's in the air, 𝐒𝐩𝐢𝐳 positions herself to grab the other siren's head with her thighs, tossing the invader to the ground or water with her weight and then twisting to snap its neck, though she forgets to check her 6 and gets blasted in the back by a few other ships. This is when 𝐼𝐺𝐼 jumps in. She had chosen to focus on AA for a time while 𝐒𝐩𝐢𝐳 was rampaging. But now that the skies were somewhat clear, she stepped in to help her friend. She slashed a few with her large sword before getting caught in a blade lock with the gauntlets of one siren. A few others tried to take them both out, but 𝐼𝐺𝐼 was ready for this and adjusted her guns and torpedoes to fire around her and distract or take out the opponents. But luckily someone else had stepped in to take out more of the copies. "Feel the sting of my demon blade," Qianu called out before running her finger along the length of her katana. It glowed blue like her eyes as she engaged the enemy and cut a few of them down. While slashing, she fired off as many shots and torpedoes as she could. Qiai meanwhile focused her sight before firing a barrage from her cannons, and her eyes would occasionally glow yellow, and each of her fleetmates could feel their AA and other guns improving in accuracy and power. But this was not the only group attacking. Izuku's suspicions another attack force were proven as Atego and Sendai engaged a few sirens that were closer to the base, the former quickly setting some ablaze while the latter focused on shooting, as well as boosting a sneaky ally. Nagato meanwhile had her eyes fixed on the horizon and the enemy and launched shot after shot to thin the numbers, and Kongo was perfectly poised with her blade pointing out as she fired her main guns, and aided her sister. Akatsuki and Kirishima had taken it upon themselves to sneak in deeper to the enemy formation to see what may be going on, only to be shocked and enraged by what they saw. Sitting at the back of the formation was a high-ranking siren alongside a few ship girls they both knew. Hiyu and Junyu were both at the rear launching planes to attack. This was enough to make Akatsuki leap in first to try to take them out or capture them, but she was stopped by another ally of theirs, that being her own sister Hibiki. Why would you do this to your homeland?" Akatsuki raged as she exchanged blows with her sister and her anchor club. Hibiki snarled as she brought the weight of the weapon down on her sister. "You wouldn't understand. You were called to. You were asked to help. We were left in the abyss." Akatsuki feels her blade breaking and she rolls out of the way to keep from being hurt. Kirishima had wanted to help her little friend, but she was occupied by a different opponent, that being her own sister Haruna, who kept a stoic gaze of fury directed at her sister. Atego wasn't in a much better place as she was facing both Maya and Takao, while Sendai was nursing an injured arm after Mayako had absorbed a number of her shots and then sent them right back to the cruiser. While Izuku wanted to send the other two girls out to aid them, they didn't have that option, as a few siren subs had gotten close and were attacking Mongol base directly. He'd already evacuated most of the non-combatants to shelters, but he refused to just stand aside and let that be the end. "Kawakaze," Izuku shouted as he joined the fray with a few of the soldiers. The destroyer tossed him one of her extra swords as he engaged with gun and blade to protect his base and home. Nagara meanwhile was covering Akatsuki and the villains with her guns as best she could, but she was uneasy about punching them, until one leapt out of the sea to attack her, and she closed her eyes to throw her punch, accidentally decapitating the submarine siren. Kawakaze meanwhile was cutting through the enemy as fast as she could, but she went too far ahead and got blasted a few times for it, her white hair being dyed black from some of the soot from the explosions. As she was knocked on her back from another explosion, she heard a few cries ring out from some of the soldiers, namely a group who were being cut down by a new attacker, one that shocked her. Her eyes gleamed red and her horns seemed longer than Kawakaze remembered, but there was no mistaking the smile on the girl's face, the rigging around her, and the visage of a demon behind her with her Nadachi. "Sakawa," Kawakaze grunted out before being hit with a few shots from the cruister's cannons. Her opponent didn't give her time to recover and quickly brought down her blade atop the destroyer girl, only for both to be surprised when Izuku jumped in and stopped the attack. Sakawa's surprise eased and she said, "Brave boy, and you have a heart that wishes to protect. But I thought you would have learned that we're stronger." Izuku grunted as he felt the blade coming down on his shoulder and cutting it a bit. "Yeah, but I'm human. We're a stubborn bunch, and I've got some guts born from a man inspired by America." Izuku grunts out before positioning just right to shunt the larger blade to the side and away from him and Kawakaze. As Sakawa was thrown off by the weight being sent elsewhere, Izuku brought the blade up and slashed at the cruiser. She dodged, but Izuku managed to leave a decent cut right along her cheek up to her ear. The destroyer girl and the young commander could see the rage roiling in Sakawa's eyes. Before she could engage him again, Kawakaze tossed another sword to Izuku as the two started trading blows, Izuku buying time until Kawakaze was strong enough to help him. But he found himself getting thrown off balance and was unprepared for the attacks from what he assumed was just a visage she projected. And he was quickly disarmed, not just in losing the blades. After throwing him off balance with her tricky blade work, she struck him in the stomach with the large Kashira, and then sliced off his right arm. Izuku was then kicked back with a grunt. While he was struggling to catch his breath and coming to terms with what he just lost, Sakawa was stalking up to him. She raised her blade high to finish the young commander off, a manic grin on her face as she raised it high. But she was caught off guard and injured by Izuku using the blade he'd been knocked to stab the mad cruiser in the stomach. Before she could react again, he pulled himself up a bit and headbutted her in the face. "I'm not going down that easy," Izuku declared while trying to stand tall. He could tell he was losing a lot of blood, but he wasn't about to back down. "I will protect them," he declared in his mind. Sakawa was about to attack again, when Kawakaze leapt in and kicked the rogue ship girl before blasting her with her guns. "You crazy fool, are you trying to die?" she exclaimed before cutting part of her uniform to help with the bleeding. The two weren't sure on what they could do next, but luckily they got a heads up that someone was on the way. "Commander Izuku, this is Commander 𝗂𝗲 of 𝗵𝗃 base. Hold on, we'll help finish this fight." As Kawakaze heard and relayed that, all those fighting could see a ship blistering towards the base. As they were sure it was about to crash into the docks, it quickly dissipated into a mass of cubes, with Laffy and 𝗂𝗲 in the air to help engage. 𝗵𝗃 had been sending out scouts with Ticonderoga and they had spotted the fleet attacking. While a few in the fleet wondered if they should leave this to the ship girls from Japan, a different sight made them want to step in. "Did you say there was a pair of Japanese carriers and a battleship there?" John asked before Mikasa asked for a description of the ships. 𝗵𝗃 identified the carriers as Soryu class, but the battleship I have no idea. I count 4 double cannons. Hold on, I think I see the ship girl. Silver, gray hair, wearing blue, including a fox-like mask, 𝗵𝗃 reported. Mikasa gulped before saying, "That's Tosa. If we engage her, then we need someone strong enough to endure her attacks and hit her back hard." "Sound like my job," New Jersey says with a thumbs up. John agrees and tells the rest of the ships to be ready to engage, at least until Ticonderoga announced that there was a second fleet, and her scouts had picked sight of an infiltration fleet. John was unsure, but part of him wanted to go help the soldiers deal with the infiltration fleet. 𝗏𝗏𝗏, "If you don't mind, sir, I could take command here. If you send Jersey-san and she can keep Tosa busy or defeat her. Meanwhile, you could take a faster ship and get to shore to help the base," Mikasa propositioned. The American commander thought it over for a bit before asking if the girls had any problem with that. At a quick set of negatives, he took a deep breath before calling out to Laffy, "I'm gonna need everything you've got. No sleeping this time." "Understood, Commander. Laffy can sleep later. Right now, there are sirens to stop," Laffy said in her usual tone. She pulled up quickly to New Jersey and John leapt from the command tower to the deck and then to the Laffy. Once he was aboard and in her bridge, Laffy popped her neck a bit. "Hold on, Commander. Deactivating self-imposed limiter," Laffy announced before revving her engines as hard as she could, the bucking and speed of which knocked John off his feet. After running a while, he could tell this was a bit straining and made a mental note to make sure to get her some good booze and food when they landed. "For now, though, we've got to save that base," John thought as they sped towards 𝗏𝗏. When John and Laffy arrived, they were both a bit disoriented, but quickly gained their bearings. Laffy shook her head before spotting some clones accosting Nagara and the repair crews. "You leave them alone," she declared before pointing her guns. She unleashed a few shots while running toward the group. A few tried to engage her hand-to-hand, but she quickly showed how strong her remodeled legs were and kicked a few so hard they were sent flying, or broke some of the cannons and launchers. Or with one flip kick, she took a clone's head off. When a few seemed better at hand-to-hand, she countered and blocked with her gun set up, before getting in under their guards and shooting them in the stomach or face. A few others she grappled to the ground before breaking other parts and then tossing explosives at them, even joint locking some and maneuvering them into position to get shot by their allies. One of those she pushed towards them, and when the clone was caught, they didn't notice the depth charge Laffy had rigged like a grenade was stuck to them, and she blew up 3 clones. She did get knocked to her back at one point, and Nagara stepped in to help. But after Laffy shook out of her daze, she picked up something the Oni girl had dropped. A needle-like piece had fallen from the back of her rig, and Laffy picked it up. The destroyer then used the needle to pierce the sides, foreheads, and throats of a few of the sirens, finishing one more off by punching the implement through the hardest siren. She was breathing heavily at this point and then started to collapse. Nagara caught the bunny destroyer in her arms and bosom. "Laffy needs so much sleep. Good night," Laffy said before resting in Nagara's arms, lap, and breasts. The cruiser thanks the girl as the battle is winding down. While Laffy was helping the besieged repair crews, John had found Izuku and Kawakaze, as well as the angry Sakawa. He powered up his quirk before engaging, only to be surprised when he met the sheath of her Nadachi and then got blasted back by her cannons. She started to taunt him, but he didn't give her the chance and fired a few rockets from his prosthetic kneecap. He engaged the woman fist, gun, and prosthetic against her sword and guns. They went back and forth for a while until some flares were lit in the distance. The cruiser girl snarled before saying, "You've earned a reprieve for now, but I will finish this someday." She then fires her cannons to knock John back. Before she leaves though, she asks Izuku's name, though barely holding on to consciousness. He tells her with his determined fire still burning in his eyes, "I will remember it, you mad fool of a commander," Sakawa says before leaping back onto the sea. While John is tempted to go after her, he felt it would be better to help the injured at the base. Back out at sea, 𝐒𝐫zy had surprised and done some damage to Tosa, but she had been injured a bit back due to the Sakura ship's allies. Ticonderoga and Baton did all they could to clear the skies and help the two carriers of the Mongol fleet, while the other girls aided whoever they could until the enemies retreated. With Izuku and a few others being rushed off to the John took command of the base and the ship girls to be ready for the next attacks. When his fleet and the intercept fleet had returned, Mikasa and the others gave him the rundown, and a few asked what happened to the others on the base. John sighed before telling them they'd see for themselves. As they were leaving to get repaired or check on others, John was gathering himself and wincing at some of the pains from the burns and attacks from the rogue ship girl. "Didn't expect this when I came here, but now, the Siren War has started a new phase." John thinks aloud as the sun sets. "So that got a bit more intense than I had been thinking. But I have something special in mind for Izuku. Not only that, but I wanted to show why some wanted to ally with the Sirens, as well as noting those who were rogue and very dangerous. But don't worry, they'll all stand tall from this.